to the History Things podcast, a conversational approach to discussing social, industrial, maritime, music, and military history. Join us and our special guests as we dive down the rabbit holes of your favorite stories from the past. Follow the History Things podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or online at Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Be sure to leave a review and a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast app. Pat and Parker are coming right up. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy the show.
Feel it. That's right. Can you feel it, Matt?
I can feel it, Pat. And it hurts.
Yeah, I love that you're not a heavy metal fan.
I am totally into this.
Evils of the Earth. I can't believe
You're very
this
convincing.
Song.
Who is this, Alice Cooper?
This is a band called Civil War. And this song is called Custer's Last Stand.
Nice.
Because we are here today to talk about the Battle of Little Bighorn.
Yeah. Yeah,
oh my
baby.
Goodness. I never get to introduce the show the way that I normally do when you're on because I just want to get right to having fun. Normally I'm like, what's up? And there's all this stuff, but I'm like, nah, we're just getting into it.
Plus, I kind of make it my goal to just screw up your whole thing.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. I'm Pat McGuire. This is the History Things podcast. I'm sitting here with a full house in the studio today. First joining me is the co-host of the show, producer turned co-host turned, honestly, administrative extraordinaire in the early season of doing things here as recording time. Parker's been hitting grand slams, chasing home run records here. So I'm joined by Parker Russell. What's up, buddy? How are you?
Oh, pretty good. I'm pretty happy about the news that dropped today about your guys.
Oh, about the Yankees, and now you can have beards?
Yeah.
Yeah, by the time you're hearing this, that's old
runs.
news, but that's huge news right now. So.
Speaking of chasing records.
Very excited about that. And we're joined by some esteemed colleagues of ours, podcast legends in their own right.
That's true.
A voice you're familiar with. We'll start with the co-host of the Addressing Gettysburg podcast.
I have multiple personalities. I'm my own co-host.
Matt Callery is back, and we just hung out with him earlier this year, but he's back to co-pilot this one, potentially derail it. But Matt Callery, how are you, big guy?
Hey, Pat, how are you? I'm fine.
I'm excited.
Fine.
You're back.
I'm excited about this. And I also...
We just cleaned up.
What?
From your first time here. We just finished the wreckage was everywhere.
It was everywhere. But I'm hearing people really liked it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And also hated it. No, I'm just kidding. I've only heard the good things. So anyway,
are you here basically just to tell us the show is canceled?
The show's over.
Oh, okay.
It's done.
All right.
No, so my
well, that was a short run.
I had a really fun time on that show, as I always do when I come here. I look forward to the annual visit. And afterwards, you said, you want to come back on and let's do a Gettysburg show. And I demurred. I said, nah,
very demure.
I'm very demure.
Very.
I said, I don't want to do that because I don't really. On my show, I don't present myself as the historian, right? As the expert. I talk to them and stuff, and I've forgotten more about the Battle of Gettysburg than I probably ever knew, if that makes any sense.
It does.
And so I said, but how about this? What if me and Jim Hessler come down and we do a show about the Little Bighorn?
That's right.
Because I have to tell you, out of the, let's say, the top 10 most highly rated, most viewed, most commented on, whatever shows that Addressing Gettysburg has, it is the one I did with Jim about the Battle of the Little Bighorn.
Well, let's get to it then. Man needs no introduction, but he's getting one anyway. If you're a Gettys nerd and you've been to the battlefield, if you've hung around the circles that... Honestly, if you're hanging around the circles that Matt Callery frequents, you should examine some things. But but you're probably familiar with him from his hosting duties on the Battle of Gettysburg podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, Jim Hessler joins us. Jim, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you guys. Thanks for having me. Matt, I love you. I'm not sure demure is a word, but I get the point there, and I appreciate the invite, and I'm glad to finally be here because I know we've talked about this a few times.
Yeah.
Matt Callery made it happen.
Very exciting. That's why we allowed him in the room for this. We're like, you can be here.
And he gave me a ride.
I guess
That's
right,
even better.
right,
That's
right.
That is even better.
I like making things happen. By the way, before we get it, I forgot to do this when I
Okay,
was
do
talking.
it.
I have a gift for you here.
You have a gift for me.
Now, this is my favorite Custer book or Battle of Little Bighorn book I've ever found. I actually, when I go to a used bookstore and I find copies of these, which, there's a lot of copies at used bookstores of these. I wonder if people don't like it, but I don't know why.
But I think the audience is just dying off, I think.
You think that's what it is?
Yes.
So I pick if there's like 3 of them, I buy all 3 of them because I give them out to people when we talk
yeah?
about this because I think because it is. Would Jim agree with me, Jim, that Son of the Morning Star by by Evan S. Connell? Or is it Cannell?
I always say Cannell, but
You do?
he's no longer with us, so I
then
don't
who
think
cares?
he cares.
Yeah. He wrote this, I think, great book because it is rich with detail and it covers both sides, and it doesn't just start with the battle. It goes way back.
Oh, context. I love context.
It's got tons of context, tons of colorful characters. It is just a really good book. There was a TV miniseries made out of it back in 91.
I was going to say, I think I've seen parts of that.
With Gary
off
Cole.
of Space Cole.
Yes.
With George Armstrong.
Right?
Custer.
Yeah.
And the sweet Rosanna Arquette as Libby Custer.
That's a young Rosanna Arquette.
It was, and I thought it was really good. The battle scenes are good. I just really enjoy it, and I think if anybody's going to get into this, I mean, it's a bit of a slog, I would say.
It's a thick book. It's not.
Well, it's a thick book, but also because of all the detail, it can be confusing.
You think so? I mean, it's
for a newbie. I mean,
it's not a linear narrative. So as Matt kind of alluded to, it starts here and then goes back and forth. But you will love it. It's the one that got me started.
Yeah,
I'm into it.
You know, here we are today.
That's for you.
Dude,
there.
thank you so much.
I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah,
And
thanks.
there's a little
Appreciate that.
inscription inside. And
It says, never forget who made you.
it says your dragon.
It says your tits are dragon. That's right. Oh, my goodness. That's very awesome. Thank you.
Is that Rosanna Arquette's inscription?
Yeah.
No, hers were perky.
There's an inscription from Matt. It says, to Parker,
No.
came from somewhere back in her long ago. Sentimental fool trying hard to recreate what had yet to be created.
Are you?
Thank you so much, Matt. That means a lot. Never come near.
Dude, you guys. Do you like when I promote your episode for no reason at all? I just like attach Michael McDonald music to people. Are like, what does this have to do with that? Yeah. That's how I do the show now. It's
I'm
only
sitting
for
here in
me.
the studio and I don't get it.
These guys, Jim,
Okay. This
Jim,
is a
these
long
guys,
time.
these guys between an episode we did on Matt's show and the opener of when Matt came down to be on our show probably gave us 40 minutes of Michael McDonald impressions between cutting room floor audio, stuff that made it, stuff that whatever, but these guys know the words to all the songs.
It's a tragedy.
Yeah,
it's really what it's a tragedy to the
Travesty.
It's a travesty. It's a human rights violation. Really, is what it is.
It's all right.
It's very demure.
So, question for both you guys, because you guys both share this distinction of your names are synonymous with the modern way we talk about Gettysburg. Your guides, your podcast hosts.
When we're not feuding.
Right. Yeah, when you guys are beefing.
Right.
That was so old. Is that a thing?
It never was a thing.
Can we get in on it? Like, can we all beef now? Like,
Sure.
Like, both your shows.
Get on the beef.
You guys suck. Losers.
Wow.
The good old
I didn't realize. Is
the good old
that
days of
still a
podcasting.
thing? Like, is the
No,
perceived
it really
beef? Is that like?
The perceived.
That's what I
belief.
mean. Like, that's like, is that a thing?
No, I think people
Figured out that they're
I think they
stupid.
finally moved on. I think so, right?
Yeah, I think Jim and I have talked about it enough on my show where I think they probably feel dumb about it.
Good.
Hopefully feel dumb about it.
Ashamed.
What they don't know is you
They
guys.
should be ashamed.
They should be ashamed.
You guys beat the shit out of each other behind Gettysburg Eddies just to settle it.
We did. Well, that's
People
how we
don't
became
realize that
friends.
happened.
Yeah, we became friends from a fight.
What people don't realize is your guys are like Don Felder and Glenn Fry. Like, it's just like
It was that same night you showed up to Harwig, shit house hammered, and he was like, "Get out of here!" You're like, "I need to fight somebody."
Yeah, give me Hessler. I'm out for blood.
the Gettysburg podcast wars.
That's right. So being Gettysburg guys, all right, we're not here to talk about Gettysburg.
Wait,
now,
what?
Now,
We're not?
right now, the guy that one of the guys that's critical to this story is a veteran of the Battle of Gettysburg.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say Gettysburg
Made his
because I'm not
name
from the
there.
town. But let's get into how do you guys come to the story of the Battle of Little Bighorn? We just kind of touched on it with you, Callery, through this book. How old were you when you read the book?
I was in high school. I saw the movie.
So this was Nixon administration.
Yeah.
And you were about 38?
I saw the movie. What? Shut up.
You were about 38.
I was about. Yeah. I was in my late 30s, just finishing high school. And I remember I read it on the beach during the summer.
Nice
I
beach
could
book.
not put it down.
Yeah.
No, it isn't.
No, that's my point.
Because the writing is really small in the copy that I had. It was a soft cover that had a picture of a screenshot of Gary Cole
Oh yeah,
on the front.
yeah.
I still have it at home, and the writing is so tiny. Now, at that age, I still had good eyes, so it wasn't that big a deal.
Yeah.
But I remember sitting on the beach and just for hours, just reading this thing. Everybody's frolicking around me. I'm like,
Having
screw that. I
fun,
can't put this down.
Enjoying the
Yeah.
sunshine.
Because my favorite, well, not my favorite, but my first introduction. No, it's not even my first introduction. But the one that really stuck with me, the Gettysburg of Custer films, is Son of the Morning Star.
Okay.
And so I saw that when it was on TV. We taped it, and I watched it over and over again.
God, do you remember taping things?
I do.
Oh, yeah.
I do.
What a
yeah.
vibe.
I know. And
And then what was up
it
with the
was
FBI
awful.
guy always warning me not to tape things?
yeah.
I don't know, but he sure was involved in a lot of films.
How you gonna know, FBI guy?
Yeah.
So anyway,
I'm told anyway. That never happened. I'm just told.
I found the book once at a used bookstore.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I didn't know there was a book based on it because I don't read the credits. And so I started reading the book in high school, and I just couldn't put it down because the miniseries starts at the end, like the book does.
The book does.
And I love stories that start at the end because now it's like, okay, so we know the guy dies. We know it's over.
I was going to say, does it just show like a plastered out, punctured Custer?
Well, we can
Well,
get
it's-
into that later. He
yeah.
wasn't very punctured.
Okay, good, because I don't
Yeah.
know that much about it. I just know that he
Well,
went
as
down
much as you
here.
could show on network TV, because remember, this was an ABC TV
Right.
primetime
Oh,
affair, so you
okay.
couldn't, you couldn't get too graphic.
So it wasn't
'cause-
even like TNT. It was like on prime time,
yeah.
like
Correct,
main
right,
channels.
Yeah. It was
Okay.
it was a 2-episode miniseries.
Back in the dark ages when you had 3 networks and Fox.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
how
True.
Yeah.
Right?
And they anyway, so
Yeah.
but my first introduction to it was Errol Flynn, They Died with Their Boots On,
Ah, yes.
which I watched again recently. Terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible historically. Entertaining. It's
Very.
if you just want to
Right.
sit back for a night, it's a super entertaining.
Yeah.
But there isn't a scrap of historical accuracy in the whole movie.
No.
But it set off a generation or generations of Custer enthusiasts who they want George Armstrong Custer not to be Gary Office Space
Right.
Brady Bunch Cole.
Right. Thank you for mentioning the Brady Bunch.
They
He
want-
One of
was-
my
they
favorite
want-
Gary Cole
yeah.
performances.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the bell bottoms and,
Yeah.
and the perm and all that. They want Custer to be Errol Flynn.
Oh, absolutely.
And so it's had a huge influence, even though, like we said, not a scrap of historical.
So it's not as
accuracy in the
historical
film.
as something that, is very historically accurate to say F Troop.
Probably in the same ballpark. Yeah,
Yeah.
probably up, probably right up there. Yeah,
Have
yeah.
I dated myself again?
How dubious. Yeah, no, that for sure dates you, but that's the one that I get that one.
Yeah.
I'm old enough to know that. So, Jim, is that how you come to this too? Through sort of the pop culture, like you saw Son of the Morning Star? Actually, or
Yeah.
we're talking about Errol Flynn probably a little earlier, right? Younger guys?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to be the uninteresting guest and just say ditto, but a very similar path. It was so when I was a kid. I'm about 10, 15 years younger than Matt, I think. But when I was a kid,
Definitely if we're going by hair color.
right.
You still have your color.
You're blonding.
I'm blonding. Yeah.
They died with their boots on.
Right.
It's a 1940s movie, and I do not go that far back,
Sure,
but it was often on late night TV, and it was the same sort of thing. Got entranced with this idea of the last stand, this long-haired dude with the big red scarf, cowboys and Indians, the whole 9 yards. Son of the Morning Star was also the book that I cut my teeth on. It came out when I was in junior high school. I kind of forget about where I was, but about high school. And similar situation that I love the book. Now, I didn't read it on the beach. I grew up in Buffalo. We didn't really have beaches in Buffalo.
Oh, that's rough.
I fell in
on the
love with
ski
it.
slopes.
And what you realize, though, like Gettysburg, there are thousands of Custer Little Bighorn books. So this is literally just going through, entering the wormhole,
Yeah.
the
And
And the
rabbit
other
hole,
thing
whatever you
about
wanna-
the Little Bighorn that you realize, like Gettysburg, is that it has its myths, and then when you find out the reality, sometimes the myth seems stupid, or it's kind of stupid that reality is what it was. It's less exciting.
I bet you we're going to live in a very different world than the very basic understanding I have that the 7th Cavalry just trotted off to glory and Custer's death, right? That's kind of what you grow up with, right?
Yeah. But and there's so many history enthusiasts, Civil War enthusiasts, Gettysburg enthusiasts who still buy into that.
Yeah.
It's a really hard myth.
Well, why don't we start?
Documentation doesn't matter. You know this,
Well,
right? You could prove something a million times over, and they'll be like, no.
Yeah.
Right.
Shelby Foote told me.
Yeah.
And frankly, it's worse today. We say
Yeah.
this is all podcasts.
Yeah.
It's worse today in this digital age.
Yeah.
It's not getting any easier.
I was telling Pat before the episode started that I've been interested in this since I was like 12, 13.
Yeah.
That's Roosevelt administration.
I grew up. Yes, first Teddy, not even FDR.
He was a good man.
Yes, yeah.
See, Parker, you go a step too far every time.
I know, right?
Just let it lie
go.
with Pat, and then you just move on.
My dad voted for Cleveland the first time.
Okay, now you're 2 steps too far.
Not learning from your mistakes. That's what it's all about. But no, speaking of my dad, the first time I really got interested into it, or kind of interested in the topic, was back when my dad's truck driver, and I used to go on the road with him. Okay. And I grew up. I have family who lives right in Chickamauga. I grew up on that battlefield. I explored that quite a bit as a kid, but I never really did any interpretation, if you will, until that time. I kind of drove through and kind of stopped and looked around. That time with him and back in the early '90s. So I've been kind of always interested about this. It was the first.
You drove through the battlefield?
Well, Bighorn or Chickamauga? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Both. The first time I went through the
You were following that? I was
a little sorry.
So you've been to Little Bighorn?
Yeah, a long time ago.
Have you been to Little Bighorn?
Oh, many times.
Have you been out there?
Not yet. Jim goes out, every other year or so?
It's kind of unofficially turned into an annual thing. And
Good.
I've given tours out there to groups, but
cool.
heap many times.
It's a beautiful area.
Heap
It's
many.
just so beautiful.
Get used to that language. Heap many times.
Where's that language? You said buffalo. Is that a buffalo thing you just dropped on?
No,
us?
that's a different kind
Native
of buffalo,
American.
maybe.
Yeah.
Movie
Native American.
Did not mean cultural appropriation there, so maybe we should just
No.
Right.
But are you you're from Buffalo, New York?
Yeah.
So are you a Bills fan?
Yeah.
That's good, better now than it has been.
Well, it had, it was good for a couple of years, and then it was bad for a long time, and now it's good again. Are you snoring over there? I think, yeah.
I'm sorry. Oh, sorry.
Is that the oval one? Is that the oval ball that's brown?
You're a Giants fan by default. Why does this conversation bother you? Because we sent them
we're
into
talking
the
about the Little
tailspin.
Bighorn here, and he said heap many, and I was about to save him with an actual Sioux or Lakota word, and then we started talking about the Bills.
Well, because I just wanted to make sure. Like, it's one thing. Here's some things I like to do on the show. I like to know how everybody gets into history. Which, judging by your, I don't want to be lame and say ditto, but like honestly, by that logic, 90% of our guests are lame because they're all like, I went to Gettysburg. I saw Gettysburg.
Yeah, that's right.
And then I became learned doctor and author and whatever. So it's like, everybody. Similarities.
Movies encourage you to read more.
But I like to know who people root for, if they're sports fans or not, just because it helps me,
I'm just
kind of
teasing you, Pat.
No.
Well, as we said when we came in the house, though, primarily
right, Yankees.
Yeah.
So baseball, I'm good with that. I just I had to ask.
Yeah, I understand. So to save Jim from the cultural appropriation, or stereotypical. I don't even know, is heap many even really what they actually said? I doubt it.
Well, they talked like that in
the movies.
In the movies, yeah, which was my whole point.
Right.
But I believe I learned from Son of the Morning Star.
Right? I learned that from Kevin
Dances
Costner.
with Wolves, right?
Tatanka.
But from Son of the Morning Star, I believe I learned the word, I believe it's ota, meaning many.
That's right.
Ota ponies. Otasu.
Otasu.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I like learning languages.
So whatever the hell you said heap many about. Ota.
I was channeling F Troop. Come on.
Jesus.
Cut me some slack here.
We're all my
support
millennial and Gen Z audience that's going to get that one.
Right.
That's true.
All right, so we're
Half
storytelling.
of the radio stations in America just turned off. Radio stations,
they
whatever.
do. They're about 5 seconds.
Whatever we're broadcasting on. What do you listen to? Those little things in your hand? You're
So we are we're a storytelling podcast, right?
Okay.
So that's like kind of what we get down to doing. Eventually, we have to cut the malarkey. Everyone, myself. But what we like to do is get into the story. So no stories from the past have just or very few of them rather, have like just straight linear, projections or process or whatever, and start at a singular point. I imagine the story of the Battle of Little Bighorn is similar in the sense that it doesn't have a singular.
Right.
It just kind of you got to start somewhere. So when we say, Jim, take us through the Battle of Little Bighorn, where do we get started?
Well, I mean, if you want to at least spend a little bit of time on the causes and understanding what it was all about, obviously the cultural conflict between the red and the white races goes back generations, but really for our intents and purposes today after the Civil War.
Right.
Because at the end of the Civil War, Western expansion increases, the railroads are increasing, the Bozeman Trail, white society is pushing westward, and that's conflicting immediately with the Indian tribes of the Great Plains.
Is that Bozeman, Montana?
Yeah.
I know that just because of Kevin Costner's show.
Perfect. So
I literally only know.
So
that.
immigrant trails moving to the west that are unfortunately going through country that were considered by the Sioux, the Cheyenne, and the tribes of the plains to be theirs. And that's really when it kind of starts to heat up. A year or two after Appomattox, the United States Army is at war again, Red Cloud War,
right.
In 1867, which ultimately in a lot of ways is a loss for the U.S. Army, but leads to the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868. And look, I know podcasts don't want to talk about treaties and all of that stuff, but
you can do it.
But these treaties guarantee land to the Sioux, a Sioux reservation in what we would consider to be South Dakota today, including the Black Hills. And while that might have seemed to settle the matter, things are actually going to continue over the next decade or so as the white man wants the land that has been more or less given to the Sioux in the treaties.
Sure.
The Indians, meanwhile, are conducting raids and depredations on the frontier posts and the immigrants, and it's just a recipe for a battle.
So,
well, also a big part of that is gold.
Is there gold up there?
And then there are hills.
Yeah, and that starts in 1874. So you have this period from the Treaty of 68 to 74, where the railroads and white civilization continues to encroach westward. But in 1874, Custer, under orders, he isn't just glory hunting, riding around the West for 10 years, doing whatever the hell he feels like. But 1874, Custer leads an expedition of the 7th Cavalry into the Black Hills. One of the things they are looking for is to confirm what's pretty much already known, the existence of gold in the Black Hills, but the Army kind of wants to use this as an excuse to open up the Black Hills to settlement.
Yeah.
That's going to enrage the Sioux
for sure.
and bring on the 1876 campaign.
You know what's interesting, too, about that whole thing is, to this day, the Sioux consider that their sacred land and everything, their ancient, ancestral, sacred land. But I was watching actually a documentary the other day about the Little Bighorn. It's a newer one, and they kind of go into all that stuff. And what we don't get told often is that the Sioux drove the Cheyenne off that land 40 years earlier than this time we're talking about. And the Cheyenne drove the Kiowa off that land however many decades before. And so it's interesting because my whole life I grew up thinking that was Sioux land for 1,000 years, right?
It wasn't at all.
It wasn't. No, it wasn't. Just a few decades. But so it's just that's an interesting point because I don't know. I always like when the what do you call it? Like the common belief is kind of challenged by fact.
So my question I'm going to have to ask then.
Yeah.
Well, is it good ground?
God damn it.
God.
But this, if I may, you're right. This idea of intertribal warfare, this idea of, is something you don't often see in the movies or read about, and the idea that the tribes were benevolent stewards of the land, living peacefully, and the army and everybody just kind of came in and encroached and pushed them out, unfortunately is not accurate. It's more complicated than that. And
also, you had a good point before when you said that Custer led the expedition under orders.
Right.
I feel like a lot of the people, because since the 1960s, Custer's been despised.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I believe that is all the politics of the 1960s put on this man who lived in a time when they didn't think the way they did in the 1960s.
Right.
And so it's a little unfair. And he, even though he's General Custer, at the time, he was a lieutenant colonel, right? At that time?
Yep.
Well, he was a Civil War general.
He was a
regular Army
brevet,
colonel.
right?
Yeah.
Right?
When did he get promoted from captain to? Because he went back to captain at the end of the war.
You're right. So in the Civil War, he ends up as a major general of volunteers and a brevet major general. At the end of the Civil War, when basically you remove the volunteer army and the brevet ranks, he goes back to captain.
Right.
1866, when the 7th Cavalry is formed at Fort Riley, is when he then gets promotion to command the regiment and goes up to lieutenant colonel. Okay. And that's the rank he'll hold until the day he dies,
right.
a decade later.
But you called him general anyway.
Yeah.
And so I think the trick played by the anti-Custer crowd a few decades ago was, well, we call him General Custer because they call him General Custer, and people think generals can do anything. But generals can't do anything. Generals act under orders from either higher-ranking generals or the government.
Commander-in-Chief.
Yeah. So it's like generals, just because you're a general, you don't just go roughshod all over the place doing whatever you want.
I'll just say the other piece of that, too, because we're on this topic, because I see a lot from Custer critics. Oh, he was demoted at the end of the Civil War. He wasn't, quote-unquote, a real general anymore. No.
Right.
The volunteer army in the brevet system was very common in the Civil War. And all of these guys
were demoted.
You revert back to your regular army rank. So there's no shame in it.
Right.
But you see that a lot from the Custer critics.
That's
so
because people
still
still don't understand the separation between the regular army and the volunteer army, and a lot of these guys are technically conducting dual service.
I would also argue that a lot of those people don't want to understand; they just want to hate Custer.
They just want to hate.
It makes for great.
A couple things.
It makes for great drama. Right?
Custer's a class of '61er from West Point, right?
Yeah.
Isn't he one of that famous class of '61?
So he's the second class, last in his class. But again, that should be put in context. When he graduates, he's 34th out of 34 remaining candidate with about, I think, 726 demerits, if I remember the number.
Oh, he liked to party, did he?
Yeah, well, party West Point style, carving your initials into a tree kind of stuff.
Rad, rad stuff.
Exactly, pretty lighthearted stuff. But a couple things there people got to remember. First of all, a lot of his classmates either dropped out or left to go fight for the South, and so they'd had a reduction in the class size. But in addition to that, even if you're the goat of the class, you're last in the class, even if you're the goat, Custer was still better educated than 95% of the men or women particularly, but men in America at that time. So again, you see here, he was a dummy. He almost failed out at it has nothing to do with that. His West Point issues are more disciplinary, which again is something he's going to struggle with for his life more than educational.
Yeah, at least he was in the class.
Yeah, that's a great point.
There's 34 people in that class out of how many millions of people in the country, right?
Jim,
do you want to hear some of his demerits while we're on the subject?
I do, and then I want to ask you a question.
Well, Matt turned right to the page, like he's got it memorized.
I had it marked because I knew this would come up.
Okay,
all right,
let's do
it. Just things like this. September 29th, 1857, trifling in the ranks marching from parade. Okay, trifling. Just a little trifling. Okay.
What does that even mean?
F around.
Like, because when I say trifling, I mean, it's like basically you're trifling ass motherfucker. Like, you're kind of shitty.
Yeah, I think it could mean whatever you want.
I think back then it meant a little.
That's why I'm asking. What's the context?
I don't think it was quite that harsh.
Calling corporal in a boisterous tone of voice.
Oh, my God.
On December 19th, 1857.
So could I not call
pearls,
corporal?
For those of us who are just watching, just listening, I'm clutching my pearls right now.
Yeah. No, but it was probably something like corporal.
Oh,
he said it sassy.
Yeah,
with some snaps.
Well, they did call him Curly, so yeah.
Yeah. Here we go. April 3rd, 1858. Hair out of uniform at what is GD guard meeting?
God damn it!
Probably guard duty.
Goddamn
meeting. Okay. March 14th, 1858. Gazing about in ranks.
Oh my!
See, I think he had ADD.
Yeah.
Here we go. July 26, 1858. Rubbish behind tent.
Well, okay.
A lot of soldiers probably got that one.
But I'll give him that one.
January 26, 1859. Late at parade. 27th. late at formation of company at mess hall at dinner. Let's skip around here. Oh, here's a good one. February 5th, 1859. Laughing and talking in drawing. Is it? We think that's drawing academy on. Oh yeah, drawing academy on the 4th. Throwing here, May 18th, 1859. Throwing bread in mess hall at dinner.
All right, that's a demerit.
That's a demerit. That's a demerit.
Stay in line,
But it also
George.
makes them lovable.
Sure.
Oh, here we go. February 17th, 1860. Wall defaced with pencil marks.
Oh.
9:30 and 10 a.m. Twice he did this.
Did he do anything cool to get in trouble?
Well, let's see.
Throwing bread isn't cool enough
yeah, I
for
thought
you
that
guys.
was pretty good.
What?
Yeah. I mean, but is there any like? I mean, is there
Throwing
any like
bread is Victorian
Boston
for, like-
Corbett type? Like I dressed down a superior officer, smacked the Jesus out
I
of
guess
him.
yelling corporal boisterously was as close as he got there. Long beard at inspection, February 3rd, 1861. Here, but going back, March 19th, 1860. Room grossly out of order, bed down, and floor not swept.
So he's a messy guy.
He definitely has ADHD.
He's undisciplined.
Yeah.
He's undisciplined.
Too much furniture in tent at morning inspection. Too much furniture.
Well, he likes to live.
So-
He's got a standard of living.
And he got this a few times here. Swinging arms marching from a pub of delinquencies.
What?
What I don't know. A pub.
What is this?
Swinging arms from a. It sounds like he was walking hammered.
Yeah, maybe. Well, it's pub. Period. It's an abbreviation. So
Public,
it's not
maybe?
Public.
It's not a pub.
Public.
It's not a
of
pub the way I
delinquencies? I don't know. But anyway, here throwing snowballs in vicinity of barracks.
All right, he's warming
Snowball's
back
cool
now.
enough? Is that cool enough?
That's
Dude, who is the narc that is writing all these up?
Robert
Throwing
E. Lee.
snowballs? It's the corporal. He called me corporal.
But anyway,
but
your question.
He's popular. He's rough around the edges, and he never really loses any of that.
He's got pizzazz.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, do you think this disconnect between, Matt, you were talking about the Cheyenne have been pushed off, who had previously pushed off the Kiowa, things like that. Do you think people are unaware of just honestly how similar and familiar Native American societies would be to European ones? People are people in all walks, right? So societies mirror that. So
I was going to finish your sentence and say, do you think people are unaware that Indians are human beings?
and they do the same stuff that other human beings
Yeah.
do. But my question really is centered around, do you think that there's this big disconnect because the way that we as a popular culture and study of this typically come to the Native story after the Civil War in the John Wayne push west of things? Like, reason I asked this, not a secret, I work in an 18th century site. It's relative to the French and Indian War. And the whole purpose, or not purpose, but the whole sort of spine of that thing is that the various tribes have varying allegiances. They are at war with each other and things like that. But by the time of this story, that's old hat. I mean, like, my era of everyday discussion is the 1750s. We're 100.
Well, and a lot of people have moved.
Well, right.
Around the country. A lot of tribes are no longer where they used to be. And
Right.
Yeah.
So, but the reason I'm asking is, do you think that there's this disconnect because we really don't focus on these pre-push west narratives anymore?
I think there's a disconnect because of popular culture. Again, kind of going back to what we said earlier.
And politics.
I think starting in the 1960s, the Native Americans were it's not even starting in the 1960s. You could go back to Last of the Mohicans, the book.
Sure.
But at least in terms of modern times, you have this idea that they were all living together peacefully. And you talked about the changes with it, though. 1876 for the Little Bighorn campaign, you have the Crow Indians siding with the Army and scouting for the Army against their enemy, the Sioux. Why? Because the Sioux have pushed the Crow off of their land.
Right.
Well, the Sioux and the Cheyenne, who we talked about, the Sioux pushing the Cheyenne out of the Black Hills. By 1876, the Sioux and the Cheyenne are allies.
Yep.
So you can definitely draw this parallel to modern world where, we're friends with one country and then in the next war we're fighting them sort of thing. The tribes were very much the same way.
Well, I was going to say, that sounds a little bit like your war there.
Right, that's what I mean.
The French and Indian War.
Yeah.
And I still, it's so funny that people, because historians are so great at naming things, the French and Indian War sounds like it's the French and the Indians fighting. No,
each
it's
other,
they're getting together in the greater conflict.
All right,
the
so
7 Years' War.
So getting back into this real quick, first of all, are we in the Grant presidential administration yet at this point?
By 1876, we are.
Yeah.
We are. We are. And as you know, the Grant presidency is scandal-ridden,
Sure.
which is going to have an impact on Custer's role in the campaign.
Sure.
Is Sue, I think I heard once upon a time, and I just kind of put it in my back pocket until I remembered, which is now this moment. So congratulations. But is Sue a derogatory term? Because I seem to be confused. Is the Lakota not the same?
No, so you have the Sioux.
So help me with this, because somebody once like chapped my ass. They're like, Sioux's a bad word, and I was like,
No,
I've never heard.
no, I've
I
never
literally
heard that.
said, I've never heard that.
Well, I mean, ask a Sioux, but I'm not. I've never heard anybody say that. But and correct me if I'm wrong here, Jim. You got the Sioux, but you have the Lakota Sioux, the Dakota, and the Nakota. Is that right?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I don't profess to be any expert in all the branches of the tribes.
Sure.
But I can tell you what's, by
Might
Little
actually be
Bighorn,
in this book.
you've got the Hunkpapa, which is Sitting Bull.
Minneconjou?
You've got the Oglala, which is Crazy Horse.
Oh, yeah.
So
Right.
you have all these different branches of the tree, so to speak. I want to say Robert Utley, and I'm quoting this from memory. I want to say he wrote that there were 120 different tribes. 120 different tribes, about 100,000 of which would be considered 100,000 people would be considered hostile, meaning those who are actively encroaching this Western expansion of white civilization. And that those quote, and hostile is a derogatory term.
Yeah,
sure.
Hostiles being a term that we're giving them to
Right.
base, for the ones that were
And that would be going
expansion.
back, I think, since that's the same Sioux that the Lewis and Clark folks were writing about.
Yeah.
Their
Yeah.
expedition.
Yeah.
That's it. So it's been going on since,
All right.
So
Yeah.
early
I
1800s.
feel like we have to set the stage here. With
Yeah,
the
let's do
characters,
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Let's
the
do
7th
that.
Cavalry earlier on, you alluded to, Pat, the whole riding off to glory thing.
Yeah.
But who made up, Jim, the 7th Cavalry?
Hal
Was it
Moore,
all of these?
Vietnam.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just kidding.
Was it all of these, all American types, or was it?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Matthew. Yeah.
Well,
Is it our people?
it might be some of them.
It might be some of our
but a
people.
whole bunch of other ones too that we would have hated.
Oh no.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I'm not going to do the accent.
Okay.
But
Okay.
Yeah,
that's
obviously
fine. I
we're-
wasn't
That's in
either.
our contract. We have to do
exactly.
it.
Obviously, where we're being led here, yes, a large immigrant population. As in the Civil War, where a lot of the Union Army was immigrants. Same thing out west. You've got your Irish, you've got your German, you've got your Scottish, you've got a few Canadians in there. It's a mix. The post-Civil War Army is a mixture of, in some cases, officers who want to stay in the Army after the war: Custer, Hancock, Oliver Howard, John Gibbon. You have,
Sheridan,
yeah,
Crook.
Sheridan,
yeah,
yep,
Crook, right. You have this officer corps, at the upper levels. Then obviously you have at the lower officer level, the lieutenants and things like that, guys who are continuing to come out of West Point. But the rank and file, yeah, they're immigrants, they're laborers, they're guys who are just looking for
Guys
work.
on the lam, maybe.
Sometimes
Some
guys on the
criminals.
lam,
yeah.
just guys who are looking for work, looking for a new identity, to get lost in the West, whatever the case might be. So it's a real mix.
Yeah, our walk-a-heap army, as it goes west. In my living history world, I was very briefly associated with the Indian War
Okay.
regular army unit, and the uniform changes, the personnel changes, the weaponry changes. Like, this is an era that you can get lost in. So there's a million reasons to do it, whether they're I just want to go on an adventure, or the cops are looking for me in New York.
Right.
Right.
So, okay, but now there's the politics. Custer himself.
Has he been popular since? So can we start with him, because let's go with East Cavalry Field. Right, he's a rock star. He shuts
a
down
rock star.
Jeb Stewart.
Hair
Right?
flying.
Yeah, dude's just a badass.
Velveteen uniform.
Like, he gets to the end of the war, he's not demoted, he reverts back to his regular army rank. What does he do for the next years? You just kind of hang out and be famous?
Takes up ballroom dancing.
He is on Dancing with the Stars.
I feel like there's a seriousness to that. Is he dancing?
no,
I was saying, it's not out of the realm of possibility.
I think
If he
everybody
is
back then
dancing,
knew
I'm
how to
leaving
dance.
now, right?
Him and Pickett are like the same guy. They just like things that smell nice and look nice.
Pickett wore the scarf on his sleeve. Go ahead.
No, I mean, so you get to that point, it's the same situation a lot of these guys find themselves in. And in Custer's case, The war ends, as we said before, you're basically dropped overnight from major general to captain. You figure out what you're going to do next. By the end of the Civil War, he's 25 years old, still a very young guy.
Which I find so amazing.
Yeah.
I just find it,
Is he ordered right out to Fort Riley? Like, staying in the Army, I imagine you get orders soonish.
He looks for other assignments. At one point, he considers actually going down to Mexico and serving in the Army down there, and our government says no, you can't do that. But he's looking for other things.
Isn't he assigned to Texas during Reconstruction?
So so ultimately he ends up in Texas doing some Reconstruction duty, and then finally in 1866, when they're going to form the 7th Cavalry, he applies for and he receives the lieutenant colonel assignment there.
Can we talk a little bit about? I mean, and I kind of wanted to expand upon something you just mentioned a little bit ago. What is the status of the Army itself at that point? We're changing.
It's shrunk, right?
Like we're changing everything. We're changing our uniforms. We're changing the weapons. Is because we're so much further away from Washington D.C. Or anything out here. Today it's in different time zones, right?
Yeah.
Is that Army a little bit more rough and tumbled, or is it still? Yeah.
It's, first of all, we should talk about the numbers, because literally at the close of the Civil War, the Army Congress authorizes a drop in the Army from something like 1 million effectives to like 57,000. And by the 1870s, when and if we get to the Battle of Little Bighorn, it's only down to like 25,000.
Right.
So a huge drop in numbers. You've got this 57,000 man army whose primary assignment now is to patrol, what are today all the western states.
Yeah. It's huge.
It's a huge area. And so back to your question, you're away, the uniforms, everything is a little rougher around the edges. Right. It's not the spit polish you see in the John Wayne.
Well, this is probably the only part of this story that I can speak with confidence directly in, because, I immersed myself in the material culture of this era. This is because you're talking about the disconnect from depot systems and from major logistical hubs, and these guys end up on foot miles and miles and sometimes hundreds of miles away from the railways. These guys start in what the theoretical uniform is. Like in 72, there's a dramatic change to the army blouse, to the trousers, things like that. The pack system, we're in trapdoor rifles and all that. But you still see Civil War surplus is out there like crazy. So as these guys get out west, these guys get out west, it's by the officer class, it's okay to beat the crap out of Civil War surplus era stuff, and then have your regulation stuff for when you gotta.
And not only, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, but weren't they also, by the time of Little Bighorn, still eating like hardtack from the Civil War?
Yeah. You're still getting rations that are years old.
That's one of my favorite war anachronisms, is that the doughboy was eating Civil War era hardtack, and it's like,
no,
I don't think so.
I don't think that one was happening.
Which kind of ties into something a path we started down earlier and didn't go all the way to, the morale factor.
Right.
What is the Army like? So you don't have the glorious cause and the purpose and the motivation of the Civil War. You're eating years-old rations.
Yeah.
You've got crappy uniforms. You're out in these frontier posts where most of the times you're not doing anything but drilling needlessly and drinking.
Right.
So and I know somebody's listening and they're going to get pissed off, like, oh, you're disparaging the frontier army. And that's not the intent at all. But it's a vastly different enterprise from the Civil War era, and guys like Custer, like Hancock, other officers, take time to adapt, and it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen overnight to figure out, what am I going to do in this new assignment? What kind of officer am I going to be? And how am I going to fight this new enemy that doesn't always behave like Confederates do?
Right.
It's a big adaptation.
And that was a big frustration for Custer, is that in the movie, there's a good scene where, in the TV show, they're chasing a band of Indians, and they get to a point and the Indians split.
Yeah.
And Custer sits on top of the hill, and he's got his carbine, and he just fires a shot, and he gets frustrated. He says, "Give me an enemy who fights by the rules, an enemy I could beat." And he it's a frustration because they got formations and everything, and the Indians are just like, "Get the fuck out of here!"
Right. They're just fighting,
just like living, trying to survive.
So on that note, do we know how Custer's men felt about serving with him?
Well, I was going to say, because you were.
Am I jumping ahead too much?
You're
No,
good.
because this is set in the scene.
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
So you're mentioning all the morale and everything, but within the 7th Cavalry, you have factions, and Custer has his brother. Who else? He relatives and friends,
He's
right?
got his brother-in-law. Yeah. So what happens is, I will point out, because I want to make sure people understood this. If you served under him in the Civil War, you tended to love him.
Yeah.
He was very popular.
Sure. Yes.
But
right.
yeah, things change out west with this whole differing situation and the morale factor. And he feels like, as a West Pointer and an officer for discipline purposes, he's got to be a hard ass. And even with his friends and family, he talks about, I'm not going to really play favorites. You got to toe the line.
Right.
So yeah, to Matt's point, you've got a faction then that forms in the 7th Cavalry, which frankly is probably not that unusual for other cavalry regiments, but the 7th is the only one anybody studies.
Right.
As Matt was saying, you've got Tom Custer, his brother, James Calhoun, his brother-in-law. You've got other friends who have been with him or follow him along, and kind of what they call the Custer clan. Okay. And then you've got officers on the outside, Frederick Benteen, Marcus Reno, guys like that, who are going to play a huge part at Little Bighorn, and are on the outside of this circle looking in. Now, what do you do when you've got a social circle and they're the cool kids and everybody's popular and you're the guy on the outside?
You burn it to the ground.
It's kind of like the podcasting community, right? But it's kind of, you tend to, if nothing else, you tend to get resentful.
Wait, which circle am I in? Am I in the or am I out?
You're definitely out.
No,
you're in. No, so it makes you kind of write an op-ed or an article or publish some letter about your commander, Colonel Custer.
Yeah.
Right?
I love the lead.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so
got that.
So one of the officers who pretty much hates Custer on site is Fred Benteen.
I love this guy. I have a quote of his on my locker at work.
Do you? What's the quote?
I'm going to butcher it, but basically it boils down to his personality. He's like, I would much rather march to my own drum and go against the grain of other people's things.
Okay,
And I love that quote because that's kind of who I am in life. It's like, look, I do my thing.
Where'd you find that?
Honestly, I inherited it when my first day at my job years ago. Before we had the nice sort of locker organization thing we're running now, my boss was like, here's your modern Foot Locker, eat shit, put all your stuff in it. He didn't say that. He was real nice about it. But the person that had it before me, for no context, had it just taped on the front. It's a picture of him, and it's got that quote.
That's great.
And I read it, and I was like, well, I'll be damned.
Yeah.
So I love it.
And it's funny, because when you look at the picture of him, he kind of looks like a pudgy dork, right?
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't look like a guy who would be that way.
But he also simultaneously does, because then I'm like, no, that guy literally just does his own thing. You can see it right on him.
If you could make the reference, he's got kind of the Ric Flair haircut. For those who appreciate that.
He is a limo ride.
I said kind of jet flying.
Yeah.
But right, absolutely right. He's pudgy looking. You look at the picture, you would not think of this guy as a badass soldier or any type.
No.
But he was. He had a good record.
It's interesting because you're describing him here as a pretty much a nonconformist, right? And
That's how he described himself.
Right. And then you have Custer, who, I mean, clearly a nonconformist. Is this just like two people who, you know how they,
the town ain't big enough?
Yeah, the town ain't big. Yeah.
We're in the West now. You got to talk like that. The town ain't big enough.
This town ain't big enough. That's all I say.
I don't know. Planes ain't big enough for the two of us.
Yeah. So January 1867, Benteen and Custer meet for the first time. Benteen pretty much seems to hate Custer on sight. He says later it's primarily because Custer is just such a braggart. Custer's bragging about, hey, look what I did in the war.
Popinjay.
Yeah, I don't like this guy, and that sort of thing. And it turns Benteen off right away. The other point, though, that I always add that isn't as well stated, Benteen's, even though he's got the white hair, he's only about 5 or 6 years older than Custer, which, in the big scheme of things isn't a lot.
Right.
But older men hate taking orders from younger men.
guys.
We all know that. As guys,
Joshua Chamberlain.
Exactly. Old men don't want to be taking orders from young guys, and I personally think there's got to be some level of resentment there. Benteen, has been classified by a lot of the Custer people as just somebody who quote unquote hates everybody, and I think that's a little too harsh. But if you read a lot of Benteen's published letters, he may not hate everybody, but he hates a lot of people. And Custer definitely falls into that.
The more I discover about Benteen, the more I'm like, this man is endearing to me right now.
He's an interesting guy.
He's fascinating guy.
But tell the story, though, because Benteen publishes this.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, tell the story. Because this is the thing, though. about Custer, and then I'll go into my psychological analysis.
Okay.
Of
Oh,
why
great.
he's
I
this
love-
way.
I love this
Okay.
already.
So we're
I
gonna
know,
get some
I know.
psychology.
Dr. Callery.
All right, so let's do the background first. So they already dislike each other. Then you have the Battle of the Washita in November of '68, which is really Custer's signature victory on the plains. 7th Cavalry again is ordered to attack village under Chief Blackcattle. They surround the village. Basically an army victory, but during the course of that, a detachment of about 20 or so troopers under Major Joel Elliott, who was a friend of Benteen's, departs to basically go chase some warriors. They are cut off and killed, and this only exasperates Benteen's resentment against Custer. So one of the things that happens is this anonymous letter gets published in a St. Louis newspaper, basically accusing Custer of abandoning Benteen and things of that. Or, I'm sorry, abandoning Elliott and things of that nature. And so as Benteen told the story, and notice I emphasize as Benteen told the story, Custer kind of calls everybody together and says, okay, who the hell wrote this article? And according to Benteen's version of it, Benteen stepped forward and said, I did. And Custer had threatened to horsewhip whoever had written the article. But when Benteen steps forward and kind of says, all right, I did. I'm the man you're looking for.
Bring it on.
According to Benteen, Custer kind of backed down from it.
But
and that's
before he stepped forward, what did he do?
So he twirled kind of some cylinders in his revolver. Is that the piece you're looking for? Yeah. So Benteen kind of twirls his gun, to make sure it's loaded, and then steps forward and says, "Okay, General, I guess I'm here for that horse whipping." According to Benteen's version of it, Custer kind of stammers and just goes, I guess I will see you later. And in Benteen's,
so we're talking visceral hatred.
In Benteen's version of it, the big man kind of backed down.
Well, he just kind of got punked on a public stage. He just got embarrassed.
Yeah, of course.
Assuming the story's true,
right?
Because you don't have a lot of other versions. Notice how many times I said according to Benteen.
Because there's other people there, but nobody else corroborates that part of the story.
Yeah, not to my knowledge. Yeah.
Wow.
Here's
Okay,
the
great.
But
and now psychological analysis.
Everybody, Dr. Callery.
Dr. Matt Callery.
Dr. Callery.
Here's all right. Here's my take on Custer's personality. All right. So we look at him. He's a young man in the Civil War, and he achieves greatness, quote unquote. Right? He becomes a major general by the end of the war, and he's only 25, as Jim pointed out.
And he's very effective in the war.
He's very effective in the war, but clearly, but he's a showman. Right now, this is inaccurate, but in They Died with Their Boots On, he shows up to West Point, resplendent in like a general's uniform with a cape and one of those weird
feather in the hat,
like the bicorn, like a bicorn hat.
Yes, the bicorn hat. Thank you. And he's got hounds with him and a big trunk and everything, and I think a servant and all that stuff. Never happened, right? But it's a good scene in the movie. But I think it also kind of exemplifies Custer's view of himself, right? I believe I remember a story when he was a young man. There was some, in the lead up to the Civil War, he's walking around with his dad and he keeps yelling, "My voice is for war." Does that sound familiar?
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Like he's just somebody who's out there, right?
We're gonna whip them all. Kind of stuff.
Yeah. And of course he makes a spectacle of himself on the battlefield. He loves getting in the papers. He's a hero. He's a star. He's, in those days, the rock stars were military men, right?
True.
So and you can get used to that adulation very quickly. But then the war ends and the country's war weary, but you're not glory weary.
Right.
You still want it. And now where do you go? You go out to the plains, and the plains are these dry patches of grass that go on for miles and miles, and there's nothing out there. There's nothing to do. It's boring. It's lonely. It's desolate. But he reinvents himself.
Now we know why Grant drank. It had nothing to do.
It was
sit
boredom.
around on these western posts. Yeah.
Right.
And so he reinvents himself now, right? He's like, okay, well, we're not having the battles like we used to have, so it's hard for me to gain this glory on the battlefield, but I'm going to write about my adventures out here. And so he writes some books and articles and things like that, and now he's Custer the Indian fighter.
He'd be podcasting if he were alive today.
Yeah,
totally. I'm sure he would.
Probably would.
Yeah. From what I know, from what I'm hearing, that's
right.
Yeah.
But all of that stuff, like when you're fighting a war back east, you're near towns, you're near cities, and you take a break, you get into a town or whatever. People, oh, General Custer, blah 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 blah.
Have a nice dinner. Female company.
Where are you doing that? In the plains, on the plains. There's very few places to be doing any of that stuff. Now you're also leading your second in command of the 7th Cavalry, right? You have field command, but there is someone above you. Right. And you're leading these. They're not all ne'er-do-wells, but you have this hodgepodge of characters that you're leading. Most probably were honorable men, right? And I'm not just saying that as a cloak, but like I really, they probably were, because you can't keep that many people together if there isn't some sense of honorable.
Dude, just like today, everybody
is a
everybody joins the military. You got good people, you got knuckleheads.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's an old story.
So, but where's the glory, right? Now the Washita, right? You forgot to mention.
I want to talk about this for a second.
Yeah.
Hey, forget the man. You can't cover everything. Is this like an hour? Or how long do we have here?
Honestly, as long as you want to talk.
Why don't you tell me we're here for 4 hours?
Yeah, it's up to you.
So the Washita, the attack is made pre-dawn.
Right.
Okay, they're asleep.
Yes.
Very easy to win when your enemy's sleeping.
You mentioned Black Kettle?
Yes.
Yes.
Is this where the Iron Maiden song "Run to the Hills" comes from?
I'm not an Iron Maiden fan,
ask
so I
Tim
can't
Smith
help you
yeah.
there.
I also think there's a Rob Zombie song about
Well, what do they
this,
say?
too.
What do they say? Well,
They say "Run to the hills." Everybody knows that. Fight for your life. But no, I'm not a lyric guy.
Well, but the thing about Black Kettle,
I just vaguely remember that being the inspiration. I think that's what this is. So I think Iron Maiden
could be. Well, maybe you'll know after this story. Black Kettle is not a hostile.
As far as the chief, he is not.
Right. And he had some kind of agreement with the government that if he flew the American flag over his teepee, his people would be spared. Is that right?
It's supposedly. Yeah. The thing is, we're following a trail of hostile warriors into his village. So Black Kettle's a peace chief, but the problem, and this goes all the way into 1876, the problem is these chiefs can't keep the belligerent young men, which again I think a couple of the guys at the table can relate to, can't keep the belligerent young men under control, and that's ultimately why the village gets targeted.
That's another good point, especially if we're trying to remove the veneer of contemporary politics coloring history. Custer is following hostile trail. Right.
Got it.
Into the village, and the fact that Black Kettle had that flag that was supposed to give him some kind of cover. Well, last I checked, pre-dawn it's dark, and it's also winter. Right? Is this the attack when he has the band strike up Gary Owen and their trumpets freeze to their lips?
It is, right, right.
So it's cold.
Ouch. By the way, ow.
Yeah. It's Thanksgiving, end of November in Oklahoma. Yeah. I mean, just to say no more, right?
And he's still jamming out. This dude is still rocking out to Gary Owen.
So
how cool is it that he still loves that song?
That's how it became their song.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing.
So I've got it pulled up in front of me now. Listen, I have to be very careful because if our listeners are familiar, we did get a stop using our letter from Iron Maiden.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. So we drew enough attention.
Quoting them or using?
No, we used it. We went a little too long on fair use one day.
Oh, okay.
And the business entity. I don't think Bruce Dickinson knows who we are, but we got an official hey, if you're monetizing, stop. So we sent them back. We're not, and we took the thing down. But
really?
Yeah. So Iron Maiden's business admin at least knows who we are.
I don't think it was a.
No, it wasn't like a rude.
It wasn't like a nasty gram. It was just like, hey, we still exist, and hey, you want to pay us money if you're going to use it.
They're a big enough band that they have a legal. That's how I wear it, Jim. I wear it as a badge of honor. But anyway, so I pulled up the lyrics to "Run to the Hills." So it doesn't. Nothing gives me direct to Black Kettle, but it says a white man came across the sea.
Well, that sounds like it right there.
He brought us pain and misery.
Okay, can't argue with that.
He killed our tribes. He killed our creed. He took our game for his own need. We fought him hard. We fought him well. Out on the plains, we gave him hell. But many came, too much for Cree. Will we ever be set free? And then it says, riding through the dust, clouds, and barren wastes. Dude, this is so metal.
Is this the chorus at this point?
No, the chorus is just Run to the Hills. But here's why I wonder if maybe this stuck in my head, because it talked about
That's the feel-good portion of the song.
Galloping hard on the plains, chasing the Redskins back to their holes, fighting them at their own game. Murder for freedom, a stab in the back, women and children the cowards attack.
Yeah,
okay,
so that was,
And then the lyrics are, for the chorus, are just run to the hills, run for your lives, run to the hills, run for your lives.
Well,
Soldiers in blue.
Oh.
That goes back to what we've said at different points here today. Popular perception and pop culture.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, didn't even Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, have a whole episode or like 3 crapping all over?
They did, but did you really just admit to watching Dr. Quinn Medicine? Okay, fair enough. All
I was 12.
You're proud. You were proud.
How did
12.
you know?
Yeah, how did I know? Excuse me.
He's like, erase that right now.
On to the next question. Heap many Dr. Quinn.
Yes,
I don't know.
yes.
All right, so.
Oh, man.
All right.
Next question.
All right. So,
Because I know everything about Custer. And I know
That's
he was
right.
on-
That's
there you
why.
go. There
even
you
the
go.
tangential stuff.
There you go.
And who wouldn't like Jane Seymour? Come on. Right?
It's another
You're
good
not
point.
kidding.
Yeah.
You're not kidding.
All right, so then let's move closer to the battle.
Sure.
Because the battle is very interesting. We're taking
We're
a
not
long
even
time
like
getting.
years to get there. I know, right?
Should we just skip to 75, 76?
Custer's dead. End of episode.
One thing led to another, and it's
Yeah,
1876.
now they're dead.
Okay.
But why though? So there's an order what I think is made in 75, right? That by a certain date, Indians have to report to reservations, otherwise they'd be considered hostile.
Well, yeah, long story short, we talked about the Black Hills in 74. This is going on through 75. Grant and Sheridan in particular get together and say, okay, let's put an end to it. Let's turn the quote-unquote Indian problem over to the War Department. Late 1875, they issue an ultimatum by January of 1876, and they're primarily targeting Sitting Bull's band of followers who are in this, what we would call an unceded territory west of the Sioux Reservation. But basically, you have until January 31st, 76. Come onto your reservations. If you don't, we will turn it over to the War Department. The War Department will round you up and bring it in. It's a ridiculous ultimatum. They're not going to get the message out to all these bands out in the territories in the middle of winter. And, they really don't expect compliance anyways, but it's a legal framework.
Well, that was the point. The point wasn't
Exactly.
actually to give them the opportunity. It was just to be able to cover
It's
their
the
own ass
legal,
in
It's the
court.
legal cover that now says, okay, now, look, we gave them a chance. They didn't respond. Now let's put some troops in the field and bring them in.
And at this point, Sheridan's serving as, what is he serving as? What is his official position?
Sheridan is, I forget where he is at right now. Sherman is commander of the armies at that point.
Isn't Sheridan in
the
charge of the
department.
Indian?
Is he
Yeah,
Indian
Sherman-
Affairs? Is that what
Like
it is?
Indian-
No, one of the districts. One of the districts.
Oh, right. I thought
The
he had a much.
department that
I don't know. Google it.
that
for
area
Christ's
falls under.
sake. What is-
I got the internet
what's
right
Sheridan
here
doing
in my
as a-
hand.
I forget what it's called, but like the Department
Yeah.
of the Plains or
Yeah,
something like
yeah.
that.
Department of,
So-
okay.
Yeah.
So the point being that Sherman has kind of removed himself from a lot of this at this point.
Okay.
And Sheridan is now kind of got Grant's ear on the war policy.
And Hancock is somewhere in the mix out there, isn't he?
Well,
or is this earlier?
Hancock was earlier, which we
Okay.
probably don't want to go back to.
No,
at
we're
this
not
point,
going
right?
back. We're not going back.
Back to 1867. No, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do
Yeah.
that.
So then they come up with this plan. Right now, but in the meantime, so this is like, they had to report back in winter, but the Army's not going to go after them in winter.
Department of the Missouri.
Department of Missouri.
Okay,
That's
there you
right.
go.
Okay.
Sometimes you just
I
draw a
couldn't
blank on
remember.
names.
Yeah,
It's
I-
one of the departments.
I knew he was in a
Missouri.
department somewhere. I could not remember
Yeah.
what his official title was,
Hancock,
so.
just for you, Department of. He had been assigned to the Department of the Missouri, so he
But
was
prior
there.
to Sheridan.
Yeah.
And that was when Custer got court-martialed, which in 67.
Oh, yeah, that's right. But Custer does get in trouble in 76.
He does because
What's
of more,
that story?
Yeah, more
gonna
scandals in the Grant administration. So while all this is going on, there's impeachment proceedings against Secretary of War William Belknap, kickbacks, corruption, graft on the trading posts, and that sort of thing. It's in the spring of 76, Custer is called to testify. And this is a good example, again, of where people are always like, oh, Custer, he wanted to be president, blah, blah, blah. He's inserting himself. No.
Custer could never have been president.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's no ambition presidential ambition on that whatsoever.
It seems to me like he just likes celebrity. I mean,
sure.
And celebrity's different than president.
I don't even want to touch it. He would never have been president.
The other thing, because we never really finished Matt's psych profile. The other thing too, where we were talking about the years of trying to burn to be a celebrity again.
Right.
You've also gone a decade without promotion. And so if I'm a lieutenant colonel of some notoriety looking at a big campaign here, I'm looking colonel. Maybe you even get that rare leap from lieutenant colonel to brigadier general, but I'm looking for promotion.
Something.
But that's because, and I think what you're talking about is that he just has, his military service didn't go the way it normally would. When we're in peacetime, quote unquote, we have a small standing army, which is what we had prior to the Civil War. So you got guys that are holding these junior officer level ranks, lieutenants, things like that, and they hold these ranks for a decade because there's no room to promote up. We've gone back to that. So, but if he came out,
what happens in the post-Civil War army too.
But if he came out in the Civil War version of military life, where you're getting promoted and then promoted the next day, potentially
promotion every year,
that's what he's used to,
right? And that's what you're trying to come back to. So the point of all this, we're still on the Belknap proceeding, so you didn't miss much. We
Matt left,
but. The point.
I did.
I'm just kidding.
The point of all that kind of being, he's ordered to testify.
Right.
He's not sticking his nose. He's ordered to testify. He testifies what he knows, which is mostly hearsay, but it's viewed as being anti-administration, and so now Grant is pissed off against him. Sheridan, meanwhile, has gone past this January 31st ultimatum, is planning to put 3 columns of troops in the field. Initially, Custer was going to command one of the columns. Now, because Custer is pissed off Grant is like, no, forget it. Custer can't even go. And Custer, almost misses Custer's last stand.
Oh, well, that might have been beneficial to him.
Which is terrible. I mean, he was named after him.
I mean, would we be podcasting about him tonight?
I'm going to miss my own fight.
Right. Like Finkelstein's Last Stand. It just doesn't have the same ring to it. But wait, one of the things, I don't know if he said this in the, what was the Belknap? It was a hearing, right? He testified, right? Yeah. So, I don't know if he said this in his testimony or if this is something that he just wrote in a private correspondence or something, but didn't he say, like, he actually sympathized with the Indians? Like, if he had to choose between a reservation and roaming free on the plains, he would choose to roam free too. He wouldn't do it.
Yeah, it's a passage in from My Life on the Plains.
Yeah, is that what it's from?
Yeah, okay. And he says something to the effect of, and I'm paraphrasing from memory, but something to the effect of, if I had my choice, I would rather live free on the plains rather than subjecting myself to government handouts. Yeah.
Now,
living without pride on the reservations.
Do you? There's that rumor that he sired some Indian children. Do you believe that?
Oh,
I do. I personally do not.
Do not.
So there's this rumor that, particularly when they had Oklahoma, after the Washington campaign, he had picked up this lovely young captive, and the legend has always been that he sired a child with her. I don't believe that to be true. The timing doesn't work. There's also the belief that when he was at West Point, he was treated for gonorrhea after one of it, youthful frolics.
I think I've actually heard that one.
Me too.
And leaves of absence, and that might have left him sterile. So I think, no, I don't believe that. But it's a great example of one that, continues to this day. Libby Custer's Wikipedia entry states that as a fact. Her husband had Indian children. States it as a fact, which, again, in this digital age, folks, you got to be careful.
Yeah.
So, okay, but Custer is reinstated.
Yeah.
But he's not going to command the column. He's going to command the good old 7th Cavalry.
Hell yeah.
Is this where we queue up Gary Owen?
I was just going to say, this is where we edit in.
That's our listeners right now are listening to Gary Owen.
Did Iron Maiden do a version of Gary Owen?
No.
The legal department can work out here?
I usually, I don't think we're going to hear from them because I've read the lyrics, but we'll find out.
No, you're fine.
Just
you're
knowing
fine.
them.
You're allowed to quote.
But I think the way the show works is you only get heavy metal variants at the beginning, and then I'm a very serious person, Matt. Remember that.
I know.
I'm very serious.
I know.
Are we going to record a metal version of Gary Owen?
No, we're probably listening to the real version of Gary. You got a version of Gary Owen that you like, Jim?
No, I don't have a particular one. Just
Like somebody's rendition? You got somebody's...
No, it's all kind of the same. I don't know about Matt. I don't have a particular one.
My friend Billy Webster, when I started addressing Gettysburg, I said, "This is my favorite Civil War song. Can you..." He's a musician. And I said, "Can you do this in your style?" And he said, "Sure." And he did it. And it took him like 6 months, because he doesn't know anything about this stuff. But he like researched it and whatever. And then he records it and sends it to me. And I was like, "Hey, that's really good." And then the people in the audience liked it. And I said, "Billy, you should do a whole album of Civil War songs." And so he did. And so my favorite version is Billy Webster's "Carry On." Are you pulling it up there?
Not that version.
Oh,
that would be
that would have been great if you had gotten it.
This is the Black River Boys.
Okay.
Okay. Sounds good.
I don't know what the race has to do with anything. But...
I know, right?
It's the river, jackass.
Oh.
And cancel.
Exactly. Makes my heap many comments kind of came right now. Yeah.
Can you imagine this middle?
Go on YouTube and you can pull up Billy Webster, Gary Owen.
All right, you know what? Fine. For our listeners, we're going to do that.
Well, why would you pull up a different song when I'm talking about...
Well, because I was already into this. I was finishing my mission.
Oh, right. It's your show.
It's right.
Apparently.
I forgot.
Yeah, and if you've seen that movie with Tom Hanks and the Somali Pirates, you look at me. I'm the captain now.
Right, I'm the captain.
This is mine.
Now I'm going to be in
All right,
shock.
here we go. Here we go. Oh, but first, a Liberty Mutual commercial. God, you cannot. All right, you cannot get away. All right, skip. Here we go.
There it is.
Oh, look at that old school logo. Is that Pete?
Yeah.
Oh, my.
Turn it up.
Oh,
you got the two guitars like the Eagles.
He's doing a little.
yeah.
That's not a.
Be not dismayed, but join with me. Show your lane, boots and sing, and lend your aid to help me with the chorus.
Dude, I like this a lot.
I made that the closing theme of my show.
His guitars there are giving me more Molly Hatchet vibes than anything.
Yeah, definitely 70s. Whoever.
Twin guitars.
Yeah. But he actually
special.
did get Don Felder and Joe Walsh to do the.
All right, I'll tell you this.
guitar.
Billy Webster, you can't sue me. Matt Callery said I could use this.
No, I own the rights to it.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Well,
Well, we
see
share
the
the rights.
logo?
Billy and I share the rights.
That logo right there.
Look at that. Now he's into music publishing.
Yes.
There's no end
There's
to
no
the
way.
empire.
What do
I've
you
made
not do?
$14 off the sales of the album. In 2 years.
Pretty soon you're going to make it, bud. That break's coming.
That is
I know.
$26 more than I've made off of the sales of my music.
So you've made negative money. Is what you're saying.
All right.
That's for
All right,
the
can we
math
get back
things,
to the
listeners.
goddamn topic here?
No. So
Now let's
Custer.
talk about harmonic guitars.
So Custer. So Custer is back,
He's back.
but he's not back. He's got the 7th Cavalry.
Is he back in black?
No, he's back in Federal Blue.
He's back in the 7th Cavalry, and I think this is an important thing that people who aren't really into the battle miss.
Okay.
He is part of one of 3 columns that are a mix of cavalry, infantry, and artillery.
He's a part of one column.
He's a
not,
part of one column.
He's not the column.
So explain, Jim.
Yeah, going back to our Sheridan conversation, it's important, I think, to point out Lieutenant Colonel in the Army is not forming Indian policy or the military strategy of the campaign. So coming back to Sheridan, it's a classic Sheridan. Initially, Sheridan wants to hit him in winter. We're going to have 3 columns in the field, one coming in east to west, one coming in west to east, and then one coming in south to north. And you're going to kind of come in from 3 different directions. Is a pincer movement, but because Custer has now been removed from command of the column that's coming in east to west, he's going to command his old 7th Cavalry, but General Alfred Terry will now command this 1,000-man column, of which the 7th Cavalry is part of it. Now Custer's got to operate under Terry. And, again, it goes back to people think Custer's last stand. He's just out there riding around, looking to kill Indians.
Getting his name in the papers.
Getting his name in the papers, riding into villages, killing everything. It's not like that at all. It's a for the time, a very sophisticated plan, and he's just a small cog in it.
So how accurate is David Spade's portrayal of him in the Ridiculous Six?
Is that at the museum?
No,
The
he's in
Ridiculous Six.
that
That's
Adam
right.
Sandler movie.
Yeah.
There's that one scene where like Vanilla Ice is Mark Twain. John Turturro's playing Abner Doubleday.
Yeah, he's not very accurate.
Yeah, no.
No, I did. I knew the answer to that.
Yeah, I know.
You know, but could I just add too, though? You mentioned the Black Velvet, the Custer of the Plains.
Yeah.
He's older now, shorter hair, kind of going bald on top, but rocking the cream buckskin outfit.
Right.
Still the signature red scarf.
I wanted to ask
He's
because
still a well-dressed dude on the plane.
he's got a very different visage than like every other officer. Is he wearing, when he's not in that, is he wearing that like cool like blue cape with the stars thing on it? Like
He just wears that around the house.
I'm just saying, how do we get around all these military regulations just to be
Because
him?
he's a general. You do anything when you're a general.
Sure.
Nothing quite so much like God on earth as a general on the battlefield.
I wanted to ask earlier, and I'll do it now. Is it a requisite of a famous Gettysburg veteran to have a brother Tom? Like, is it like a requisite?
yeah.
When I'd never heard the name Tom Custer before today.
Who's a subordinate to you?
But I just, as soon as you said it, I was like, isn't that convenient? Famous Gettysburg,
Yeah.
and you got a brother Tom.
There's no Tom Sickles. Right?
Well,
That's because everybo's subordinate to
Listen,
that's it.
Damn right. That's right.
tune in next week, folks. We're going to tell the story of Tom
Yep.
Sickles,
God.
the long lost brother Dan.
All right, so
This one wasn't crazy. It was celibate.
does
And had
this
both
step
legs.
off? Does
Hey,
this step?
crazy?
Does this step off with like a very specific objective? Like 7th Cavalry, you're doing X artillery, or is everybody just kind of like moving towards this
So
overall?
wait, can we,
thing?
before we get to that,
Yeah.
can we one point? So it's pushed back to summer now or late spring,
It's
right?
delayed. It's right.
It's, and do they know exactly where the hostiles are?
Quote.
So they don't, and that's the thing. There's this big, what the treaty called this unceded territory, which is the land west of South Dakota to the Bighorn Mountains. There's this big, vast area, and they know Sitting Bull's camp followers are somewhere in that territory, but there's no triangulation upon they're going to be on this river or that river, and because of that, it's important to remember that all three of these columns, Terry's column, which Custer is part of, coming in from Bismarck, Fort Abraham Lincoln, that's coming in from east to west. You have John Gibbons' column patrolling the Yellowstone along the north, and then you have Crook's column coming in from Wyoming in the south. There's no way to triangulate any of this, so it's just a very loose, we're going to try to pinch them in from multiple directions, and, if any column finds them, you should attack.
So it's like a
Yeah.
reconnaissance in force, basically.
In some ways, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then if you hit them
Right.
hard and tell everybody else.
I was going to say,
Right.
are all these elements expected to fall to the one spot if an engagement breaks out? Like you find them, is Matt's column supposed to find
No.
you?
So again, not really. Again, everybody has to be ready to do it independently.
We're
That's
spread
why
out.
Terry's got 1,000 guys. Crook's got 1,000 guys. Gibbons got the smallest force at like 450. John Gibbons, the guy I don't want to be on this
No.
campaign besides Custer. But,
Right.
Yeah.
But now, so Crook, you mentioned Crook. He meets the Indians and is defeated before Little Bighorn.
Yeah, June 17th, what is called the Battle of the Rosebud. And it's a unique battle in that Crook is in camp that morning, and the Indians, aware of his presence, actually come out of their village and attack him. They ride overnight, 40 miles, whatever it is, to attack Crook in camp, which is kind of unusual. And so they put, after a pitched day-long battle, a lot of shooting in these Plains Indian fights, not a lot of casualties, but, there's a pitched day-long battle. Crook, low on ammunition, he's got some wounded, and his scouts basically want to get the hell out at this point.
Yeah.
Crook has to fall back on his supply base and is basically now out of the campaign. That's well, I'm not going to say it's understandable, but it could be understandable. But what becomes a problem then is Terry, Gibbon, Custer don't realize, okay, one of our three pincer
out.
moves is out, and they don't know that.
So real quick, just before you guys continue, just to put this all into perspective, I pulled this up. The Department of the Missouri is an administrative area that covers over 1 million square miles.
Yeah, how do you do that?
It basically stretches from the Mississippi to the Rockies. and from Kansas all the way down to the
57,000
all the way
dudes?
down to the border with Mexico.
That's unbelievable.
So-
and Jim, like in those situations there, again, with the whole army is 57,000 men.
Yeah.
Right. They're not only focusing on the plains.
Right,
They're
right.
doing other things in other places. Okay, so you have a regiment. Like say for example the 7th. I don't think they were ever in this situation, but I could be wrong on this. They have what are they assigned to, like a region, and then they have maybe outposts where companies are manning them, and then it's like something happens, word gets back, and then if reinforcements are needed, they go. But this could be hundreds and hundreds of miles distance.
It's a valid point.
And there's no trains.
Because the
horses.
you know, the 7th, for example, home base for the last couple of years was Fort Abraham Lincoln, outside of what is Bismarck, North Dakota. But while that is Custer's home base, to Matt's point, companies are parsed out to go on a railroad surveying expedition, to go south and fight the KKK. The companies are parsed out. These 12 companies, Custer, Benteen, Reno, who we haven't even talked about yet, and all these guys have never operated as one cohesive unit until the Little Bighorn campaign. And you sound like you're a military guy. I mean, how does that impact your ability to coordinate and cooperate in the field?
Right. I mean, it destroys it.
Right.
So what are we looking at as far as like the belligerents in the battle? What are they armed with on both sides here?
Weapons.
Right.
So before we mentioned, you were listing like the changes in uniform, changes in weapons, and all these things. So you have a change in the sidearm. It's the 1873 Army by 1873. Yep. It's going to be that, and which is not a cap and ball revolver. It's actually the pacemaker. That's what it is. It's a longer barrel, but they're still firing single shot carbines. Right. Not Civil War era, but it's like the updated version.
1873.
Are these
version.
still?
Yeah. No. They're cartridges, but there's a problem with the cartridges, right?
Yeah.
At Little Bighorn.
Yeah. So the problem is, you've got the 1873 model, which the Army had selected. And again, you get a lot of this people talking about, oh my God, the Army, why are they stupid? They had these, the single shot carbine was considered to be lightweight, durable, good on horseback.
Well, they shoot pretty accurately from long distance.
They're long distance. Exactly. Yeah. You're not used to fighting Indians close up, and you want to be able to shoot and hit a target at a long distance. Right. But to the point I think Matt was going at there, you've got a problem where with the dust and dirt and that sort of thing, the cartridges, they corrode and they tend to jam in the ejector, and then you have problems ejecting it and getting the next one in. Right. How much of that's a factor at Little Bighorn, quote unquote faulty carbines, is still debated, but it's a topic that's very prominent in the literature. I think the point being the Army is primarily armed with these single shots, and then of course your revolvers. Right. The Native Americans have a whole hodgepodge of everything. Yeah. Archaeology at the Little Bighorn battlefield has identified something like a third of the Native American weapons were repeaters, the Henry, for example.
So I was going to ask where they show up here because,
So,
but the other thing too is, because people think, oh, the Henry is preferable to the bow and arrow, which it probably is for us, but the Indians were very skilled with a bow and arrow,
right?
And they could get 5 arrows in the air or something like that before the first one lands. Yeah. And they can go far and they can go fast. Some of them could go through a buffalo. Like, these guys knew what the hell they were doing. Right. So to think that, they're armed primitively and they're nothing against the cavalry or the army in general with fire, it's not the same.
We're not riding around in tanks here, right? We're still riding around on horses.
Look, because I got to make some abundantly clear. At this time, Indians in North America have been dealing with white Europeans for centuries now at that point. Yeah. Right. They are beyond familiar with firearms.
Right. Sure.
That's why the arrow is this thing that they have. It's like this extra thing, but they are reliant on like military grade style weapons a lot. I mean, they're that way in the 18th century to a point.
Sure, yeah.
So I'm not surprised that Henry rifles came right up. Right. Because it's like this is the 1870s. Like, we are well into modern warfare almost everywhere on the planet now.
And they even had Uzis.
And in their They're buying them from the trading posts.
Right.
And these
Right?
would have been the
The
same.
white man is selling them
Right,
the guns that they're then
gonna
using to
kill.
shoot the white man.
Yeah,
I mean, it's true.
And these would have been the same model of Henry that if for anyone who's interested in like Western theater, Civil War.
Yeah.
The same model.
Well,
Like,
roughly, it's probably the
I mean,
1866.
it's probably a later
or-
version.
a later version of it, but you'd recognize it. You'd be able to-
Winchesters too.
if
Gold
I,
Boy.
If
Yeah.
I could, because some
Yeah.
little Bighorn
Boy.
enthusiast is listening and saying they're emphasizing that too much. Let's just again in perspective. We said
Sure.
there's a hodgepodge of weapons,
Yes.
including the bow and arrow. A third of the identified firearms seem to be repeaters, which basically means 2/3 were not.
Right.
You know,
Yes.
so there's a whole mix of stuff going on here.
And also the way they fought versus how the Americans fought
Yes.
was different. Where in correct me where I'm wrong here, Jim.
You're wrong.
Wrong.
The Indian warrior is an army of one,
Yeah.
whereas
Okay.
the United States acts as a group. And so there's these form skirmish lines, mount, dismount, blah, 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 blah. Everybody's doing all this shit. Whereas the Indians like, fuck that shit. And I'm just
We're just
charging
gonna
in
go
and
over
I'm
it.
going to
Which
This
is
is an
much
old
leads-
story, though.
Well, yeah, but that leads me to kind of like
Yeah, but
my
maybe somebody new is
and I think probably
no.
you and I might be thinking the same thing right now. Have we moved beyond, because you know the common criticism of Civil War tactics is they're still trying to plan out with a bayonet. They're still waiting on a bayonet attack, right?
Yeah.
Have we kind of, as an army, kind of now by this point figured out we're not waiting for a bayonet attack from the Indians?
Well, dude,
we're gonna
that's a good
we're gonna have a
Yeah.
good.
Well, here's why this baffles me. This is 120 plus years after, let's say, one of the most famous battles where this shows up. The Battle of Fort Necessity.
Sure.
George
yes.
is like formed lines. I mean, he's
Right,
out there forming standard British military ranks, right? And the French and their Indian allies are like, nope, we're staying in the woods. We're going to spread out. And it's like, listen, that's 1754.
Yeah.
Where they're already aware that the tactics versus the tactics are out of line with each other.
Yeah, you know, and the big thing though pervading the army mentality is that the Indians anyways will not stand up and fight.
Oh.
That they will scatter. They will scatter and run. Now we're talking, you know, as we're starting to talk about tactics and weapons, we should point out with these three columns, there is infantry in the field too.
Yes.
Obviously with Custer, we're talking more cavalry. But, you know, the cavalry tactics still call for dismounted skirmish lines and things of that nature. But again, the premise is you're likely going to be shooting at the enemy at long distances because they're going to run and scatter and they're not going to really stand up and fight anyways, which means you also don't really care if you're outnumbered. And again,
Right.
this is not Jim talking. This is the mentality,
the logic
the
of the
logic
time.
of it.
Well, I mean,
So you don't really care if
yeah.
they're outnumbered or maybe even outgunned because they're not going to stand and fight anyways.
Another
is
group of
what they
people
think.
did that, if I remember correctly, and that was the Revolutionary War era colonists, right? We did that. We did that here. I mean, and if it works for you, why would you change that tactic? I mean, if it's I guess I'm using the term "works for you" a little loosely.
Yeah,
there,
right.
But I mean, if it works in that situation, you know. But no, that's really cool.
I'm just baffled in a slightly, like, I'm not surprised by
About
it,
what
but
Parker just said.
No. I've been friends with Parker for a long time now. I've learned to now. I actually speak fluent Parker.
Longer than
I
Matt
just
and I have
love-
been mortal enemies because we're
100%.
still
Yeah,
figuring.
no.
This is the first time we've sort of guessed it
This
together.
is
We're
a
figuring this
much
out.
We've been into car
much
together.
more
Yeah.
ancient strange than your beef. But no,
no, was my question that out of line?
no.
I'm just. I like busting your balls.
No,
Matt
no,
just-
I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't like sitting here like, so what color is the sky? I mean, I just, you know, I was like,
Matt just knows he knows how to zing you, and you don't know what to do with it.
just sit there all dumbfounded.
So I'm more just like musing in a humorous and like out loud way. Like it's funny how you can be successful while not learning your lesson.
Yeah.
Because like if you think
like
about
the
how
joke
much
thing with me, like I should just let a joke sit there and then not
that is
carry it
actually
out.
that accidentally worked really well.
That's
But think about how much America progressed from the moment I just referenced, right? We're still British America in the French and Indian War. Now we're the United States of America, and we're pushing west. We've wrapped up our own Civil War,
And now we're the Brits.
and now we're the Brits. But it's
no
more
better
just
than
like,
a bloody English.
But it's like, here's that same, they'll wilt away before our presence.
Well,
and it's like,
right.
didn't
Yeah.
you learn when the Brits didn't wilt from you, or the Mexicans didn't wilt from you, or the Rebs?
Yeah. But again, at the end of the day, a lot of this strategy is really about making the Indians poor, starving them out, forcing them back to the reservation.
It's more the long game.
It's the long game.
Yeah.
It's not, battlefield victories. It's not Gettysburg and, hey, let's attack them at Culp's Hill.
Which is really
thing.
the diabolical stuff.
Yeah.
Like, psychological almost warfare.
It's if you attack the village, they will run, clean out the village, burn the teepees, burn the buffalo robes, burn the food store, kill the ponies, make them poor.
Like what Sherman did to the South.
Yeah. Which is, going back to our Washington conversation, this is Sheridan's Western strategy. So you're making them poor, you're trying to drive them back to the reservation, and then make them dependent on the white man's handouts.
Yeah.
But the Sitting Bulls, the crazy horses, are like, no, we're going to stay out here until there's no longer a buffalo to chase, and that's why the army has to come out and try to
Makes
get them.
sense. I'm thinking of that old adage, when your quarry goes to ground, leave no ground for them to go to. That's kind of what they're doing. They're just eliminating all options other than getting onto the reservation.
Okay.
It's really good. It's
Not going to lie, this conversation, there are very few things that kind of just work up the activist in me, but like discussing our push west, I'm suddenly like, God damn it. Like, we literally are just like destroying land that we didn't own. And I never get that way about things, but like, this is very much that era. Like, we're trying to force people into boxes, living the way we live, put them on these and it's just like, I get pissed.
It hasn't changed.
No, but like, I'm getting pissed just like going right now, like I want to stop Sheridan.
Yeah.
Well,
but not in the valley.
Yeah, right.
I didn't want to stop him there.
Yeah,
Right.
No.
See?
And it's funny that you just said I want to stop Sheridan, because to 99.9% of Americans, or any nationality listening to this, the guy they know is the Indian fighter is Custer.
Right.
It's
And
Custer,
it goes
yes.
back to the beginning of the conversation.
Right.
Why do I hate Custer? Because I'm pissed at what we did to the Indians, to the Native Americans, and Custer's the only guy I know from that era, and so I'm going to be pissed at him. And I'm glad he got killed. He got what was coming to him.
Ignoring Grant and Sherman
Exactly.
and Sheridan.
And the policy and the broken
ignoring
treaties.
The Indian
and
Bureau. All
the
of
whole
it.
9
Yeah,
yards.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
And themselves for now living on that land.
Right.
Right.
Give up your home if you're so.
My favorite
right.
point you've
Yeah.
made so far is that it's not Custer making policy. He can't make policy. He's just a dude. Right. He's not on, all those people. Well, he wasn't a general. Even better. Even better.
Right,
to see,
right. Even
this isn't his army.
Yeah.
He's a cog in the wheel.
All right,
the
let's
wheel.
keep us rolling here, boys.
So Custer's going to be in charge of the cavalry for the Terry column, okay? All right, now, so they go. Let's get them underway. They're heading towards
We've stepped
destiny.
off.
We did Crook June 17th. Should we go now?
Dude, let's
Yeah,
go to,
let's do it.
go to
all right,
Terry's
let's do it,
column.
let's do it. So the Terry column, mid-June, by around the 20th or so, the Terry columns and the John Gibbon columns have kind of united on the Yellowstone. Folks, Google a map or something while you're listening to this. Yellowstone is kind of on the north boundary of this thing. But we have an idea at this point that this big village trail, Sitting Bull and his followers, kind of leads along the Rosebud Creek and then eventually into the Little Bighorn River country.
Oh, I got
So
a map.
we know we're kind of going along Rosebud into the Little Bighorn River country. June 22nd, Terry sets Custer and the 7th Cavalry loose to follow the trail along the Rosebud. Now, Terry's orders are subject for some controversy. I might pause for a minute to see if we want to talk about those specifically.
Let's do
Yes.
this. Let's
All
do
right,
this.
I'm going to grab a water here. Discuss
no,
my
We
you're
have to demystify the Battle of the Little Bighorn today, definitively, for once and for all the world.
I'm first of all, Jim, if you're unfamiliar, every rabbit hole you want to go into,
We can do.
You can do
Yes,
it.
All right.
yes, this is a rabbit hole
Well, I just
safe zone.
took a hit of water to prepare myself.
I
for this
say
particular one,
to our listeners, our guests dictate whether they get a 90-minute, a 1 hour, or a 4 or a 6. If you combine, one of the things I'm most proud of and still most exhausted by from a production standpoint was in 2 sittings, we got 12 hours of content on World War II done.
Nice.
Broke it into 4 episodes. It was absolutely incredible. But like, if you think about it, I had 2 separate 6-hour recording sessions, and I was like, yeah. But then I had to edit it all, and I was like, no.
What are we up to today? Are we at the 12-hour?
No, we're 90 in. We're smooth.
It only felt like 12.
We packed a lot into that 90 minutes.
And think of all the stuff we didn't cover.
I know.
People are going to be like, oh, you
We
forgot
skipped
that.
a lot
That's
of
why
years.
we do that so you come back.
Exactly.
It's like, because I don't want to just tap the obvious wells. Like Jim Hessler's here to talk about Gettysburg.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I mean, right. This is.
Dude, your fans are probably going to be like, holy shit.
I hope so. No,
We should have Jim. You should have Jim come back on and talk about Tombstone.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a very pointed
Good night,
question
everybody.
right now.
Okay.
Of the two films, Tombstone, Wyatt Earp, which one does the gunfight better?
Ooh, yeah.
I don't want to ask which movie's better because I like them for different reasons.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But which one does the gunfight better?
I would say I like the Tombstone gunfight better, except for the part where Stephen Lang sticks his gun out of Fly's photography window and starts shooting. And Doc is running up shooting at the window. All of that Hollywood bullshit.
That doesn't happen.
You're right. I hate that part.
Okay.
But other than that, I like the way the Tombstone version is shot and edited and all that stuff.
In that scene, I like that Ike Clanton crashes a nude photo being taken.
I know, right,
I do enjoy that. It's
well,
like,
the famous Josie photo, which probably isn't Josie. And
Right.
what do you know? She's just taking it today. It's again. Hollywood, folks.
Yeah.
Hollywood.
I love the Wyatt Earp
yeah.
movie with Costner because
No, that's a good one.
I love it. It's that movie and probably the movie Gettysburg put me in the path of
Really?
like I really want because dude, it's such a big epic. It covers so much of his life. It's not just Tombstone Wyatt Earp. It's
right.
Dodge City Wyatt Earp. They don't cover Deadwood Wyatt Earp, where he's kind of a douchebag.
Yeah, I know that
I think it's Lawrence Kasdan who does that.
Deadwood Wyatt Earp is touched on in the show Deadwood.
Yeah, well, that's for
for like 10 minutes.
and he's kind of a douche.
Kind of a douche. But I know Kevin Costner's had a hard time making it as a big famous movie guy. But I love his westerns. I really do.
Maybe some of your Patreon money send Kevin's
Oh,
way.
we'll
Could
donate
you do
some.
that?
Yeah.
Maybe
He
those
needs
big
help.
record
You'll need
royalties you were talking about earlier.
Before we continue, my favorite thing about Kevin Costner in the modern sense is that he has just become the cowboy characters he plays. Like he just doesn't care and he's pissed off and grumpy.
Yeah.
Have you seen his commercial for like Green Mountain Roasters or whatever, his coffee commercial? Yeah. I can't believe that they approved it. They were like, act like a dick as much as possible.
Really?
Because they're like, he's like, yeah, there's a bunch of things or whatever in my life that, I just can't tolerate, but there's only a few things I can. And then he just looks at the camera and he's like this coffee. And then just rolls out. And it's like, but it's like the effort. It's like, dude, were you bothered to be here on set for 10 seconds?
It's like that old. Did you ever see those outtakes of Orson Welles doing wine commercials?
The wine commercials.
Yeah, and he's drunk.
And he's breathing heavily.
He's breathing heavy. He's like,
If it comes to wine,
All right,
I need love.
hang on to that because we're coming to War of the Worlds later this year. So I want
yeah.
to talk about War of the Worlds. I want to talk Orson Welles' dad.
Yeah.
That's his real legacy.
Wine
Jim,
is good for
let's
the
get back
taste.
to Jim,
let's
please,
get back.
ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, where
God
were
damn
we?
it.
All right.
No, you were about
Terry's
to.
orders.
Terry's
Terry's orders
orders.
to customers.
Yes.
All right. Steeped in controversy. Steeped in controversy because the popular conception is Custer, quote unquote, disobeyed orders. Here's the thing. In typical 19th century terminology, Terry, who was a lawyer in civilian life, starts off praising Custer, saying, look, I place too much confidence in your enthusiasm and your energy. I don't want to hamper you with precise instructions unless you find yourself, if you find yourself in direct proximity of the enemy, I don't want to hamper your movements too much.
Okay.
But this is what I think you should do. And so right then and there, kind of like Lee at Gettysburg, take that hill if practicable. Today, to this day, we're arguing, okay, is Terry saying Custer really should do this, or is he saying I'm giving you the flexibility? I think you got to have the flexibility. You're 19th century, you're dozens of miles apart from each other. You got to have the flexibility. But nevertheless, Terry goes on to basically say, look, follow the trail. If you think the trail turns towards the Little Bighorn, which we think it will, and it does, I think you should still proceed further to the south to make sure the Indians do not pass around your flank before turning into the Little Bighorn Valley. All right. So that's point number two. One final point, and then we'll get into the analysis on this. Last but not least, they pass a little tributary called Tulloch's Creek. Terry says to Custer, I want you to scout Tulloch's Creek. Send a scout up there. Tell me what you find and what's going on. Okay, that third point, Tulloch's Creek, Custer doesn't do. How important that is, we can debate, but that's one he doesn't do. But the other point about basically if you're following the trail and it turns into the Little Bighorn Valley, still proceed further to the south, Custer will not do that. And so again, did he disobey orders? Did he basically go directly into the Little Bighorn Valley, as his critics would say, to grab all the glory for himself? Or was it reasonable to say, look, I've got a hot trail here and I'm staying on the trail? That's kind of the crux of what, again, to this day, critics are saying he disobeyed orders. Supporters are saying, no, you needed that flexibility and you'd be crazy to give up a hot trail. And that's kind of the debate on it.
Forget supporters, forget detractors. What do objective people say about this?
I don't know if there are any on this topic. I mean,
That's
I don't.
interesting.
I
That's an
don't,
interesting point.
right?
I'll tell you what
right.
they say. Because this I'm objective. If I'm reading that, okay, and I'm taking Terry at his word, I'm saying that Custer has the discretion to make the decisions on his own based on what the circumstances are in front of his face. That's
I like the if practicable.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
it's a similar analogy.
it's a very
right?
very close
Similar
analogy to it.
So I think that is it.
Yeah.
That's the answer, and everybody should agree.
The challenge is no, and I think I agree with Matt.
See, there's one already.
There you go.
The challenge though is afterwards, because we know it doesn't go well. Afterwards, Terry and some of his supporters kind of pivot that around and say, well, look, we needed Custer with his faster moving 7th Cavalry to take more time to get to the valley so that Terry and Gibbon, who are still on that Yellowstone northern boundary with slower moving infantry, we need Custer to take longer so Gibbon and Terry can get here on June 26th.
Yeah.
And the implication, the accusation is, well, by moving in faster, Custer screwed up the plan, again, wanted to get the glory for himself. And Terry and some of his boys, though, perpetuate that idea. Had you waited until the 26th, my plan would have worked. And that's where a lot of this
Did he
comes from.
tell him to wait till the 26th?
Well, depending on whose account you read, I don't think so. But there are guys who say, well, before they left, we had this big conference on the far west. We mapped it out with pins on a map, and everybody understood Gibbon would be here on the 26th. Again, that's kind of the crux of the controversy.
Here's this thing I've come across in
But wait, I'm sorry. Can I
go?
So everybody understood Gibbon would be here on the 26th. Says who?
Says Terry and his
No.
Terry Gibbon and his supporters.
How can they guarantee that?
They can't.
Right.
They
So-
can't, but that's what they're saying afterwards, which is now putting the spin on Custer to say, okay, Custer disobeyed orders and screwed up the plan by getting there too early.
Nothing is ever certain in life as it's happening, but everything is certain in hindsight.
But it's not even that. It's not even just in hindsight. It's we're very specifically going to pivot this around to make Custer the scapegoat.
Well, right.
That's
so
what it really comes down to.
Here's
The
what I
dead
was getting
guy.
ready to say is I've learned when you're reading military orders, more often than not, if a specific thing is envisioned to be done, it is written as a very specific order. Otherwise, because this is way before the age of radio and digital communication, right? These guys have to live with that flexibility because I'm not going to be on the flank. You are, right?
Yeah.
So most orders are written very gray and flexible because there's this, hey, here's the overall plan here, and then here's your ability to work within it.
There's the concept of what do I want done versus I got to give you the latitude to figure out how to do it.
And then there's the I need this very specific thing done, and it comes down as a very clear order. Now you can always point to an exception where somebody just botched whatever,
Right.
But more often than not, so by this time we've just had an army. Almost all these players that we're talking about have some Civil War service, so they've been actively involved in orders and warfare and logistics. So we're very used to, if it needs to be said, it's probably going to be said. So one, I think I tend to just naturally agree with you that he didn't disobey anything. He made a decision. Second thing is I've learned is CYA mode, cover your ass mode is an instantaneous pivot.
That's what Terry's doing afterwards.
And that makes perfect sense to me because you see it in all wars and all places,
There's a famous Kennedy quote after the Bay of Pigs invasion.
Shouldn't have done that.
Fuck happened there?
We shouldn't have done that.
Victory has 1,000 fathers.
Yeah.
Defeat is an orphan.
Yeah, right.
Defeat's an orphan.
But you forgot the era.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and even that with the flexibility that we agree the order has to give Custer. That's exactly it. You know, once defeat happens, that initiative you're taking to follow that hot trail becomes the cause of the defeat.
There's another part in the story, and I think this is a conversation that Terry and Custer have. And I think it's the night before Custer leaves, and Terry says to him, "Now Armstrong," this is the way they do it in the movie. "Now Armstrong, don't be greedy. Wait for us." And Custer says, "No, I won't." Now, what is he saying? No, I won't too. I won't be greedy, or I won't wait for you.
Do we even know if that conversation happens?
Well, it kind of does.
Okay.
It happens in real life with John Gibbon, who's not in the movie. So in the movie they do it with Terry, but here's
that's right. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so here's an important part of that though. The Terry conversation, Terry reportedly does say to Custer the night before, "Whatever happens, hold on to your wounded."
Yeah.
So wounded in
You'll
battle.
need them.
Yeah, wounded in battle are going to slow you down. So something to think about there. But this particular conversation, it's a well-worn, it might even be a myth. Gibbons says later that, hey, look, 7th is passing us in review. We're all saying goodbye. We're, you know, making our busting on each other. And Gibbons says to Custer, "Don't be greedy. Wait for us." Gibbon, though, says later, or somebody says, Gibbon says later, "Look, I didn't really mean anything by that," but it's another one of those things that gets puffed up in the Little Bighorn literature. Like, aha, we knew he was going to be greedy, and he didn't.
Well, yeah,
wait for
it's
us.
easy to create a narrative when the guy is dead.
And that's what they do.
Like, I mean,
that's what they do.
Like, I'm
That's
exactly
what they do.
I'm a huge baseball fan. We're finally covering that on the show this season, and we just did the dead ball era. And in the look at dead ball, you know, one of the biggest takeaways for I hope for the people that aren't familiar with baseball, like I am, and like a lot of other baseball nerds, is the only reason we associate Abner Doubleday with the game is because in this beginning of the dead ball era, there was a commission that was formed to basically prove that baseball had American roots and wasn't this evolved game that came from Europe, even though it really was. And so somebody just happens to mention that Abner Doubleday, who was at the Elysian Fields as a younger man, not for baseball games, but just had like a local presence. He was actually in West Point when the baseball stuff was starting, but somebody said it, and they were like, "Sounds great. Abner Doubleday is an American hero. Was at Gettysburg, was at Fort Sumter." Like, and guess what? Doubleday's dead at that point, so he can't be like,
Can't say,
I didn't invent baseball.
Spalding Commission. Do I?
Yeah,
have
that
right?
was the Spalding. Yeah.
I just wanted to flex my baseball chops.
I'm
there
so
for a
happy
minute.
you did that. But yeah, that's the Spalding Commission. Basically,
I know a baseball is round.
Hey, that's the one with the stick, right? Yeah.
God, Parker.
So where were we?
But it's the CYA thing. It's like when the person is not there, we can create the narrative we want. So suddenly the people who are in charge and have the proverbial wave hose on the chopping block, they're like, well, here's why I shouldn't be in trouble. This guy went rogue.
So the narrative becomes Custer pushes the 7th Cavalry too hard into the Little Bighorn Valley, ahead of schedule, told by his scouts, you don't want to attack, this village is too big. And the narrative becomes that Custer does all of that anyways because he wants the glory. He wants it all for himself. He wants the 7th Cavalry to have the kill by themselves. That's what the narrative becomes.
There's another point where isn't he offered an extra cavalry unit and Gatling guns, and he says the Gatling guns will impede my march, and the 7th Cavalry can handle whatever is in its way.
Yeah. Now that's interesting.
Well, you know, and again, it's another criticism you hear a lot. Oh, Custer should have taken those Gatling guns. He should have taken the Gatling guns. The Indians are not just going to stand up while you unlimber that Gatling gun and
hand crank it.
Right.
How the Gatling guns, in my opinion, would have saved Custer had he held on to him and just not abandoned him to him. Had he held on to the Gatling guns, they would have saved him because they would have slowed down his march enough that he probably would have been delayed.
Oh, it would have been a different type of saving. It never would have.
And honestly, tactically for him, they would only work for him in defense if they had to retract into something like a circle or a square.
But to Jim's point, the Indians aren't going to come at you in a line. If they shoot these Gatling guns, they're going to go around, and you're not going to be able to meet them.
That's what I mean. Like at most, that would be it. But you're right.
They aren't ribs.
Right.
You know, they're not.
Now maybe if you want a mountain howitzer. Maybe if you want a mountain howitzer on the bluffs a mile away and you start throwing shells into the village, but that's not an option.
Right.
So they're getting. So now you mentioned before his Crow Scouts.
Yeah.
Is it just Crow, or does he have other enemies of the Sioux?
Yeah, mostly Crow, also some Arikara.
Arikara, that's right.
It could be enemies of the Sioux. People who, the Sioux have been pushed them off their land and they want to fight with the troops.
And Custer has a favorite scout, Bloody Knife, right?
Yeah.
And Bloody Knife is there's a little thing about him later.
Oh,
His death.
Oh.
And so the scouts are up ahead scouting.
I've got to learn. None of these stories end with happy things.
Not when you're talking about a battle.
No.
So
Not when the battle ends with Last Stand.
Yes, with Last Stand, usually nothing there is good.
Wait till we do our Alamo episode.
Oh,
Happy ending, right?
So, but one thing that we haven't touched on yet, and everybody in history loves numbers, is how large is the 7th Cavalry? So, how many companies? Is it 12?
Yep, 12 companies.
So it's 12 companies. Is it like, on paper we always say, regiment's 1,000 men. In that case, it would be 1,200 men. Is that the case in this situation?
This situation, on paper, 12 companies, it's about 640 guys.
So it's half of what it should be on paper.
Yeah.
Wow.
And a lot of your more experienced field officers are not there. Many of them are at the 1876 Centennial Exhibition in Philly. So some of your more experienced officers are there. So you're definitely a below strength regiment.
The Colonel Sturgis, I believe, right? He's the commander. He's one of those guys who's away.
Yeah, kind of like you alluded to earlier. There's always a colonel, an older guy, a desk jockey, which puts Custer in command in the field. But yeah, Sturgis in this case. Now, Sturgis has got a son
There you go.
serving with Custer as a young lieutenant. And sorry, but that's not going to end.
That's not going to be nice either.
That's another non-happy ending.
Oh boy.
So another thing, we talked about this on our show when you came on my show to talk about the Little Bighorn. We were doing Gettysburg connections to the Little Bighorn besides Custer. And there's another one, Miles Keogh, who was on Buford's staff. And I believe was with Buford as he died.
He was, yeah.
And so there's another. Okay, but now, so the scouts, they see the village. Well, first of all, there's warnings all along, right? The trail is huge.
They're following the trail. So what you've got going on, the campaign initially starts with this idea that you're going after Sitting Bull and his hard holdout followers. But as we've now delayed into May and now into June, you also have what are considered to be the summer roamers. Basically, the guys who will live on the reservation in the winter, go hunt in the summer, and kind of get the best of both worlds.
Smart.
So you get these parties coming off the reservations, and we're following a bigger and bigger trail. And Custer's scouts, again, as the narrative goes, are increasingly telling him, look, this is too big of a trail, too many Sioux, go back, it's going to be too big of a village for us. But, as we've said throughout, the mentality is not that they're going to fight, the mentality is that they're going to scatter. And so Custer has got a hot trail and he wants to stay on it.
Do you believe that there was one point where there were some scouts who didn't want to go any further and Custer emasculates them?
Yeah, that'll be more emasculates. Not like in the not literally.
Not literally. Castrate them.
Says the guy with curly oiled hair.
Yeah, right.
Come on, you Nancy.
Now let's prance about to Gary Owen like a man.
That's good.
You finally got one.
That was my one.
But no, do you
all right, I'll wait for the laughter to die down. Yes.
Oh, but the crowd goes wild.
Going wild, right? So early morning of June 25th. Are you good, Parker?
I'm good.
Early morning, June 25th. We know this trail turns into the Little Bighorn Valley. The scouts go up to a prominent rise that they call the Crow's Nest. It's just a little shelf on a small mountain, about 12, 15 miles from the Little Bighorn Valley, that the scouts from this Crow's Nest can see the trail going into the Little Bighorn Valley, and on the morning horizon, smoke, pony herds, things of that nature, that tells them, based on their experience, there is the village. So they call Custer up into this Crow's Nest. He can't see the village. And I've been up there, and I don't blame him, because from that distance, we're not looking for a village. We're looking for kind of anything that doesn't belong, and the scouts can see it, but Custer can't. So again, they're telling him, village too big, don't attack. Custer, though, says, okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hole up today, June 25th. We'll surround the village overnight, and we will attack on the morning of the 26th. Very similar to a Washita strategy, which worked successfully.
Sure.
But now the scouts, we're seeing some random Sioux around. You know, there's a Sioux over here leading some ponies and that sort of thing. Scouts are like, no, the plan is bad. You don't do that. If you're going to attack now. What myth are we up to now?
Like 700.
Yeah, myth number 700. The idea Custer did not listen to his scouts. Custer, in this instance, actually does listen to his scouts. They're going to persuade him to attack today, which is going to result in a midday attack in the village, which we kind of alluded to earlier, is a very different scenario from attacking a sleeping village.
In the middle of winter.
I want to ask a hard question. He's got this experience on Civil War battlefields. He's got this experience with a successful operation at Washita, and it's kind of mirroring that, right? Like we can hold up here, surround him in the night. Yeah. Why is he going against these things that have worked? Why is he just taking the word of these guys? Whether it's the Crow or whether it's his own scouts, but it's just like why just go and decide to change your vibe?
So this is one of the things.
Yeah, I told you I stumbled through what I was trying to ask there.
This is one of the things that in part leads to so many Little Bighorn books, because increasingly we're going to start asking those sorts of questions, and the only guy who can answer that question died on June 25th,
He's straight dead.
1876. So we don't know. You know, he doesn't come back and write memoirs and say,
valid answer.
But I think just thinking logically, back to your point, this is the best intel he's got. You know, whether he was sold or not sold completely in his own mind on the idea of waiting overnight on the 26th, somebody does persuade him that, you know what, okay, we should do it. There's also an incident too where, you know, you've got this 600-man regiment well strung out. They've also got a slow-moving pack train of supplies in the rear. One of the packs loses a box of supplies. Some guys go back to it, and when they go to it, they find an Indian rifling through it. Tom Custer comes back to George and says, hey, you know, Company F dropped a box. We've been spotted and that sort of thing. Yeah. So there might be, you know, I hate to say the white reinforcement, but that might be the white reinforcement you're looking for.
Are they spooked right now?
Yeah,
it's starting to feel like they're a little spooked.
See, I think that incident does it. I don't know. Spooked could be a good shorthand, but I don't know if it's quite spooked. But he's not. He's lost the element of surprise in his mind.
Exactly.
And so that plus they're seeing other Sioux, roundabout in the area. It's like somebody's got to see us and go back.
And whether and that's it. The element of surprise, and whether you're thinking, okay, we've been spotted and I've lost the element of surprise. I don't think they're spooked so much about being attacked, but again, what's the pervading fear? They're going to get away.
Yeah.
Right.
And if they know the army is this close, and Tom, has just come to me and said, hey, they
trust his brother.
They found a box of our hardtack. Now we're like, they're going to get away, and we got to move to attack.
Maybe more rushed than spooked, or rushed. I don't know if rushed is the word either.
I think rushed is.
So there's a whole lot of just like random weird stuff that's happening to validate this change in approach, right? Like there's just random guy with a bunch of ponies, you said, or mules, then it's like they find a box of hardtack, but it's like, dude, they have no proof that they're coming out of that village. Or
see, that's the thing. That's the thing is the guy going through the pack, I think, was going away.
So there's just like all these happenstance things that are happening,
which why spooked isn't a terrible word,
right? It's sort of just like
either way, it puts pressure on him, and with Jim saying they don't want them to get away, he's thinking, well, I don't know that these people where they're going. Some might go back to the village and warn them, and then they're gone.
And back to narrative. If Custer gets this close to the village and they do get away, who's going to be blamed?
Custer.
Why didn't you attack? Why didn't Custer? How did Custer let him get away? Someone's going to be blamed.
This is a no-win scenario, basically.
Yeah, maybe.
So
as
how
his
about
life?
Right, exactly.
Well, so going back to my question then about just like why are we picking this moment to start changing from the experience and things we have?
Well, how about this? How about this then? You mentioned earlier that Custer comes up the top of a hill and he's looking at two people going in different directions. come out and fight. You know what I mean? Like he's used to a different strategy, right?
Well,
maybe he's gotten so frustrated at them not following normal military protocols. Maybe he's like, maybe it's time to change up my tactics. Maybe.
So here's the other thing I was asking. So when you go to this moment where he's changing things up, isn't he still operating under the assumption that Gibbon's going to show up tomorrow?
Yes.
Yes.
True. All right.
So
at least within the next day and a half.
So then
2 days,
that makes me ask the question again, like why are we suddenly
Why not wait?
why not wait? Because
I think
the getting away logic makes perfect sense, but if they're as close to launching the pincer as they seem to be,
right.
where are you going to escape to? Because you go this way, there's a force out there. So it's like potentially.
Here's a question I have.
Like this would be the moment to be patient. It seems for me, who knows nothing. Like I feel like just be patient.
I don't know if he has patience in his body.
Dude, if I have
He's
it,
got the DNA. Yeah.
But here's the question I have though. You said Gibbon's got what 400 something men.
Yeah, now
Okay.
he's connected with Terry, so it's a little bigger column now.
But he's connected with Terry. So is there a point where the Terry and Gibbon column unite?
Yeah, so back to June 22nd,
Go
when
ahead.
Custer was set loose, when they were up on the Rosebud, that was when Terry and Gibbon had united. And so Terry is now riding with Gibbon.
Okay.
Right they're going along the Yellowstone, then basically southward on the Little Bighorn, into the Little Bighorn Valley from the north, while Custer's coming into the valley from the south.
Okay, so they, I see. So they swung around to the north while Custer. Okay. Now, how far apart though are they in reality? Like, do we know this? Like, where is the Terry Gibbon column at this point in the story?
Yeah, they're. I'd have to go back and look at the map to see where they are at this point. They're in the northern end of the valley, and I guess the answer is they're still at least a day away.
right.
Right. Okay.
Which is ultimately the answer. They're still a day away. You know, this whole thing about it's a great conversation, and it's
Oh well, that's true. We do know where they are because they do show up.
because they do live, right?
Right. Yeah.
Folks, go look at page 425 of the map. Kind of thing. But to the broader point, the patience thing. I think I agree. It's not in Custer's DNA. B, you're terrified they're going to escape. C, I'm not saying Custer wants the glory for himself, but damn it, you're this close.
Well, it's somewhere in the middle of I want the glory. I also don't want the shit.
Right.
Like at the other end of the spectrum.
And you got people squawking in your ear now saying that you got your intel squawking in your ear now saying attack. Look, again, we know the way it goes, that some faulty decisions are going to start to be made here. But this is, I think, what he's thinking.
And if you look at Custer here at Gettysburg, right, and they have to make the charge.
Hey, for the record, you're in Maryland.
Oh,
right
I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm not used to leaving Gettysburg.
On our next break from addressing Gettysburg.
Yeah. But like Custer, there's about to be a charge going in that's ordered in, and he rides to the front of it. He's like, "Follow me,
boys! Come on, you Wolverines!"
Like, he's a man of action. He doesn't like to wait.
Yeah.
He's impulsive. I'm
a doer, so I appreciate it.
Yeah.
You're the George Custer of podcasting.
Oh God, I hope not.
You are. And what did the great British philosopher Steve Winwood tell us? If you see a chance, take it.
Take it.
If you find romance, make it. And so that's
Finally,
what
I
Custer
thought
does.
he said.
Finally a musical reference. I get.
Yeah.
I thought that's what he said.
He said to roll with it.
That's
baby.
right. He did say.
Well,
that.
that's another one. Yeah, roll with it.
I thought we were going to roll with it. I thought that's what we were going to do.
Both work.
I went
And
with my
Custer
favorite
does.
Steve Winwood song.
Custer saw a chance. He took
took
it and rolled with it. So there you go. You got two Steve Winwood songs in one.
I just look.
Anyway.
I
And the
like,
romance thing, did he do that too?
Oh yeah, him and Libby. They were
that's
such
right.
a. He left his command to go be with her.
Okay.
Let's not go back to
Yeah, we don't need to
1867.
do
Let's
that.
say-
Yeah, part of doing this show is not just an exercise where I can kind of
In futility.
yes, extreme futility, where I can kind of like speak as like the third or sometimes the fourth voice of confidence and knowledge. Sometimes I just like to be super raw dogging it. I don't know what the hell we're talking about. And Little Big Horn's kind of one of those conversations.
They're backing.
But I grew up with the Custer's Last Stand is a lesson in hubris, right? Like that's the narrative I grew up with is don't be like Custer, don't be braggadocious, don't be greedy, don't be impatient. All
Wait
these
for
things.
your friends.
Yeah, but
Right.
but as as I'm listening to this story, this is probably the most comprehensive I've ever been to this story. I do find that these questions are semi-natural, one, and two, I will want to say this importantly, they're convenient and easy and safe to do 100 years later.
Yeah.
More than 100 years later. And I'm armchair historying right now. Like, I get that.
Yeah.
But they do seem like they're reasonable questions because of his own experiences. That's why I'm trying to wrap my head around this moment, because a lot is changing.
Yeah.
And like, normally when things get kind of crazy, you would try to go with what's worked for me.
Right.
And how does that apply to this
Exactly.
situation?
Exactly.
And that's why I'm like, what? Like, just because the scouts said, but there's all these million things happening.
The other modern vernacular along those lines I often use is sometimes, too, you get to a scenario with what I know, what I've done in the past, what's worked in the past is going to be wrong today.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, we don't all work in occupations where if we screw up today, all of the men under us get killed.
Sure,
Obviously,
sure. Thank God.
that's-
I would argue though that by the time it does get to the battle, he is still going, what's worked for me before?
Oh, yeah,
because
right up
his
to it.
plan
Right.
is what's worked for him
Right.
before.
Yeah.
So should we get to the battle?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of live in that moment for a second, just because it's kind of the big precipitating thing. No, we're done.
We've kind of done a son of the morning start today. We've kind of been a very non-linear
Fastball.
kind of
we've
narrative. We've been
jumped
all over
around.
the
But
place.
it's just,
right?
to me, it's important because right before we jump off into the inevitable catastrophe that this is, it's like this is the moment where that becomes a reality. Like, if he is a little more patient, if he does whatever, like,
But he's never been patient, though.
no,
That's the
but
thing. Like,
and I get that.
We're
But
not going to start today, right?
right. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
what's that famous semi-famous Custer story? I guess the one that Shelby Foote relays, right, where he's like, "The wall is this deep."
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
where what's his face, Maryland McClellan. McClellan is standing around
Yep.
like, "Oh, I don't know. How can we get across this water?" And they're having this big committee meeting over how can we get across this river, and he's just like, fuck this.
Well,
and
he
crosses it.
And
But
he's standing in the middle of the middle of river going, "It's this deep, General."
And I remember when I read that story, I'm like, man, I really love this guy because, and that's an example of his impatience. He suffers no fools. Like these generals are sitting there going, I wonder, blah blah blah, and he's just like, well, just get the fuck in the river and
Dare
find
I
out.
say something else too about Custer at this point?
Yeah.
If the Union Army in that early part of the Civil War, if it had more Custers, do you think it would have gone on for as long as it did?
I don't
I
know.
think he just would have had more dead generals.
Well, I like it. Yeah, I
think he got lucky.
He got lucky for sure, but I mean, like, I guess what I'm saying is the spirit. If maybe let me rephrase that.
Yeah,
if
the spirit.
McClellan had that get up and go that Custer had, would there be this continued controversy? I know we've discussed that a lot on this show, but would there be that continued controversy about McClellan if he had that same, like, let's do this, like Grant
Depends
had,
on the
that Sheridan
result.
had?
Well, look,
Depends
I'll tell
on
you
the
this.
result.
Touching on what you're saying and handing it off to you more or less in the same moment, if there's a bunch of things I've learned doing this show and throughout my historical career, but one of the things that I have taken away that I believe so wholeheartedly is I'm glad I have never been in a position where I have to make these decisions, these guys.
Yeah, right.
Amen.
Just because if you think about it, right, like,
Right.
you know, if he had this guy and like, why is McClellan this, or why is Burnside that, or why is Lee this? It's like, yeah, we have the luxury of debating that because at no point in our conversation are tens of thousands of people going to be killed or maimed. You just said that. Yep. But I think as you were saying that, it's like, this is why I think this moment right before it all goes to really is important to focus on, because I think if you're really trying to destroy a narrative, you have to look at all these variables, and it's not a single moment in this, as I'm learning in this conversation, is Custer just being like, huzzah, we're taking it to
Exactly,
him. Like
that's right.
that never happens.
That's
but
right.
in his mind, he's probably got a little bit of that.
Sure.
The other part of that is he's an officer. He's been an officer. He's got that COIA concern. He's got that, oh no, we might have been discovered. Well, scouts say this. So, like, there's a lot of information. So, one, I'm glad I don't have to make this decision.
Right.
And two, I think it's important that if we're going to get into what we know is that this fight's going to go very poorly for him in the 7th Cavalry.
It's something you can apply to any modern decision-making scenario. You've got a lot of information coming in from a lot of sources. You're filtering that in with your past
and
experience.
lots on the line.
Lots on the line, and now you got to come up with an action plan fast.
Right.
It's not, because sometimes when I do Gettysburg tours today, and we have modern military guys out there. Well, the staff comes in and lays out the this and that. No, you got in 1876, George Custer has got to make that decision like fast.
On the fly.
And he makes a decision. Look, I used to work for a guy who used to say, whenever, of all the decisions we make on the fly on a daily basis, 50% of them are going to be wrong. Whether that's true or not, but here he's got to make a decision on the fly. Yeah. We know the outcome, but based on what he knows, what he's done in the past, none of these at this point in the morning are bad decisions.
All right. So let's get into it then.
Yeah. What does he decide, Jim?
Oh, where the hell were we?
No, so that's what he's got all this intelligence.
We're going back to 1867, right?
1867.
Can you tell us more about Belknap?
Yeah.
So how did the Civil War start?
Exactly. Yeah. All right.
Who's your favorite founding father?
Key decision he makes.
Yeah.
Your favorite Columbus boat?
God damn it!
I'm going to wait for the laughter to die down.
No, I'm muted.
Jim, do you want to go get a snack while Parker continues with
Can I use the men's room? Yeah. Big decision.
Yeah.
He's going to divide the regiment.
Okay.
All right. So the first thing he's going to do, remember, we got our 12 companies. Remember like 5 hours ago when we talked about Captain Benteen? Captain Benteen is still here. Captain Benteen with 3 regiments. Three companies. Captain Benteen with 3 companies is basically going to be veered off to the left on a reconnaissance into the valley. Benteen's orders, subject to some controversy, but he basically seems to be told, reconnoiter the valley, go to those bluffs over there, see if you can see the valley from there, and if you can see any Indians or any part of a village. So 3 companies for now are gone.
Okay.
Another 3 companies under a guy we haven't even talked about, Marcus Reno, Major Reno, who, is Custer's nominal second in command, just by rank, really. But Major Reno, who is, again, not part of this Custer clan, not very popular in the regiment. Reno with 3 companies and some of the scouts, so about 150-ish men in total, they're going to be told basically to attack the southern end of the village, which we still think is fleeing. The village is on the run. Attack, and you will be supported by the rest of the regiment. Those are the orders Reno says he gets. Custer will keep 5 companies, so the strongest element he keeps for himself. What they're going to do, we'll touch on separately. And then last but not least, you got to detach a company plus to guard the packs and the supply train. Right. So basically now you've divided the regiment into 4 elements. Wow. This, again, is going to be a controversial thing. You don't really know where the village is other than it's in the Little Bighorn Valley. You haven't done any close-up reconnaissance, so you don't know how big they are other than what the scouts are telling you.
Right.
Now you've divided yourself, the old dividing in the face of a superior opponent, blah, blah. But you've got that going for you as well, and it's going to be, again, another one of these controversial June 25th decisions.
So what are the actual orders? Just attack the village? There are women and children in the village.
Yeah.
Is that just kind of an understood? Like
Never
you're gonna
stopped him before.
No, look, but I mean, like as far as the legality of the order, right? In a world of CYA,
are you saying what are the orders that Custer gave, or what are the orders that were given to him?
Both. Like, even when so.
Good. So what were?
Well, here's why I'm asking, because when the pincher move in a perfect world happens, they're still going to attack this village.
Right.
Yeah.
So in that order, is it just a general attack the village / only the fighting men?
Well, yeah.
Like, how do they, like, is the intention that they know there's going to be, quote, collateral damage? Or, like, how do we separate the non-combatants from the combatants here? Like, is that a thing even at any point?
Yes, and no at this point. Yeah, so kind of going back to what we said before, the ultimate objective, thinking the people are going to flee, is to break up the village and destroy their property. That's an objective. You want to kill the warriors, the fighting men.
Yeah.
But you do also understand there will be collateral damage, women and children. At the Washita, we should point out, at the Washita, Custer had given specific orders to avoid killing women and children.
Is he doing that this time?
Well, he hasn't yet. He hasn't yet. And, as we'll see, he's not going to get the opportunity to do that today. So it's quite plausible that similar orders might have been given had you ever gotten into the village at Little Bighorn, but we never get to that point.
All right.
But again, the orders he's given to Reno, who is basically now the equivalent of an advanced guard, the orders to Reno are basically the village is in front of us, It is on the jump. It is on the run. You attack with your 3 companies, and you will be supported by the rest of the regiment.
Okay.
Reno isn't sure where that support is going to come from. The narrative, he's going to later insist he thought Custer would follow him up immediately behind him. Custer doesn't do that. Custer heads into the hills northbound on the other side of the Little Bighorn River.
Yeah.
Probably to come around and hit the village in the flank. Again, we don't know because he doesn't survive to tell us.
Right.
But Custer goes in the other direction. Benteen is still off on this reconnaissance. He's not going to come back to the main trail about an hour later after Reno's attack has already faltered.
So what's different about this is that I think usually when he would divide his command, the fighting part of the command, in 3, all 3 wings would attack. But one of them is just off on a wild goose chase. So it's really 2 wings, and there's this huge village there that's way bigger than they think.
And as we've talked before, it's midday. Where you're not attacking a sleeping overnight village. It's midday. People are up and moving about.
So
That's
that was another question I had. And I guess I might as well ask it now. At what point does he realize that this is a lot bigger than
Too late.
Probably right before, right before it went dark.
Yeah.
No, but
So,
was this about the time when that starts?
So the village is in the Little Bighorn River Valley, low flat land in the river valley, basically on what would be the western side of the river. On the eastern side of the river, you have large bluffs, kind of that run north-south, but on the eastern side of the river. Custer, with his 5 companies, will ride up to the bluffs, overlooking the village, probably looking for another crossing to, again, either get behind what now is coming out to fight Reno or on the flank. And probably at that point is his first real view of the village. He's going to send out a couple messages, one in writing, the famous message with Trumpeter Martini, big village, come on, be quick, bring packs. So probably his first real view of it.
When he isn't there a point where he starts going down to attack the village, and then that's kind of like that's the point we're talking about, right? Where
just before that, so he sees the village. So he sees the village up from the bluffs, up high. He's got some scouts with him. The scouts, presumably, Crow scouts who presumably know this country, are leading him to what would presumably be the next crossing into the village. It's a drainage. It's a large ditch. People refer to it as Medicine Tail Coulee. You'll see it referred to as Ford B sometimes. But it's a fording area where we think we can get to the other end of the village. And again, that's where he's either going to force a crossing, he's going to try a delaying action to try to draw the warriors off of Reno. Debated.
What time of day is this again?
Yeah, so by this point in the day, we're in early afternoon. Wow. It was always traditionally thought that they attacked somewhere around noon, give or take. But local sun time, depending on what timing model you want to go with, we're probably in early afternoon.
Well,
right
at one
now.
point, the plan was to kind of hunker down for the night.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm asking, because it's like, well, that's a lot of daylight left.
Yes, it is.
There's like a ton of daylight left.
But basically a whole, because, when they were at the Crow's Nest talking about hunkering down, it's, 7 o'clock in the morning.
That's what I mean.
You'd have the whole day ahead
That's
of you.
what I mean.
And also, would you say it was 14 miles away from the camp?
Yeah, something like that.
So
right?
you've got to make up that distance. Is going to take time.
Right.
And then you got to get there and reconnoiter where you are and see, okay, what does it look like here now?
Yep.
One point before we were talking about attacking village, and you were asking about women and children and the orders, like don't shoot them. So I would imagine, and let's just make up a scenario, not do any real thing like Washita or here. Okay. So let's say we have a little village.
All right.
And we're all commanders in a unit, okay?
A village of podcasters?
A village of
Podcastia.
A village of our rival podcasters.
Yeah.
And so Colonel Jim says, okay, you guys take your battalions, and you're going to attack from the north, you're going to attack from the south, Matt, you're going to attack from the east, and I'm going to sit here with the reserves on the west side, and blah, 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 blah. But do not kill women or children. Okay. Now, we surround this village. We go into this village. We're firing indiscriminately at warriors who are surrounded by women and children. We're on horseback. You think we're going to miss?
Yeah.
So here's the thing that, again, this is when you infuse politics with history that annoys me. okay, we want to make Custer the bad guy. Okay, he killed women and children. We saw this in Vietnam too, where they did kill him. But when you're attacking a village, a sleeping village, even with orders not to do it,
but they're not asleep.
Well, whatever. Well, in our case, let's say they're awake.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
They're podcasting in their front yards.
Podcastia is wide awake.
Right, the village of Podcastia is
They're
awake.
setting up the studio. They're getting the mics all plugged in.
They're
All of a
sitting in
sudden,
the town
Callery
square,
shows up.
and all
Finding
their,
the fourth chair.
Callery's cavalry shows up.
all their listeners and their wives and sweethearts and children and nieces and nephews are all gathered around their tables, right, listening to them podcast. And I'm aiming
Those
for
poor
this
Baxters.
podcaster over here. And I'm 1, 2, 3, and he's down by the third shot, but 4 or 5 goes right past him and hits his wife in the head.
Trust me, Matt's taking his first shot at the Battle of Gettysburg podcast.
That's true.
That's
true. Yes.
Can I ask a Gettysburg related question?
Well, anyway, but yes, but can you get what I'm saying? Though?
I do.
Like there's you don't. There's the intention to kill, and there's the collateral damage.
Here's why I asked this question.
I think it's easier for us, never having been in these situations, to condemn them.
Armchair historian.
Sure, but here's why I asked this question.
Go, baby, go.
Because these are very different battles. I will recognize that, but let's just be very real. You gentlemen live in and work around a battle that's centered around a town, and at one point went right through the town.
I know where you're going with
and
this.
all we've got is Jenny. All we've got is one Jenny.
A fool for breaking bread.
Literally tens of thousands, if not millions of bullets flying through the air all around town, sometimes right through the town, things like that. People are hunkering, yes, but I'm sure there are here and there people on the streets moving to shelters, things like that.
Sure.
Jenny's the only one we got.
Who dies?
Right,
All right, well, so then educate me.
Because you do have some wounded.
Do we have okay.
Yep, yeah, having a couple of wounded.
But
5,000 wounded civilians. No.
we have a whole division.
whole
division of civies.
But to your point,
But here's
though,
just why I ask. Is this also, and this is part of the sensitivities of it, we are less fond of the, quote, red man at this time. So are they more willing to be indiscriminate?
I absolutely agree that they probably did.
It's not, I'm not saying, I'm not suggesting that there were ever any direct orders to say, like, wipe them all out.
Wipe them out.
But again, there's flexibility, there's personal beliefs, there's a lot of ingredients in the soup of how this comes about. But one of the big narratives of this whole era of conversation is the amount of innocent people that are eventually, quote, put to the sword.
Sure.
And,
I think like with Wounded Knee, I think you have more ground to stand on with that. Where
with Wounded Knee for sure.
Yeah, but with like an attack on a village where you don't have the landscape of the inside of the village. You've only seen it from the outside so far, right? So once you get in there, and now you've stirred up
it's like a
hornet's
bee's nest.
Yeah. Like it's very hard, even with your prejudices. I think the chaos of the situation makes it so hard. And also, don't forget, you're probably terrified too.
I literally was just asking more of a temperature check on what is the actual, like, going into this? Are they attempting to not hurt innocent people?
Going into the little Bighorn?
Yeah, or is it just kind of like, look, shit's gonna happen, just do it?
I don't know what the hell I thought.
Get them back on the reservation. Now there is, and again, not making excuses for any of that. There is a school of thought too that is Custer continues northbound with his 5 companies on the other side of the river. There is a school of thought that ultimately, when he sees the village might be bigger than he had thought, when he realizes Benteen with his 3 companies have still not returned to the trail yet, so we're operating shorthanded, and when he is unable to make a crossing at this Medicine Tail Ford B, there's a school of thought that he sees women and children basically fleeing out the northern end of the village, and that he, in his 5 companies, then turn in that direction to try to capture the non-combatants.
Okay.
Again, not everybody agrees with this. Custer didn't survive. He can't tell us. But there is a schooled learning on this idea that might be what he's doing. The village is too big. If we can round up the non-combatants, that will kind of neutralize the warriors. They're not going to want to fire on their women and children. And again, we can kind of get everybody back onto the reservation.
I'm just trying to understand the atmosphere of all this, because it's insane how much is happening. Like all battles we study, everything happens at 1,000,000 miles an hour.
Yeah, right.
So just trying to wrap my mind around it, just because it's like, well, if you're attacking a village, you're attacking homes, say it very clearly.
Yes.
And
But I think the point you were making, though, I think before with the Gettysburg thing was that, and even with the wounded that we did have, it wasn't a dozen even, right? It was like under 10, I think, even, right? So it was a small number of people. But they're not in teepees; they're in basements.
No, I get it. I get
it. So it's and a lot of the woundings were people like you're saying going from one shelter to another, and a stray bullet hit them. They weren't targeted. Jenny Wade even was an accident, right?
Ultimately,
well, no, you might not know this, but Jenny Wade actually wasn't an accident. Do you know this?
Tell me the story.
So it basically boils down to it was a hitch up. No.
Oh, okay.
So Jenny Wade
Let's
is
see how good he
actually
remembers it.
Jenny Wade is actually pregnant.
I think I've heard
and
this.
it's Robert E. Lee's baby.
Okay, that theory I've not
heard. And that's
heard.
the only reason he brought the army to Gettysburg, so he could take her out.
They were targeted.
It was an assassination in force.
And listen, and Jackson is dead the month and a half prior, because he found out about the baby.
He knew about it.
And he said, and what did he say? He said, I think you should do the reconnaissance tonight.
All right.
General Jackson, you should do the reconnaissance.
That's how it went.
Jim,
if you didn't know that,
the men were ordered to shoot. I should give up my guide license right now.
You have to update your tour now to be like, look, this. Imagine, what did Matt say? The Marble Man. Imagine the scandal of it all.
Not so marble.
Happy to
Not
do
a
so.
single demerit.
One part of him was marble, and it got Jenny. Yes. Okay.
All right, I didn't know you're out.
Enough. I am so sorry to bring it to that level, guys.
Wow.
Go. All right, back to Little Bighorn.
No, all right. So being serious again, like the atmosphere of this moment, as I'm taking it in, I have all these questions, but I think these are reasonable questions, right? Especially for something that has such a stigma of both hubris and
you're right,
attached to it. I just want to understand it. So all right, so
it's the narrative.
So Benteen hasn't caught up. I keep wanting to call him Backteen. I don't know why. I just keep wanting to say it.
I keep thinking of Dinteen.
Reno. By the way, any connection to Jesse Reno?
No. Common question. Not connected.
Not connected.
I was wondering.
I'm
glad you asked that.
If they're distant relatives or something, who the hell knows?
But they're not direct. All right, so Reno has been peeled off to go attack what they think is going to be the fleeing portion of the kind of advanced guard, right? That's what you said. Yep. So here we go. We're in it. We're coming down the chute. Custer's tried to make this crossing. It's devolving in front of his eyes. He's, issuing... I don't want to say issuing, but he's written either the letter or basically get here quick, bring
message.
Packs.
Yep. Come on.
Hurry up.
So it starts with Reno, though.
Yeah. I was going to, let's go. So let's touch on Reno because it's an important part of it.
And this is where Custer's favorite scout comes in again.
So Reno and his three companies going into the valley are now going to hit basically the southern end of the village. The village is not running, so it's the southern end of the village. Warriors do come out and meet Reno, but Reno doesn't have Indian fighting experience. As I said before, he's not popular within the regiment. He's got a good Civil War record, and I always give him credit for that. Maybe doing a little bit of drinking. That's another contentious, controversial point. But Reno's attack falters. He is told basically to charge in offensively, stay mounted and charge in, but he sees what he later says the earth seemed to be growing Indians. And so Reno orders a stop, a dismount, fight on foot. Here comes our skirmish line. Form a skirmish line kind of out on the open prairie. And as the warriors now coming out of the village to protect their homes, start out flanking his position, he quickly falls back on foot into kind of a timbered defensive position. And within 20 minutes or so, Reno's attack is pretty much fallen apart. You have any thoughts on that?
I do have lots of thoughts on that. I was also trying to discreetly pour a drink. It just sounds like I took a leak.
Which we were all watching in the studio.
By the way, I took a leak.
Exactly.
I was so worried you were going to spill it on the board.
No.
Like,
I was listening to it, pretending that I couldn't hear it, and I was like, "That is a treat for the ears."
So 20 minutes,
give or take.
Yeah, that's how long. That's how long it took to pour that.
No, it didn't.
Yes.
But now, at this point, though, Reno is.
So we're in the timber.
Yeah, so we're in the timber, but like, there's a point where Reno's like, mount up.
Yeah.
For those of you who wish to make your escape, follow me.
So going back to Reno, he's the wrong guy in the wrong place at the wrong time. He's not a cool-headed combat leader. Bullets are flying. We got confusion. Whooping Indians and everything. It's Bloody Knife.
Bloody Knife. Yeah.
So Custer's favorite scout, Bloody Knife, who is half Sioux, is with Reno. And, as the story goes, Reno's kind of trying to, via sign language, figure out from Bloody Knife, what's the enemy going to do? What should we do? Bullet comes, crashes into Bloody Knife's head.
No.
I know, another non-happy
non-happy ending. Who could have seen that one
I know,
coming?
in an episode
More coming your
full
way.
of
I know.
happy ending. Bullet
tight.
crashes into Bloody Knife's skull.
But the natives get to keep the land in the end, right?
Maybe.
That's dark.
Some of it.
Depending on which natives we're talking about.
So I'm hearing nobody wins.
Yeah.
I'm hearing this is a total loss.
That is so dark.
So Bloody Knife's brains splatter on Reno.
my.
A lot of people think, again, another common piece of the narrative, a lot of people think this further unnerves Reno. And now he kind of, mount up, they mount up, dismount, mount. He kind of has this series of conflicting orders. But then he basically mounts up and says, basically to his command, to the effect, those of you who wish to make your escape, follow me. Those are the orders, right? No company level, hey, do this. No organization, just mount up.
Yeah, that's not an order.
Run for your lives.
Exactly, run for your lives. And Reno leads now what he calls a charge back in the direction they came, back away from the village across the valley. But now warriors are coming up on horseback and are pumping gunfire into Reno's flank. This is where Reno's command, 40 casualties or so, this is where they suffer most of their casualties in this run from the river. And they get basically kind of veered off across the river, and they find a spot on the bluffs back on the other side of the river, and they are now out of the fight. So Reno's attack is a disaster, doesn't work in any way, shape, or form. Lots of killed, number of wounded, number of guys left behind in the valley.
I was going to ask, how many of them
yeah.
even remounted?
Exactly.
Would you say that all took place as Custer is moving?
So that's happening while Custer is moving northbound. Now they're on the same side of the river, but Custer is now 1 mile to 2 miles beyond where Reno has reached the bluffs. And, whether Custer was aware of Reno's defeat, whether Custer had scouts on the bluff, seeing this and reporting back, again, remains a point of conjecture.
Can I give you a little a footnote, foreshadowing, or we'll go to the end of the story. So Bloody Knife, Parker, you'll like this story.
Okay, good.
Bloody Knife, after the battle, the women and children would come out, and
The ones that weren't killed.
the ones that weren't killed would come out and mutilate.
I'm sorry.
The
That was
bodies.
so dark.
Oh, wow.
Don't worry, they get their revenge.
Yeah.
At least on this today they do.
And Bloody Knife is beheaded by 2 girls.
Holy
2 little girls.
mackerel.
Right? And
Female empowerment right here on the show, folks.
And they walk back into camp, each holding onto one of his braids, his head swinging between their arms, and they bring it to their mother.
Wow.
Remember, Jim said before that Bloody Knife is half Sioux. Well, guess who their mother was? They had the head of their uncle in their hands.
What? Look, I'm not bothered.
See, this is the stuff about history that really just is okay.
I'm both bothered and unbothered by
Okay,
that story.
so-
Here's why I'm unbothered by that, because we learned from Dr. Jim Broomall that Sullivan Ballew's entire body
Yeah,
was
that's true.
Yes.
desecrated.
Yeah,
So it's like,
yeah.
I'm not surprised by
But
that.
You hear about stories like this in the native kind of
That's
world.
diabolical, though.
You hear nothing as dark as this, but the story
there's
of
darker.
Sacagawea or Sacagawea, however you want to pronounce it.
Sack.
Yeah, that's kind
Call her
of
Sack.
Yeah, Sack.
Don't.
Yeah.
Don't.
When she is interpreting, it turns out that the person she's interpreting to, in that famous exchange between the French and all those different tribes, it ends up being her long lost brother.
Oh, right.
That
Yes,
she was
yes.
kidnapped. She was kidnapped away from the
Did
tribe.
they
as a
know
kid.
that was their uncle?
No. The mother said, "Oh my God, that's my brother," but the kids didn't know. Do you know? Are you familiar with that story?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
I mean,
it's
that's
in
just
the book,
wild. I mean, this is such a small world.
Oh well,
I
it
mean,
is.
but-
And we were talking about the expanse of the plains and how hard it is for a 50,000 man army to, do it. But here, these people are all running around. The enemy, different side, blah 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 blah. Oh, it's my brother.
So
and
these-
and his niece cut his head off.
So when you say two girls, you weren't you know,
They're not women.
they're literally like
maybe preteen, high school, middle school age.
Can you just imagine just being a couple kids like, yeah, let's go hack this dude's head off and bring
Yeah,
it back.
that's not going to be the last time today that happens.
To be very fair, all of these kids had grown up in a world that we would not consider situation normal.
We would, yes.
They've been on the run. They've seen lots of violence. Right. I mean, they've seen lots of violence. So what would you become capable of changes when you go through, and I've never gone through that, and so thus I never want to know what I'm capable of. But the irony, I don't know if it's irony, but just what are the odds?
Yeah.
Right? In a million square mile department we're talking about,
Yeah.
what are the odds?
I know. And that's
wild.
All
right.
Cool. So back to now, Reno's. Reno's on the block.
Imagine that bloody knife getting hit in the head with a bullet wasn't the worst part of his story. Like, just imagine that.
Yeah.
Well, that's crazy.
Good point.
Anyway, sorry, Jim. Go ahead.
No, it's a good point. So Reno's on the bluffs. Here comes Benteen. Benteen comes back to the trail. Benteen has received that message. Benteen, come on, be quick. But now Benteen, in coming back to the trail, comes upon Reno's command first.
Uh-oh.
Benteen's got to make a decision. Do I go follow Custer's trail, or do I stop and help Reno's shattered, decimated command? They've run up from the river. They've ridden up the bluffs. They're winded. Reno's lost his head. You know, you got heavy casualties.
Yeah.
Reno report.
Not lost his head like the other dude.
Yeah, not literally.
He's lost his mind.
Not literally. But Reno supposedly says to Benteen, for God's sake, stop and help me. I've lost half my command. Benteen makes the decision. I'm going to stop, help Reno. Benteen will say later, look, I didn't know where Custer was, which is probably a lie. But, you know, I figured with 5 companies, he could help himself. I've got 3 companies here with Reno. They look like they're in bad shape. I stopped. And at this point, Custer's doomed, because now you're going to have Reno's battalion, Benteen's battalion. The pack train's going to come up within an hour. All of these guys are now going to corral on what we call today what we call today Reno Hill. What we call today Reno Hill, which is about 4 miles from what we call Custer Hill. These guys are going to corral, basically sit out the rest of the fight while Custer is continuing to move northbound. And as I said before, maybe going to get the non-combatants, we don't know. Maybe looking for another way to cross the river, we don't know. But those are kind of the 2 theories.
Jim, you mentioned Giovanni Martini, John Martin, as they go. So he delivers the message. He's an Italian immigrant. Does that present any communication problem with him and Benteen?
Well, they were like, stop talking with your hands. I can't understand a fucking thing you're saying.
So, yeah. So
Is that blood or spaghetti sauce on your shirt?
They say,
All right, go ahead.
Martini.
Sorry, no more.
Or Martin, if we prefer. Martini.
Right.
Yeah, Martini.
So, yeah, Martini doesn't speak English very well at this point in his life. Benteen would later insist that Martini said to, Benteen says, where are the Indians? And Benteen would insist that Martini replied, oh, they skedaddling. Giving Benteen the idea that, okay, they're running and you've missed the fight.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you got kind of those, which again, does that sort of fester with Benteen a little bit? That SOB Custer kept me out of the fight? Maybe. Speculation, maybe, but it's part of the narrative.
Sure.
And so you got now this mentality of, okay, Martini's told me there were, now again, Martini in later years would say, no, I didn't tell him that. So you got a little bit
Oh,
of
that's interesting.
Yeah,
But
so you
also-
got a little bit of a debate there.
Martini was with Custer. This was his luckiest day ever because Custer sent him with the message and he survived.
Right.
Otherwise, he would have been there with Custer.
He's literally,
Custer.
Martini is literally the last white guy to see Custer and the 5 companies alive. So make whatever pasta jokes you would like, but he's the last one.
First of all, I will always make them. I'm Irish. We love talking about the Italians. But I think, I've known this, but I think what we're doing today is reinforcing this, like, question every narrative.
Exactly.
That especially when a big part of that narrative is not in place to corroborate or defend or it's funny because we talked about CYA mode, right? Like, after this disaster, everybody that thinks they're going to have something lobbed off of them career-wise or whatever is like trying to get all this blame off their plate. And, Benteen probably doing a pretty decent job of that just by making this like, he turned it into this glory hunting moment. You know, oh, he sent me away so I couldn't be a part of this. Like, it's like starting almost instantly.
Yeah. Reno's got to be thinking, oh, my career's over.
Right.
Not only did that attack but I just left 30% of my command down below.
Yeah.
He's got to be thinking his career is over.
That's a good point.
And you know, so, but you also have within the Reno and particularly the Benteen contingent, you do have Custer loyalists.
Yes.
Captain Thomas Weir, for example, is one of the Custer clan. So Weir now starts needling these guys. Hey, we can hear gunfire in the distance. That's got to be Custer. When are you going to go to him? And, you know, Reno's like, oh, we got to get together and we got to wait for the packs. And Benteen's like, no, we don't have orders to go. They're delaying. So Weir, with one company, is going to mount up and ride out to try to find Custer.
On their own.
On their own. So now command is broken down, right? You got
Right.
guys now just doing whatever the hell they want to do.
Yeah.
Benteen will see this and I think kind of say, oh, crap. If he reaches Custer, you know, I've got some explaining to do.
Yeah.
Benteen will mount up, and eventually Reno will follow up with the wounded. But it's a really half-hearted effort. We're, though, in the lead. We're in the lead. We'll get to a high ground, a high point, about a mile or so away. And from there, Weir may or may not see some of what we call Custer's last stand. But nobody in these companies under Weir, under Reno, under Benteen, or with the back train, none of these guys go more than a mile up. Custer and his 5 companies are left on their own.
Is Weir stopped by a small band of Indians that come at him, or is that just in the TV show?
Yeah, the way they portray that in the movie is they condense a lot. Son of the Morning Star. So Weir and his company probably do stay out there for quite a while.
I think I'm going to watch that tonight now, by the way.
You can only find it on YouTube,
Yeah, it's
and
on
it's like
YouTube.
somebody's like digitized VHS copy of the TV show, but it's still good.
Yeah. Now remember, by this point, you know, there's smoke, there's dust. You've got people riding around. Visibility is crap at this point. What Weir and his guys would later say were things to the effect of, well, we could see the Indians shooting at objects in the ground, but we didn't know what they were. Right?
Yeah.
Finishing off Custer's wounded, probably.
I wonder what that could be.
Right. And so eventually
They're aerating the ground.
the Indians, with Reno coming into the hills, this is a classic defeat in detail. Right. Now all the warriors have turned on Custer. Then when they kill Custer's command, they turn back to Weir and Benteen and Reno. So it's a classic defeat in detail. But again, nobody is in any position to help each other out.
So before we talk about the actual last stand and whatever, does Custer die with the sun shining on him? Like, I mean, I'm just trying to place this in the day, right? We had our story started at 7-ish in the morning,
right,
and
we're
then
still
it moved.
in the afternoon.
So like when this is all breaking down for the 5 companies, it's like 3, 4 o'clock maybe.
By estimates, Benteen has reached Reno, give or take, sometime around 4 p.m.
Okay.
Now remember, again, we're using non-standardized time, but what is the local sun time?
Right.
You know, and there's a wide variation. I set my watch when we're in Minnesota time, Chicago. You know, there's a wide variation. It's the afternoon.
Sure.
Yeah. Yes. The sun still is shining.
Well, I just like to ask it like that because, like, I think some people will just imagine.
No, it's a common thing. Every battlefield you go on, people will stop you and say, "What time was it?" People in the 19th century didn't give a crap what time it was, but we do in the 21st century.
For me, I'm just trying to place the visual of it. Like, is it like the bright part of a day?
No, the sun's coming down.
No, but I mean, this stuff for me, I'm a very visual person. This stuff matters.
Again, this is something that
because if I go there, I want to visit it when the sun's coming down.
Let's say we're around, give or take, 4 or 5 in the afternoon now.
Great.
And actually, when you watch Son of the Morning Star, this part of the fight is with a lower sun in the ground or in the sky. So it is pretty close.
And
to,
I should point out when I say 4 or 5 o'clock, that part of the country, that time of the year, however the time zones were aligned in those days,
it's summer.
It didn't get dark really till about 9 o'clock. Yeah. So you got we might think on the East Coast here 5 o'clock is early evening. You still got plenty of day.
Yeah, and that's maybe more for me personally, just trying to like visualize it in my mind.
The same way.
People do that all the time. What time is it? I get it. So,
Reno, you've been out there many times. You've been to Last Stand Hill. You've been to Reno Hill. Which is the better position to defend?
Oh, interesting. Reno Hill is a better defensive position. It's not great, but it's better. Reno Hill will give them some access to water.
Right.
Not you've got
Not easy.
Yeah,
access.
you've got to crawl a little
Yeah.
bit, but at least some access. Reno is kind of a saucer-shaped position, which gives you defense from 3 out of 4 sides. Better position would be Reno Hill.
Okay. All right. So
So how do we know? Like, what point does Custer know this has dramatically gone against him? Like,
Yeah.
like to the point where like we're now imminently looking at the destruction of 5 companies of cavalry and things like that.
So again, nobody survives, so we
Correct.
don't know.
So
But-
every soul that's remaining
yeah.
with him, every soul is lost.
Exactly.
Yes.
So Martini, the last messenger, has left. There were 4 scouts who were told to leave. They've left. Everybody at this point is doomed.
why were they told to leave?
Well, basically, because they were, as we believe, or as they said, basically they were told, "Hey, look, you were hired to scout.
Oh.
You weren't necessarily hired to fight. If you want to go, go." And,
Right.
okay,
They're like,
see ya.
good idea.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
going.
do we learn anything about his decision making from just like the arrangement of the bodies, where the horses? Like,
we try.
do we learn like, hey, he knew in this moment he was fucked?
Well, so yeah. What do we have left? We have
It's called all point.
Yeah, you're right.
we have Indian accounts. What's unique about the Little Bighorn battlefield is where they buried the bodies later are marked with these white marble headstones today. Now, they are not 100% accurate. In fact, they may be wildly inaccurate, but they at least give us a pattern of the dead, which we have that. And thanks to a 1983 range fire that was out there, we have archaeology, which at least would tell people where firing positions were and things of that nature. So we got kind of those 3 things that play together, and I think at least give us a more educated version of the battle. In the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, it was basically just throwing darts.
You can make up whatever you wanted.
They went this way, they went that way. At least today, you sort of have kind of a standard model on this, but a lot of variation on how people interpret.
So what's the narrative then in terms of the native defense? Because that's one of my favorite things is not Custer's last stand. Is somebody basically framed it as like Custer's defeat, or basically this whole like stand that this community made.
Let me ask you
I think
this.
you sent it to me actually.
Look, Custer loses because the Indians win. I mean,
Right.
that's at the end of the
Let me
day.
ask you if you want to know like their defense. Imagine you're upstairs in your living room and somebody breaks into your house.
They're gonna die.
And your children, right. And how ferocious are you going to be coming at them?
Oh, they're going to die.
Right.
So that's what they were.
No.
Right?
So I get
Like,
that. That's why the whole plight of the indigenous people of North America is like one that like really stirs me up. It's like just imagine somebody saying your home is now mine. Like what?
Yeah.
Get fucked. But going back to what I'm asking is, so now that Custer is doomed and there are going to be no survivors that witness how this happens.
Right.
The narrative, at least of just like, if I want you to tell me what does Custer's last stand kind of look like. Do we have accounts from the native village where they're like,
so we do. We have a lot of them. The challenge, before I get into it, the challenges are you had interpretation issues, right? It's been the day when in the years after the battle when you are interviewing participants and trying to find out what happened. White America wanted to know what the hell happened, but you've got interpretation issues and you have conflicting accounts. And last but not least, as we talked on earlier, these guys, the natives fought individually. So, you don't have, my division under Sitting Bull, went this way kind of thing. It's a very individual sort of thing. So it's hard to piece together.
That's a good point. Like we like to say, Crazy Horse was a chief and Sitting Bull was a chief, but it wasn't like, follow me, boys.
Right.
Like it was like, yeah, okay, I'm a chief, whatever. I'm going to go after you. Like it wasn't organized, but we need to have things organized because of the way we think.
So I totally agree. And so what we think, generally speaking, Custer's got his 5 companies. 3 companies probably now kind of operating as a wing almost under Miles Keogh, which would be Keogh's Company I, Company L under Custer's brother-in-law, James Calhoun, and Company C, which would normally be Tom Custer's company, but Tom's riding with headquarters today. 3 of the companies, I think, are kind of acting, I don't want to use the term rear guard, but they're kind of dropped off on the southern end of what we call Battle Ridge today. And I think what they're probably doing is probably trying to hold off the warriors who are now crossing and trying to get in Custer's rear. So you're going to form on this ridge line to try to hold off the warriors from encroaching on you, but I think also too possibly opening up a corridor for Benteen and Reno. Right? Benteen and Reno are going to be coming from the south, from that direction. So if you open up the corridor, Benteen's got this order. He's got to be on the trail by now. And I think there's probably, strategically, tactically, they're still there. They're waiting. They're hoping. And of course, nobody comes. So at some point with pressure increasing, Calhoun's Company L starts to get under pressure. The C Company troop, they are possibly ordered to kind of push down towards the river, to kind of push some of the Indians back. The Indians say they counterattack and basically wipe out C Company. And then it kind of starts to just be like dominoes. C Company falls. They roll up onto Calhoun's L Company. They put up, I think, probably a decent defense, but they fall. They then roll down onto the horse holders and Keogh's company, and with probably within a shockingly short period of time, I think 3 of Custer's 5 companies have been cut to pieces.
Does anybody make any reference, like does Custer or his men on even the individual, did they attempt to surrender? Like, is there any attempt to stop this?
Might have. I think they committed suicide before they would do that.
Yeah, the mutilation. You guys, you were shocked to hear about the bloody knife story. That's kind of a well understood thing. Yeah. You don't want to surrender. You're not going to surrender.
Yeah. You ever read Empire of the Summer Moon?
Yeah.
No.
It's a very good book about the Comanche, and you did not want to mess with those guys.
Sure.
And there's there's several parts in there about the things they would do. And you can cut this out if you don't want your audience to hear it. So like if they would to attack a settlement and take prisoners, men and children and women and everybody, they would often tie, say, the women to a tree, and then tie the men to a tree across from the women, and they would rape the women. Oh, first they would rape the women in front of their husbands, and then they'd go over and murder the husbands and probably rip them apart in front of the wives, and then they'd go back and kill the wife. Like, just, it's sadistic, torture. It's not just killing. It's like, because they believe in the afterlife, we're handicapping you by doing these things. And so, we're going to see a lot of that after the Battle of Little Bighorn.
Yeah.
Do we know who took the kill for Custer?
We don't.
George
George walking. No.
Well,
George
we don't. We don't.
The reason I was asking, you have these things like, oh, that was me, and blah,
sure.
blah, blah. I just didn't know if there was any of that.
Well, there is that, but again, theories of that. So one theory, which I do not subscribe to, and I think most serious Little Bighorn people do not subscribe to, there's a theory that Custer was among the first killed at that first crossing at Medicine Tail Ford, and
before they head north.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I don't know.
During
that.
Well, because again, there were some accounts later. Oh, we shot a buck-skinned officer who fell into the river, and the soldiers stopped. You've got that, but then you also, I think people who want to buy into that theory don't want to have Custer responsible for the debacle. So, he got killed early, and then the subordinates kind of let it fall apart. You can make that argument. Given, though, the way they keep moving north, given the amount of fighting that continues, given where Custer's body is found, given that Custer's body was found a couple miles away, surrounded by his headquarters staff, I don't think him getting killed first at the river is logical, but it's another one. The narrative myth number 701.
Yeah, 707 at this point.
Another one it's another one that dies hard.
You'd have to believe that if he was killed down at the river and stayed a horse, then they could have stabilized him on his horse and ran back with him while fighting.
And why at that point, if you really have gone into a panic because Custer's killed, why don't you turn back towards Reno, Benteen,
that
and
was
the
my
pack
question.
train?
If he actually, if you were just a bunch of insubordinates,
Plus, isn't John Martin still with them at that point? Because isn't it there?
No, at that point he's left.
He's already
left to go to Benteen.
Oh, that's as he's coming to the river. So as he's gotten to the river, that's done. Okay.
So I'm looking now. I've been following along on the MPS map.
Yeah, some good maps.
And I've been following the story along. And to anyone listening, I recommend just go into MPS, go into their site and looking at the map. They've got a really good one. And what I think is really interesting here is that you have what is the word that they used? They use as far as the route that they took. They have known, and
Yes,
conjectural.
yes.
What I think is really interesting is, of course, all these years later, and of course, George Armstrong Custer dies. We're still looking at a map full of conjecture.
Yeah.
And I think what's really cool to me is when I'm looking at this map, even like we lose track of Custer like right after they split. Right after that, and it's really interesting. He's riding technically through where the Reno encampment is at some point, according to this.
When he came up onto the bluffs, he rode through
right through it,
where Reno will entrench later.
So and they didn't pass. Like there was no contact.
By that time Reno was in the valley
already
fighting.
That's
Reno
right.
Was
He
in
was
the valley fighting.
That's right. It's a timing issue. Okay.
All right. So these 5 companies get annihilated, like to the man.
In the time it takes a man to eat his lunch, according to one of the Indian.
Which, by the way, we haven't had lunch today. I'll just
I know,
point that
starving.
out.
All right, yeah,
That's
yeah.
true.
So, but
That's
like,
true.
so I mean, these are things that help me.
We're an
paint-
oppressive podcast. You will podcast. You will podcast continuously.
What?
The completion of the topic.
At what time frame does it like they're listening to the gunshots, right? That's why that
Yeah.
one company's like mobilizing themselves.
Yeah.
How much? Let's say from that moment until the time that they arrive on. I guess 2 questions. How much time goes by from that moment to the time they actually arrive on scene? And how long do we actually think the stand and annihilation of Custer's men actually takes? 90 minutes?
Because I know, because you've asked a couple of times.
Yeah.
At what point does Custer kind of say, "Oh crap,
it's over,"
we're
yeah.
done?" So, first of all, the whole last stand timing, I tend to think from the time of Medicine Tail Ford to the last stand. If you put a gun to my head, I would say I think about 2 hours.
Okay.
I have seen radically different versions of that. The narrative, the Custer critics later would make it shorter and shorter, like they just got decimated. Because what happens too, while the other 3 companies on Keogh were getting cut to pieces, Custer, I think still alive, riding with the remaining 2 companies, has continued northbound. And if you look at the conjectural route on that map, you'll see a conjectural line going down to the river. One last, he does not go directly to what we call Last Stand Hill, going down to the river, maybe looking for the non-combatants or a final river crossing. Some people think he's looking for a defensive position down there. I do not, but some do. But we don't know why, but he gets pushed back again. And then I think at that point, so now, it's been 90 minutes or so on battle underway or that. He starts to fall back up towards what we know today as Last Stand Hill. The survivors of the Keogh wing probably come streaming over the hill. And I think that's probably when he realizes, oh, crap.
So it's close to the end where he's still
Close to
thinking
the
he's
end.
in operational
Yeah.
control of this thing.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I mean, that's important because, a lot of the atmosphere of this has been like it's lost. I mean, if you look at Reno basically falls apart like a Fabergé egg. I mean, he's just like, it's destroyed. Benteen gets back and he's more worried about kind of CYAing and this man stole my glory, but like, it just seems like it's kind of this, things are devolving, and they are for parts of this.
Right.
But for Custer, even though it's going horrible and about to end, it seems like he held on to the I'm in control.
I think so. And a lot of people would agree with you. Yeah. That the idea that he was quote unquote on the offensive almost until the very end. And I think there's some truth in that.
So what do you think? Okay, he's got what, 265 men with him, something like that?
I thought it was like 270 something.
Well, no, his 5 companies around 220.
220.
Yeah. We'll get to the 260 number hopefully later.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
220 is about, give it 215, 220. I've seen 212.
Okay.
Versus like 1,000.
Well,
Right?
that's
Is
that
that-
was my quote where I was going. So
I'm
go
sorry,
ahead.
yeah.
No, that's-
Yeah, we didn't really touch on that. How many warriors are they fighting? We don't know. If you put a gun to my head, I think there's 1,500 to 2,000 warriors.
Okay.
Again, later on, the narrative.
More than you need.
Yeah, the narrative would spin it later to like 7,000 and 8,000 warriors and crazy numbers. Again, the narrative to make Custer look crazy for attacking. But, 1,500 warriors sounds like, oh, crap to us. But that was kind of in the boundary of what they expected to find.
If you look at the number, if you look at the encampment, the size of the encampment, how many different how many different tribes were there? I can see 1,500.
Right,
I can
about,
see that.
I should say in total, maybe about 7,000 people.
Sure.
With about 1,500 to 2,000 of those.
Plus,
being
there's probably
warriors.
more warriors who are escorting the non-combatants away.
That's
Right.
You're not going to
true.
let them go
So-
away alone.
Just a question from my own brain. It doesn't really matter which century we are engaging with the indigenous people here. I can't recall too many occurrences where you had 8,000
Right.
native warriors
Yeah.
engaged at
That's
once.
the big point of
in any capacity.
He's-
Like they don't put those numbers.
warriors.
No, but that's
Oh,
what I
yeah,
mean.
yeah,
like,
yeah,
you know, when
yeah.
they say they think they're facing these numbers. And I
Right.
think that's because the critics want to doom
Exactly.
him. But also supporters want to go, like, look at how noble he was. He stood in the face of that.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
But
maybe.
it's like,
That
I
could be.
can't think of a single time I've heard that kind of number associated
Right.
with native strength.
Right. So you're right. This is typically not something that's going to happen. Now, it is a big village.
Yeah.
No doubt it's a big village. He's walked into Sitting Bull's camp on Super Bowl Sunday.
Yeah.
It's a big village, but it's not, again, the outrageous sort of, oh my God, the biggest village ever seen. I don't even know how you quantify
It's
that.
probably just a big village, but
It's a big
manageable
village.
for what they think.
And
What
also,
they think, right.
I also don't think that the native women and maybe to a certain extent the children are shrinking violets either.
True.
Like I think we think of them in European standards, and we not that the warriors wouldn't protect the women and children. Of course they would. But if the women and children were up against a wall, I think they would put up a pretty damn good fight.
Yeah.
Maybe not 100%, but I mean more than you would see in European women, even of today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, because it's just the culture is
They
different.
weren't just prim and proper Victorian shrinking
Well,
violence.
No, they were people who lived a rough life.
Well, as we learned later or earlier, they were cutting heads off. So,
at a very young age. Now, how long? And forgive me, I hope this isn't a stupid question. How long does it take?
I hope it is.
Yeah, I know. I know. How long does it take, like the contingent from like Reno and Benteen to figure out? Maybe we should go check on this Custer feller and see what's going on.
Well, they heard the gunshots.
like they heard gunshots,
they
but like,
started to, but they
do they just walk slowly over? Like,
well, first of all, what they say they're waiting for is the ammunition pack mules,
Okay.
which are going to take time. That's what they say they're waiting for. But yeah, it's kind of a very slow move that is strung out probably over this 2-hour time frame. We're in advance, went pretty quickly, but I think the rest of the guys are kind of just strung out and slowly working their way across.
Before we move back to Reno and Benteen and totally kill Custer, I want the other question I had is: do we know? So when Custer's flitting around like the bluffs there and trying to get back down and coming back up and leaving the companies behind to guard and all that, are the warriors focusing on him? Are they up there with him yet, or is he still kind of holding the high ground alone? Because in my and this is the way I've seen it depicted too. Sun of the Morning Star shows it this way, and in my mind, every time I've read it, it's always been that he's kind of up there, and he's being challenged at the crossings.
Right.
But
right.
but the Indians are not done with Reno just yet. But once they're done with them, like you pointed out before, they start to turn their attention north now. And now they're coming across in force, but they're also coming from it gets surrounded, basically.
Yeah, because we really haven't talked a lot about the warrior tactics, but you're right. I think challenged at the crossings, and not necessarily challenged at the crossings in big numbers, but challenged enough to not cross.
Right.
So even when the warriors start to turn their attention away from Reno, they're not teleporting to Custer's battlefield, right?
Sure.
You still got to ride
Sure.
a couple of miles. In many cases, they go back home. Crazy Horse is late to the fight because he wants to get himself prepared in his lodge with his war paint and all of that stuff. So it takes a while for the warriors to congregate against Custer in big numbers. When they do, they're using the terrain masterfully, the coulees and the gullies and crawling up, not Hollywood charges on horseback, but crawling up, keeping a distance when they can and firing long distance. And I think until really that collapse of Keogh's wing, when C Company and then L and then I Company kind of get overrun. I think until that point, you really don't have a lot of close-in action. And I think to your scenario, Custer's got some mobility up until that point.
So you might have just answered my question with that, just reiterating that, the various companies kind of collapse in succession kind of quickly. Like they get rolled, essentially. I was going to ask, do they have the ammunition for a 2-hour gun battle?
Well, they might, but the horse soldiers gets, obviously they have ammunition in their saddlebags, and once the horses get stampeded, that obviously then flips the script.
I'm so glad you said that, because that was the next thing I was going to say was,
yeah.
Don't they send warriors ahead with blankets to scare the horses?
You think tactics like that. The warriors talk about, the men, they're doing double duties. Some of the guys are trying to shoot and hold their horses, but the horses are so scared, they're kind of pulling the guys up in the air.
I would have accidentally gotten my arm stuck in a stirrup and be like,
sure,
go.
Take me out of here, buddy.
Yeah. And it brings up a good point, because it brings up, again, this narrative idea. Custer's guys did not fight very well. Indians will talk about, soldiers throwing their guns up in the air and that sort of thing. Well, if you've got a single shot and now the warriors are starting to get in close and overrun you, and your ammunition just rode off, you're probably going to throw that gun because you don't got anything, now the revolvers come out, but the revolvers aren't going to stand up against the Henry.
Right.
And once you get a couple rounds off in the revolver, again, you're not going to sit here reloading while the enemy's coming on you. So yeah, ammunition becomes a real problem.
One question about the Custer side of the battlefield here. It's been like 30 years since I've been there, so
Chickamauga or Little Big Horn?
That's what we call a throwback. That's what we call a throwback.
I deleted.
God, I just updated the board sounds, but I had one from the WWF of Jim Ross being like, by God, he's broken in half.
I love you. We just met today. I love you.
Parker.
That's all right.
Parker.
That was an IRA assassination.
That was Parker. It's called a callback, not a throwback.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
I even get that wrong.
I love Parker.
Lord, I apologize.
Dude, I'm quitting my own show.
Okay, so it's been to clarify
30 years since you've been to Little
Bighorn.
Little Chickamauga.
Little Chickamauga Horn. River of Death, which is whatever.
I'm going to hide over here.
What was I going to say? Oh, shoot. Okay, so how deep is that ravine? The deep ravine that's mentioned on the map.
Okay.
I'm trying to, again, being a visual.
It's deep. It says deep ravine, bro. It's deep.
I guess what I'm saying is, like, I'm trying to get a visual in my head. This part of the world can be very mountainous at times, very prairie-like at times. We're, right at that kind of the Rocky Mountain type of area.
Sure.
So I was just like, I'm trying to remember, in my own head. And for anyone who's like looking at this map and they see deep ravine, that looks pretty big.
Yeah.
How deep is this? How high is that ridge that he's on? Like, is this...
So Deep Ravine is a well-known feature landmark on the battlefield.
Yep.
Deep Ravine. I've stood in Deep Ravine with National Park Service permission, I will point out.
Okay.
But I've stood in Deep Ravine, and that ravine was over my head.
Okay.
Now, there are photos, from the 1880s, 1890s, showing that at the time of the battle, they were probably even steeper and deeper and more cliff-like than what you have today. Today, there's been significant erosion where sides at times have just collapsed in.
Okay.
So it is over a grown man's head.
Okay.
And again, probably somewhat cliff-like at the battle. And for people who are listening, one of Custer's companies, there's a mystery around this. One of Custer's companies, Company E, may have been wiped out in that ravine.
Okay.
Because there is a legend that 28 dead bodies from Company E were found in this ravine after the battle. They've never been able to find the bodies, but it's kind of one of the mysteries of the battlefield.
I'm hearing like a little bit of like Devil's Den type of. Is that type of like? maybe like that, or are we talking
No,
like
it would be like fish in a barrel.
Yeah,
fish in a barrel?
Yeah,
Okay.
because it's more ravine like being steeped on two sides.
Got it.
And,
okay.
and
Oh,
so,
that's right. Devil's Den. You really just have that.
yeah.
It's
Yeah,
more like
okay.
it's more like the Rohrbach Bridge at
Yeah,
Antietam.
it's
When
more
they're
like
trying
that,
to cross
yeah.
that. I mean,
Trying to funnel into
they
it,
just
right?
pick them off, or
Yeah.
they're picking them off trying to cross the creek, Antietam
And-
Creek itself.
Yeah, and tactically, what were these guys doing in the ravine? We don't know. There's one theory that Company E was sent in that direction to try to shoot and push back some warriors who were coming up. Others think, during the last minutes of the route, they might have been guys who ran into the ravine to try to hide. We don't know, and
Yeah.
it could have been
That's
both.
a really good point.
It could have been
That's-
both.
All right, let's kill Custer.
Wow.
All right, let's kill him.
Like we've danced
Last
around
time.
it long enough.
We
It's
have.
broken
So
down.
be-
It's broken down. What do we know about his final moments? His body's found with his staff.
Yeah.
So could potentially listen. Don't let that detail get in the way. Right, he was killed early in the fight. If you hate him, but what is his actual last moments as far as we best can take away from this? What do we know?
So his body is found basically kind of at the top of what they refer to as a hogback ridge, but it's kind of a gently sloping hill. The ridge top today has been severely changed because there's a monument up there of that today, but Custer was found basically near the top of this ridge, surrounded by something in the vicinity of maybe 40 bodies and 35-ish dead horses. Horses seeming to form kind of a rough barricade on that side of the hill.
Oh my.
Yes.
So so at the very end, probably at that point, knowing, okay, we are surrounded. Where the hell is Benteen? Forming a defensive perimeter. And, again, warriors coming in from multiple directions, arching the arrows into this perimeter that we talked about before. One guy said it was the dust and the smoke. It was as black as the evening at that point. Guys couldn't see or that sort of thing. At some point, the Indians say the shots stopped coming from this hill, and then some of them rush in and basically finish off the last of it. The very last ones killed in the battle might be some guys who get up and run and try to run towards Deep Ravine, and they are cut to pieces. I do think there was a last stand, and this has been a contentious topic. Archaeology didn't find a lot of soldier cartridge cases and such up there, and kind of perpetuated this idea that there wasn't a big last stand of legend. But again, if you were relic hunters in the early years, where were you going to pick stuff? You were going to pick stuff up. So I do think there's a last stand. He's not standing up there, straight as an arrow shooting. Everybody was probably hunkered down. He was found with a wound in the left breast, wound in the left temple. Either one of them could have killed him. And
Wound in the left temple. Can we talk about that for a minute?
Sure. And I thought it might come up.
So,
There was no blood.
Any indication that that's a self-inflicted wound?
Well, that's always been a theory. He was right-handed. So again, right-handed to shoot yourself in the left temple is going to be challenging.
Let me tell you what. There's a lot of things I can do with my left hand, even though I'm right-handed.
But you're more talented. But
than Custer?
No.
Well, thanks.
No, but having said that, if the pinch is on, you're probably more likely
Probably
to do
already
that.
have your pistol in your right hand.
No, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
And where would in regulation? I mean, I know Custer's kind of a rogue.
Draw across your body.
You draw across your body in this one.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just, it's a
No, it's one of those.
It's on the
debated-
table.
It's on the table. Did Custer commit suicide? Look, I think he had a bloody chest wound, and I tend to think that's what he got first. Is it possible in the final moments that either he or a brother or a trusted aide, is it possible in the final minutes somebody said, okay, keep the last bullet for yourself, here they come? Sure, it's possible.
Well, we have that
It's
in the
definitely been
Titanic.
debated.
We'll never
have
know.
that
But
in
they
the-
did say that there was no blood in the head wound.
Yeah. Well,
Oh, wait, you weren't joking?
No.
I thought you were
Well-
making like a weird vampire joke.
No.
Well, there is an account with the head wound that said it had oozed out and kind of come down across his face and that sort of thing. So it's hard to say, but I do think the chest wound is probably the bloodier one. And,
Okay.
the one that struck him in life.
But also with all the bullets and everything flying around. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's probably guys with multiple wounds anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
why would that be?
Yeah.
Why would that be that there wouldn't be any blood?
You know,
Because he
war-
was dead already from the heart.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, in other words, it
Yes.
was a stray that just hit him.
You know, a warrior could
yeah.
come up, you know, because again, coming back to mutilation, the warriors, the women, children are coming up then, and they're shooting the dead. You know, somebody could have. You know,
Yeah.
finished
Well,
them
I
off.
mean,
You don't know.
we're not like CSI over here era. You know, do we know what type of bullet this was? Was it a 50 cal, or was it from like a Henry or something? Not a 50, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Was it like a rifle, or was it like a bullet from?
There is an account from the one doctor with the command who survived with Reno, and it's been a long time since I've read this, so forgive me. I'm kind of doing it by memory. There is an account where the doctor said he thought the head wound might have been consistent with one of the bullets from one of Custer's revolvers.
Okay.
But again,
You don't know.
We don't know.
Is that Dr. Lippincott?
Wow.
What?
Dr. Porter.
Porter, okay. Because I read there was a Dr. Lippincott, and I have Lippincotts in my family. I was like, oh, that's cool.
okay.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie. Parker and I
you
both
said
thought you
something
said
else.
something else right
Addressing
there.
Lippincott.
We thought we were going to have to mute
I
that.
thought you said my favorite British word.
So what's interesting about this is that
Lippin.
Cock?
no,
my
the other
favorite
one,
British
the one you
word.
don't like.
Oh.
Yeah, we were like, that's a weird thing to say, but
I don't like that one either. Really.
Yeah.
I don't know what your excuse is. I'm hard of hearing, so I just heard that wrong.
We have this in the Titanic research field too.
Yeah, okay.
And there's Murdoch, and everyone wants to blame Murdoch for hitting the iceberg, which is completely unfounded. And there's like a couple of people who say, and it's not really a couple of people, it's one person who is like, yeah, Murdoch killed himself, and they just have him. And like in the movie Titanic, that officer, that's Murdoch, who's killing himself. There's no evidence that actually really happened. We just like to paint these victims. It's similar to like any time that you have a villain that you want to paint them and they're a man, you dress them like a woman when they're captured.
Yeah, right.
Like Jeff Davis or Bruce Ismay getting off the Titanic dressed as a woman. It's all bunk. Like, it's all just garbage. So I'm less inclined to believe that personally, just because I know how history writes these things.
And there's
that's based on nothing.
And if I could though, you're right, and I totally agree with you. And there's modern people to place kind of a cowardly connotation. He committed suicide kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which would not have been the connotation at the time. It would have been,
I'm dead anyway.
It would have been understood. You do not want to be captured and tortured, and it was.
Yeah.
And he's the leader.
All right,
Yeah.
so
He's
real quick.
yellow hair.
So
Like,
you
he's-
described his chest wound as bloody. Do we know what kind of wound that is? Is that a bullet wound? Is that a blunt force wound? Is that an arrow?
It's been described as a bullet.
Okay.
Gunshot.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure it out. Like,
trying to figure it out, right?
All right, so how quickly after it ends are they discovered by the remaining American forces that are slowly moving towards
Yeah.
So, wait. So, meanwhile, Reno and Benteen are back over on the hill, holed up. And
But aren't they moving? Isn't Benteen slowly moving at this
No,
point?
they went back. Right?
Because they go back.
Oh.
They go to that weird point.
Right, and then they come back.
And then they
Sorry.
realize,
I
okay,
forgot.
we're not going any further, and they come back.
And they've got to stay there till the next day. And the Indians don't stop harassing them.
So we go overnight.
Yes.
Yeah, so
There's a good...
there's a lot going on June 26th, which we won't do today.
Yeah.
But to so many people, the Battle of the Little Bighorn ends in their mind,
that one event.
ends in their study at that one event, the death of Custer. This is a 2-day battle.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah,
Honestly, guilty
yeah.
as charged.
This is a 2-day battle, and the other 7 companies of the 7th Cavalry are corralled up on this hilltop all through June 26th. When late on June 26th, probably with the Indians getting the idea that the Terry Gibbon Command, remember them?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They're finally coming in now towards the north end of the valley. The Indian village withdraws late on the day of the 26th. The morning of the 27th, Gibbon and Terry's scouts, proceeding into the Little Bighorn battlefield from the north, come across this scene that is described as sickening and ghastly horror. Wow. Custer and his men, they're naked, mutilated, white, dead bodies scattered throughout the hills. And it's the morning of the 27th that we get our first inkling that, Custer did not escape. He's not off somewhere, grazing his horses, but him and all of his men were killed.
So what's cleanup like? I mean, did bury him
Well, you
right
want
on
to hear
site?
about some of the mutilations first?
Yeah,
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, why not at this point?
A good one, I think, is Tom Custer. Like, they could only identify him from a tattoo. Was it on his forearm?
Right, on his arm. Whoops.
Or where was it? On his arm, right?
Yep.
So
Hit my microphone, folks.
his head had been so beaten in, it was described as a gelatinous goo, if I'm not mistaken.
Supposedly flat as a hand. His
Yeah,
head.
his head
Yeah.
was so pummeled. So they knew it was him, though, because they could recognize his tattoo. Uniforms were gone, so they couldn't find rank insignias because they're naked.
Right.
Sure.
Now, was Custer actually naked? Or did they leave clothes on him? Was he shirtless or something?
Supposedly, I think the only thing they leave on him are his socks. They didn't
his
want
socks.
the socks, but he
And
is,
that's
for all
actually what
intents
you're
and
using right now as a
purposes.
pop filter.
Exactly. Which I'm sure this smells a lot better than what Custer had on.
Yeah.
And remember now it's hot, it's June, it's Montana. Guys are bloating, they're blackening.
Oh, speaking of bloating, there's a good one. So remember before Jim mentions how they're using the horses as forts, right?
Yeah.
And so up on Reno Hill, there's still fighting going on. It's not like heavy fighting, but there's fighting going on. And the soldiers are using dead horses, cracker boxes, whatever they can to make these little fortifications. And these dead horses are sitting out in the sun. It's hot. And what are they doing? They're bloating.
Exploding, right?
Well, a bullet hits one that a soldier's behind, and it explodes all over him. So he's now covered in horse guts. It's not like he could say, time out, I need to go down to the creek and bathe. Like, he's now got to sit in these horse guts for God knows how long.
Y'all ever seen the footage of that whale they popped?
Yeah, like that.
Oh my God.
So then,
oh my God.
But so like most of the soldiers, Jim, are mutilated horrendously, right? But not Custer.
Yeah.
Like
you guys were aghast at the bloody knife story.
Sure.
That sort of thing happens all over the Custer field.
Yeah.
They take out their rage on these guys. Heads cut off, limbs cut off.
Why don't they do this to
genitals stuffed in
Custer?
their mouth.
Well, because
We don't know. There are a few guys on the battlefield who are not mutilated. Custer appears to be one of them. Now we say mutilated. There's a story that maybe a fingertip has been cut off. Maybe the ears have been punctured. There's a secondhand story that a arrow is driven into his groin, but not mutilated in the sense of Tom Custer.
Like if you could look down at his remains, you'd be able to be like, that's George Custer.
Yeah, they say they recognize him. That's exactly it. They say, other than maybe being blackened in that, they say he looked like he was taking a nap.
Is it true?
We
Yeah,
recognized him like we'd seen him sleeping many times.
didn't they say that he almost had a smile on his face?
Yeah. One guy says the general lay there with a smile on his face.
That could
Wow.
be
Which
nonsense.
could be, yeah.
But
Sounds apocryphal.
But like they puncture. So okay. So the one story that why he wasn't mutilated badly was because there were some Cheyenne women who said he was my cousin's husband or something like that, right? In other words, lending credence to this story that he had sired some Indian children, right? And he had this thing going with a woman. And so these women went and kind of defended him as a relative. But then there's also... because they respected him as a brave warrior.
How much fucking time is there for all that?
Right.
Well, I guess if you've won the battle and you got, I don't know, I don't know, but what they did do is supposedly puncture his eardrums with awls so that he would hear better in the next life. Because back in 67, 8?
Back in Oklahoma, he
In
said,
Oklahoma.
I would never fight the Cheyenne again, and you can kill me if I do, kind of thing.
So but now how much of that do you think is legend?
Yeah,
because that's a great story.
You're right. They're great stories, and never let a good story get in the way of the facts, right? But I tend to think, and this is Jim talking, could be wrong, but I tend to think those are legends, and I tend to think nobody recognized him, for whatever reason. He was balding. He'd cut his hair shorter than usual.
Really?
They say he was just not a good scalping candidate. That could be, why he wasn't scalped. Maybe in just everything going on, for whatever reason, they just kind of, other than, again, a few minor things, they might have just bypassed him. You tend to, what I think was, I tend to think the guys who are more heavily mutilated are the ones who were wounded. I think those are the ones they played with.
Because you're torturing them to death.
Exactly, and finished off. So I think you've got that going on. If you thought somebody was a leader, I think you would really kind of beat the crap out of him to punish him. So, maybe in his buckskin or that, he just looked, in the dirt and everything. just looked like a scruffy scout or something like that. But we don't know.
All right.
We
So
don't
let's
know.
move towards the wind down of our story. What is the reaction on the field when they discover this is a total loss? What is the reaction when this news makes its way to population centers?
Yeah.
Does the military try to do what it often does by sit on catastrophe and not let it out?
No, the opposite. The
So okay,
opposite.
so all right, so let's start with local.
Yeah.
Is it Benteen's guys? Is it Reno's guys that are the first to physically see this as happening?
Well, so again, it's Gibbon and Terry's guys.
I was going to say,
right?
oh right, you did say it's Gibbon and
that's
Terry's
okay.
guys.
So they're the first ones.
Yep.
They then come and kind of relieve Reno and Benteen of this pressure. Benteen, when he's told Custer is dead on that hill 4 miles away, Benteen reportedly says something like, "Oh no, he's not. He's crazy. He abandoned us like he abandoned Elliott at the Washita." So you have that kind of disbelief going on, and then when Benteen and then eventually Reno and the other guys see Custer, Benteen supposedly says, "Well, there he is. God damn him. He'll never fight again. There he is."
Did he really say that to Terry? He abandoned us like he did Elliott?
Well, he says basically, I think like he did at the Washita kind of thing. And Terry kind of cuts Benteen down a little bit and says, "No, you're not. You're wrong, Benteen.
You're wrong.
Go take a look."
Yeah.
So there's so on the field, there's disbelief. They bury these guys in shallow graves the best they can. There's only a handful of spades in the whole command. It's hard, rocky soil. You're basically just throwing soil on these guys, and moving on. The broader reaction, though, is you got to be kidding me. How did this happen? Right? So
Are they still buried out there, or did they I know Custer got reinterred, right?
So they've all been reinterred.
They've all been reinterred.
Yeah, the officers got moved to other cemeteries. Custer allegedly at West Point. The remains of all these other guys, though, are basically just under a mass grave, which sits at the top of what we call Last Stand Hill.
You say allegedly. Is there?
Is he not?
Is he?
Glad you picked
Where
up
they
on
said
that.
he was?
Yeah, words matter, right?
Yeah.
Keep hitting this microphone here.
Have you ever done a podcast before?
Well, not to the side where the microphone's over here, and I'm supposed to talk to everyone over here.
I'm sorry.
That's
Do you want?
probably on
We could have. We won't do it today.
Well, I
but
think
if
we're over by now.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If you come back, we can put your microphone in the center box.
Maybe I'll do it next time. I could have spent the last 4 hours doing this.
That's true.
I could have done that.
No, yeah.
But so, anyways, what was the question?
Allegedly. So is there
We're talking about his body
a
at West Point.
controversy? Is there a controversy about
Because-
the?
Don't say it like that ever again.
Because remember, what did we say? Shallow graves.
Yeah.
Right.
Shallow graves. And so, they're getting dug up, they're getting scattered by the wind, bones, skulls, all of that stuff. So they send a detail back a year later in 1877 to get the remains of the officers, forget about the grunts.
100%.
But let's identify the officers and get them out. And so when they get to what was marked as Custer's grave, there's some confusion. Do we get the right guy? First, we think we have him, and then somebody sees like a corporal's name on a blouse, and we're like, okay, I guess that's not him. Then they say, okay, we think this is it. But one of the guys said later, what we got wouldn't fill a hat. It's a thigh bone and a couple other remnants. That is what goes to West Point.
What about Tom?
Yeah,
Is he
well,
there too?
So Tom is at Fort Leavenworth with a couple of the other officers in Kansas. So they moved Tom to Leavenworth, and again, who knows?
If that's really him.
How reliable that
There's
was.
probably a mixture
That's
of bones in
fascinating.
places.
That is
Yeah,
fascinating.
Yeah.
Does the Army acknowledge that at West Point, that it might not be him or all of him, or is it just like, here's Custer, take it?
Yeah, I mean, he has a huge monument over his grave. And I think everybody kind of knows. Say that what's left of Custer. Everybody kind of knows, but there isn't like a board or anything that says,
It's really like just Private Pete, who's like,
all right,
get this giant monument over.
How long are they out there before they're reinterred?
Like a year, you said, right?
Yeah, that first.
Oh, you did? I'm
well,
sorry.
that first one is 1877, so it's a year. But now then you've got enlisted men bones, horse bones, and that sort of thing. So now from, I think it's 1881, if I remember correctly, when they put the bigger monument on Last Stand Hill, they come back again. They police the field, they clean up all the bones, and they put this monument on the hill and kind of bury everybody, in a little base underneath that, which is still there today.
So those folks have been reburied, and that's where they with the ones with the little monument, the little markers.
Yep, exactly.
So the
marker. I'm glad you mentioned it, because the markers that are on the field today, which we touched briefly, the white markers, 200 plus of them
The
all over the
little
field.
Civil War looking
They
War Department.
They
ones.
look like headstones, and you will often see people on the internet saying stuff like, "That's where Custer's guys are buried." They're not buried there.
Okay.
That's where they fell.
That's where they fell. That's where they think
were
they fell.
found.
So exactly. So the idea later is let's mark where they fell, and they go across the battlefield. And if there's indication that we think somebody was here or a grave was here, we put a stone there.
Got it. So this is like
Yeah.
that tree line at Antietam, where they buried them there temporarily and then reinterred them later.
Yeah,
as
but
a-
or what he's talking about is this isn't even that. This is
Oh,
just
this is just
like
like a
where they
center-
were found
center graph.
Yeah.
or where we think they were at some
Exactly,
point.
where we think they were.
Cool,
And,
okay.
And they're also compounded by they bring like 40 extra markers to cover Reno, the guys who got killed fighting in the valley with Reno. But of course, they don't place them there. They place them on Custer's battlefield. So you have like 40 or 50-ish odd markers, extra markers on Custer's battlefield, which can distort your interpretation.
Yeah.
Because if you're looking at the battlefield and saying, well, there's where 40 guys got killed, that may not necessarily be true. And that's why it matters.
That's
You
where
mean
the
they're on-
stigma comes from.
They're on Last Stand Hill, the 40 from the valley. They put on Last Stand Hill.
No, they just kind of scattered all over
Oh,
Custer's
okay.
part of the battlefield. Some could be with Keogh, some could be Last Stand Hill. They're
Oh,
kinda,
okay, that's
kinda
interesting.
scattered.
All right, so obviously the Gibbon and Terry arrival, they find this grisly scene. Everybody's probably aghast. They go about the grisly work of putting these men in the ground with as much dignity as they can do it. The broader reaction is, how could this have even happened? And when you say that broader reaction, that means like me reading the newspaper
Right.
in Nashville, right? Like, so like
Right.
that.
Right.
Is there a military response to this? Because I feel like there has to be when you just got a major force bushwhacked.
Yep. And so there is, Sheridan, Grant, Sherman, the whole 9 yards, they're all shocked when they read about it. Congress will authorize an appropriation to increase money to the troops in the field. Don't ask me what the number is. I don't remember. But they respond with, we got to do something more for the troops in the field. Terry, Gibbon, and Crook comes back into the field. So they're back. And they now spend, the late summer, the fall, continuing to pursue this village. And there's a number of smaller engagements to round out the 1876 campaign. But the Indians, and I think you might have touched on it way at the beginning, the Indians are doing the army a favor too, because a big village cannot stay together that long.
Right.
You can't feed your water, you foul things up. And so the Indians start naturally kind of breaking up on their own, going into the mountains. This band goes here, that band goes there. And really the campaign kind of ends, I think, really more because of winter and the weather starts pushing these guys back to the reservation, which was the whole intention in the first place.
Winter can come wicked early out there too.
Yeah.
But we don't
So it's a
see-
military campaign. It's a fiasco.
Do we know how many natives got killed in this? By the way, do we know is
in
this,
the battle? We don't.
We don't.
So
Okay.
you'll see numbers as low as 30. You'll see numbers maybe as high as 300. We don't. They did talk about finding bodies on the field. Indian accounts will say bodies, wounded guys did die later, but
Okay.
you'll see a variance.
I guess I was wondering if they gave as good as it got.
No, just for whatever it's worth.
Doesn't sound like it.
Take it with a million grains of salt.
Right,
but Wikipedia stats in front of me here say that 31 warriors up to 100 were killed, up to 160 were wounded,
Wow.
and 10 non-combatants were killed.
Yeah.
To me, it
Again,
sounds
take that for
like the more
For
you
that
think
number,
about
it's
it,
reasonable.
the more you think about it, the more you hear about it, the more you read about it. It sounds to me like the reality of it was just a slaughter. It was,
Yes.
It was not much of a battle.
Right.
It was a chase down and then a slaughter, I think our imaginations and again, depending on when you're talking since the battle, the politics of the day, people take these events and they put on them whatever they need to for their purposes.
Yeah.
And I think the reality of it is, as is most things in life, when you get down to it, it's just nasty.
Yeah.
It's just a
That's it.
nasty.
what's the most modern pop culture touching of this? I think I know.
culture?
I think in my mind, we've been talking all episode about a TV movie made in 91.
Yeah.
But
There's been a few documentaries.
No,
since
but I
then.
mean, like,
I was going to say
is
Night
Last Samurai the last
Night at the
time?
I was going to say Night at the Museum is the last one I
Is
saw.
Custer
Yeah.
in Night at the Museum?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, he is.
Is he in the
Bill
third
Hader
one?
plays him, I think.
Is he in number 1 or number 2?
I think.
can't remember.
I think
you're
it's
right.
one.
Okay.
It's not number 1.
It's not.
No.
It's 2 then.
I think
saw
it's
it
got
with my
it's got to be
kids
number
ages
2. I
ago.
think.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
he
forgot
is-
about that. So
and-
would it be
and-
that and Last Samurai? The last 2 big
I
times?
can't think of one after it. I can't.
I mean, there's always like references to him.
Yeah.
Deadwood had several references throughout the seasons.
Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman.
Dr.
Oh,
Quinn, Medicine Woman.
dude, you're
That was
not wrong.
nice.
Our favorite show.
That's right.
We've,
right.
we've been called out on that. Yeah.
That's now we've been blacklisted.
No, I
for
can't.
that.
You're right, though. The last one I can think of is Night at the Museum. I can't think of
Yeah.
anything.
Because the reason it's sticking out in my mind is Last Samurai. The whole genesis of that story is Tom Cruise's character is a survivor of that attack.
Oh, right,
Yeah, that's great.
Right.
Right.
And Billy Connolly has my favorite. Says Custer says we're going to the Little Bighorn. I said, "What's this we?" That's so stupid, but I love it.
Well,
Yeah.
the one that people will always come up to me about is the Mel Gibson movie When We Were Soldiers.
We were
Oh,
soldiers.
yeah.
Custer was a pussy.
The one people always come up to me
I forgot
on
about
is
that.
that one. Well, Sam Elliott. Did Sam listen to the show, by the way?
No.
Sam Elliott says Custer
Fake
was
Sam
a
Elliott,
pussy, right?
fake
And
voice
I get
actor Sam Elliott.
I get that
right?
one all the time.
Yeah, that right. And I see again. I think that's. Did Sergeant Major Plumley ever say that?
I don't know enough about the real
I don't
story.
care. I just want him to movie version it. I'll tell you what. You want to know how much that movie has stuck in my head through this episode? Every time you've mentioned Crazy Horse, I've been like, when Crazy Horse was a baby, he nursed from the breast of every mother in the tribe. And then they talk about like the way he would call every man grandfather. And then Plumlee's like, any one of you sons of bitches calls me grandpa, I'll kill you.
My favorite was when he passes the other guy and he goes, "Morning, Sergeant." He goes, "How do you know what kind of fucking morning it
Yeah,
is?"
but just like that entire scene of the Crazy Horse like quote. Every time you've said it, I get that whole thing in my head.
Didn't Dr. Quinn have a Crazy Horse episode too?
I think they might have.
Yeah.
It's called
Speaking of
Crazy
Horse,
in Love Horse.
Have they finished the monument? I mean,
dumb.
they've been building the Crazy Horse
No,
monument.
they're
It's still
not.
going.
Still a work in progress.
They've been working on that. I think it looks. I mean, I keep hearing that they're
Isn't it,
making.
like,
Looks really
massive?
cool.
It's
like
massive.
massive,
So
yeah.
so when Guts
like
and Borglum did the
Rushmore.
Mount Rushmore, that was huge, right? When you see Crazy Horse in comparison to Mount Rushmore, it's like, why? Why did you think you could do this? Like, it's huge. I mean, it is literally like
I'm all for big statues. I'm all for it.
Oh no! I mean, it's going to be magnificent if they ever do it, but they're going to need like what $20 trillion to get it done.
It's a carving in the mountain. It's not a statue, right? Yeah,
correct.
So,
It is,
but
like,
it's not full
an
body,
entire
is it?
It's
Or is it
he's
just
on
his
the
head?
horse. He's got
Oh,
the
that's
arm
right,
out,
yeah.
and he's on the horse, and it's
Beautiful.
going to be beautiful.
Yeah.
it already is kind of.
What's the holdup?
Well, money. I mean, they're basically taking down a mountain, like they're chipping away a mountain, like
he's
bit by
not.
bit.
He's not kidding. It's gigantic.
So you know how Mount
Let me see.
Rushmore literally is the mountain, right? This
Yeah.
is like,
Yep.
like
Yeah.
it dwarfs Mount Rushmore.
We were there once. My family and I went there once during a vacation through the West. And it was a cloudy, rainy day, and they closed access to the top of the mountain.
Yep.
So I went to see Crazy Horse, and I did not see Crazy Horse.
Disappointment.
It was.
It's going to be a lot of people's experience at the parks this summer.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. Could be.
Hopefully not.
Probably not.
Hopefully not everybody's experience after listening to this great episode.
No,
but,
no,
yeah,
for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Jim, first of all, thank you for coming on the
Hey,
show.
thank you guys for when we finally got together
Yeah.
and did this.
Secondly, for final word on this, I was expecting in the response that you'd be like, there was a slaughter, like, we got to order, because that seems to be a low key tactic of the West is like, we're going to meet, what you bring to us with an equal force response a lot of times. So degradation is going to be met with degradation. Big battle is going to be met with big battle.
Yeah.
Slaughter is going to be met with slaughter. And I was actually kind of
Tit for
surprised.
tat.
Yeah, that there wasn't
Yeah.
this great like revenge campaign launched. Obviously, they kind of stayed in the broader. The plan is just to get them onto reservations, and things like
is
that.
it? But that's not actually accurate, though.
So
I mean,
is there a slaughter
It's not
tour?
immediate, though. But I think every time you see something about Little Bighorn, it always ends with a mention, at least, of Wounded Knee.
Yeah, yeah.
And even though that was a while later, it's the culmination of the response to Little Bighorn, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
When is Wounded Knee?
1890s.
I was going to say it's like 20 years later, right?
Yeah, I would kind of partially agree with both of you on that. I think symbolically, it's a literary device. You see it in books, you see it in movies. Let's end with Wounded Knee, the end of the Plains War kind of thing. And, a number of 7th Cavalry, Little Bighorn veterans, survivors are at Wounded Knee. And supposedly they're, blasting and saying, hey, take that for Custer.
Still in the military?
Okay, yeah, a couple of the officers
All right.
and that sort of thing. Take one for Custer sort of thing. So there is definitely the revenge factor at Wounded Knee from
Also,
that.
but
yeah.
Also, one thing we didn't really point out was that this is a few weeks away from the centennial celebrations of the country, and even though it does hit the country hard, does it get overshadowed quickly by the centennial? And
Well, I mentioned that a little bit because Sharon and those guys, some of these guys are at the centennial thing in Philly, and one of them, maybe it's Sherman, I can't remember which one of them, but one of them literally says to a reporter, "No, it's a lie. There's no way that could happen." And literally after he says it, somebody from the War Department puts
hands in.
Sir, a dispatch.
Yeah,
and he's like,
a
shit.
dispatch in his hands and that sort of thing. So
I said that off the record. Don't print it.
it was printed all over the country.
Sure.
You could have read about it here in Gettysburg.
No,
I did that call back. Here in
No,
Gettysburg.
I like that.
Yeah,
Just for the record again, you're in Maryland. You're on my side of the border.
I'm sure somebody in Maryland put it in a newspaper.
Listen, I've been reading a lot about Ireland lately. Y'all from up in the north, right? You're in the south right now. Okay?
Yeah, someone in Maryland could have put it in the papers, but no one in Maryland could read it.
Oh, you son of a bitch. You son of a bitch.
Okay.
It is true.
That was good.
The
That was
reading
good.
does stop at the state boundary.
The
just north of
Mason-Dixon
ours.
line is kind of the end.
Exactly, the end of literacy.
Yeah.
But and the other thing is too, between Little Bighorn and Wounded Knee, there are probably, I don't know, maybe couple hundred other fights with Indians across the country.
Exactly.
It's not the Indian wars were not just here.
Yeah.
They were everywhere.
There's a lot going on everywhere.
Yeah.
Do you want to count the Nez Perce campaign as part of this? Because they're different tribes. I mean, there's a lot going on. It's a
busy time.
Yeah, I kind of feel like ending it with Wounded Knee is kind of a cliche, but
Sure.
it happens a lot.
Well, that's because I think in reality, there are two different things happening. There is the federal government, the U.S. Army's objective, which literally covers the entire West. Doesn't matter if you're in the North or you're fighting Apache and Comanche down in Texas or anything like that. The goal is we're taking this and we're putting you onto these reservations. So that's why these disconnected things over these 20, 30, 40, or 50, it's all one story because it's all part of that one objective from the federal government side. From the indigenous people's side, there's very different things happening because I'm fighting for this separately, I'm fighting for that separately. But overall, it works to end with Wounded Knee because it's the end of that very long
It's kind of the end
goal
of an era.
objective, right?
Right. It's the end of kind of an era. So
How long are Reno and Benteen still in the Army? Do they have careers like?
Yeah, so both of them are going to be. Well, they both run into trouble. Reno, particularly, he will be court-martialed for a different offense and suspended at the end of 1876. So, 6 months later.
Wow, that's
bad,
really
Is that the one with the woman?
Bad year for Reno, kind
right?
of thing. There will be he will call for a court of inquiry, kind of to try to determine was I or was I not responsible for this. They will be exonerated, but he will be exonerated by this thing, but kind of a damning with faint praise. And there's a lot of accusations that the officers get together to try to cover it up and all of that stuff. But then he will, and I forget what year he gets cashiered out. It's
80.
80. Thank you. It's
okay.
1880 because he will come back from his suspension and run into problems and get suspended again.
Reno gets in trouble right away.
He gets in trouble
like
right away.
December 76.
And a lot. And
Wow.
Benteen lasts a little bit longer. I want to say he's deeper into the 1880s. I forget what year he runs out, but
Does he kind of write a lot about it, like in public forums?
a little bit. I mean, not that, there are a couple of articles that he writes, an unpublished manuscript, some letters, with Theodore Golden, who's a veteran of the battle, which weren't necessarily public and available at the time, but are available now. So in books of that. So today we can see kind of.
So neither one of did either one of them do like what Jubal Early would do and just kind of make these like
Lost Cause it.
Lost Cause, like
a little bit
because
because Custer's supporters try going Lost Cause on them. So Frederick Whitaker, Custer's first biographer, with the help of Libby, who is, a grieving widow, and Custer's friends in the army, they try to go Lost Cause and basically blame it on Reno and Benteen. And eventually that kind of becomes...
tit for tat.
Yeah, that kind of becomes more Reno than Benteen after a while, which again is why you have this court of inquiry called by Reno. So... in the defense now kind of becomes things like, well, Custer didn't have any plan. We didn't really have any confidence in Custer. He was already dead when I got the order from Martini, so it didn't matter. So they kind of tit for tat, kind of swing it. And again, a lot of that now exists today is sort of in the anti-Custer literature. But
just like the Lost Cause.
Yeah.
But the thing is, what I love about all this stuff is the more you dig, the more you find that, like, because when I first got into it, I was like, F Benteen and Reno, man. They hung them out to dry and everything. But then if you, like, look into what they were going through, and the important thing with any history for me, when you read it, is you have to think, well, what would I do in this situation? And not everybody
100%.
actually is
100%.
empathetic, so it's hard to do that for most people.
People have always been people.
I try to do that, and I can't fault any of these people for any of their
I
decisions.
agree. I totally agree.
Yeah.
All right.
It's easy to say.
So a couple things here at the end that I just looked up while you guys were talking, and then I'll wind this all down here. Quote from
Wow.
quote from Libby Custer in 1926, talking about a memorial on the
1926.
She lives a long
She
time.
lived a while.
she's talking about a memorial potentially specific to Reno on the battlefield site, and she says, quote, "I long for a memorial to our heroes on the battlefield of the Little Bighorn, but not to single out for honor the one coward of the regiment." So she's got beef with Reno. Interesting, just to kind of wrap things all into a bow as far as the burials and things we talked about. When he dies in 89, he's originally buried in one place. In 1967, Reno's great-grandnephew gets a U.S. military review board to reopen the 1880 court-martial. They reversed the decision.
Oh, that's interesting.
Ruling that the dismissal was improper, and they award him an honorable discharge. As such, in September of that same year, his remains are reinterred with honors, including a church ceremony and an 11-gun salute in the Custer National Cemetery on the Little Bighorn battlefield. It says Reno was the only participant of the Battle of Little Bighorn to be buried with such honors at the cemetery named for his former commander.
Yeah, that is accurate. And if people don't know, there is a national cemetery at the battlefield today. So when you say people are buried there, you don't want to confuse them and think they're buried on the battlefield, but there is a national cemetery.
They're
right
just adjacent to it.
I've stood over Reno's grave many times and pondered, just what kind of
So
life
question to you specifically. So you are a battlefield guy at Gettysburg. So we know, without getting down that rabbit hole, that to become one of those, you have to know some like a lot of
Are you applying for a job?
No. What I am asking is, when you have to know that much stuff about one specific moment in a very big story of things to know,
right.
how the hell do you have the time to do what you just did from memory? Because you got a notebook, but you barely looked at it.
Yeah, I use, like a lot of people, I use notebooks to organize my thoughts. Last night, kind of just sitting there thinking, because what you don't remember, what I don't remember when I get on microphone is numbers and dates.
Sure.
I've done that. Yep. I've done that on your show. You'll ask me a number, and I'm like, oh Christ, I don't remember.
Right.
'Cause it's the story, right, as opposed to the numbers and the dates. But I don't know. I've always been into Gettysburg. I've always been into Little Bighorn. I've always been into the Alamo. I've always been into Tombstone. I got maybe 10 history topics that I'm like really into, and I guess I got kind of the brain that just
it's impressive. It's fantastic, and I just was like thinking about what I know about like atmospherically what you do for a living, because I don't know that much about being a guide or anything like that, but just I was like, you kind of got to know like a career's, like a lifetime's worth of knowledge just to pass that test, much less be successful in the field for as long as you have. And it's like, how did you have the time to even learn all this?
I don't know.
Right.
Well, you know what you find too. You get older, you start to forget stuff, and now I'm spending this phase of my life relearning stuff
Trying to
that I forgot.
relearn,
right?
yeah.
Relearning
Now
stuff.
let me
that I
ask you
once
this:
knew.
he called attention to your notebook. I seem to recognize the craftsmanship. Is that a Von Dedeman
That
Co?
is Von Dedeman.
Wow.
It wouldn't be an episode where we didn't shout out Eric Money.
Eric Money
I
and
don't know.
his
Do you
wonderful.
shout him out a lot? But it is.
Yeah.
Eric's one of my
And
best friends. I
he's-
shout him out.
Oh, okay.
He's
I didn't
a
know that.
fantastic guy.
And so, am I on camera? Should I?
You
show
are.
this
You're
for
on.
the-
You can show.
Which one am I? That
You're
one?
on that one.
We've been on camera this whole time.
Yeah.
The fine.
Jeez, I didn't do my hair.
fine craftsmanship. But since we're doing it, I'll point out too. You know who this was a gift from? One of your prior fans of the year is Stella Beer.
Estelle, I was going to say.
Yeah,
is
so
it
shout
Stella?
Shout out
to
to Stella. She
Stella.
listens to
Good
our
job,
show as
Stella.
well.
Yeah,
Stella's very supportive of everybody.
Yeah, we need more of that.
Yes, we do.
We
need
do
more.
need
we need
more
it.
of that.
Everybody.
Is
We
this-
need like 300 Estellas.
Good on you,
Do,
Stella.
do you think that this camera's still recording?
No,
Do you think
probably
it's-
not.
Probably not. Which camera do you think is still recording?
That one. That
That one. Okay, so hey, Eric, if you're listening, I need to get in contact with you
Oh
about
my
making
God.
a guitar.
Personal appeal.
Strap.
Like, what's happening right
So
now?
I will reach out to you about that.
bladder again, and
Exactly.
I'm starving.
I was going to say, can I use the bathroom at this point? Yes. I gotta go.
Boys,
Folks,
boys,
nice talking
look,
to you. We gotta go.
I love having
Jesus,
you here.
if you're out there, I love you.
Right.
Boys, I love having you here on the show. Definitely want to come back if you like want to talk Alamo, things like that.
Just
things
clear
on the
like
radar.
3 or 4 weeks
Yeah,
off the
right.
schedule.
Okay, right.
Yeah. And bring a snack.
Do you?
Yeah, bring food, right?
Final question
Come
I have
quick,
for
bring
you.
packs.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Final question's a modern question. Do you engage in the world of digital public history? Do you write? Do you have a blog? Do you have a social media account? How do people follow you, the work
Okay.
you do, other than seeing you on the field or listening to your show?
Yeah. Okay. So again, the Battle of Gettysburg podcast being one. I am not big on social media. I do a lot of Facebook. So you can find I have James Hessler's Gettysburg History on Facebook, but I don't do X and Instagram
Sure.
and the other stuff. So people can find me there. Battle of Gettysburg podcast has a Facebook page. Last but not least, thanks for the opportunity here.
Yeah.
I have written what will be 4 non-digital books.
Nice.
My 4th book, The First Day at Gettysburg from Casemate, will be out in spring of 2025. So
Wonderful.
look for
Forward to that one.
Yeah,
Amazing.
well, yeah. So, and I've been threatening for 40 years to write a Little Bighorn book.
Do it.
Do it.
Will I
Do
it?
it.
I
Just to make an
sometime
appeal, just like I did.
Make,
right?
it,
You can ask-
make the appeal.
You can ask my boss. Once I find out you're intending on writing a book, I'm never going to let you forget it. So
Well,
do
good,
it.
'cause I
and
need the push.
I'll just
I need the
randomly message you at 2 in the morning. I'll be like, Jim, I'm awake. Write your fucking book.
Well, but you know why I haven't done it?
He's like, stop bothering me. My wife said, stop bothering me too.
But it's exactly what we discovered today. There are so many goddamn rabbit holes
Yeah.
with this battle and this topic, and I don't want to be one of these guys who
you-
spends his whole life doing
You have to have like a clear theme
Got a
that you
clear
want
vision.
a vision
Yeah, a
quest,
vision.
right?
Matt, what's it been like for you to not be like the main guest?
I actually like it.
You do like that.
Yeah,
Looked
I
like you
do.
had fun.
I like being. What am I? 4th chair today. I like that. I wouldn't want to do it all the time, but I like it.
You spoke a lot. I thought it was equally
Probably too
divided.
much, honestly.
Wow.
This show ran really
There you
long.
go. That's what he was waiting
Oh,
for.
he
yeah.
finally got to. I thought you were going to rip on me more. You finally got around to it in
Well,
the
hopefully you
end.
got enough for a 2-parter here.
I am trying to practice being more mindful and ripping in a fun way, but if I can't do it, I'm not going to do it. So I'm,
yeah,
I'm
what?
grateful
So
you
you
came
had-
down.
I think it's a part of-
You were going to
That's
rip
right.
on me in non-fun ways
Yeah, I was
today.
going to
and
be
you-
mean.
Wow.
Why?
I didn't plan on
No, I
it.
mean, why would you hold back?
No, why? Because I care about you.
Oh, that's
All right, guys, this has been fun. I'm going to the men's room.
All right, you're
Bye,
good. Anyway, thank you all for listening to the History Things podcast. This has been the Battle of Little Bighorn, a look at Custer's last stand. If you want to catch up with the History Things podcast, do so on our social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Simply search for the History Things podcast. 5-star ratings and reviews. They kick ass. They help our show. Keep doing them. We love it. Check out Addressing Gettysburg. Check out the Battle of Gettysburg podcast. For our guest today, Jim Hessler, who's literally bugged out of here to go hit the facilities for our fourth. Good. Our 4th chair today, our very good friend returning to the studio, Matt Callery, for Parker Russell, the co-host. I'm Pat McGuire. This has been the History Things podcast saying we will catch you all later!
Keep your stick on the ice.